The night was very turbulent. A thunderstorm was raging over the city, and lightning bolts were striking directly into the roofs of multi-story buildings. But that wasn't the only disturbing event. There was a car speeding down the road. It was clearly trying to get away from the pursuer who was keeping up. The mother hugged her child tightly, wanting to protect her from everything in the world. She realized that the people from the Ning family were chasing after them. Her husband couldn't understand why these scoundrels were after them. After all, he had already given up the fight for the inheritance. Apparently, that wasn't enough for those who decided to stop the car with shots through the windshield. To avoid a sharp collision with these madmen, the man began to hit the brakes, except they were damaged and the car wouldn't stop. On top of that, the doors also stopped functioning and wouldn't open. The parents realized that the only option to save their child was to throw him out of the car, which could kill him faster than their enemies. At the last, the father shouted to his son Ningbei that he absolutely had to survive. The car then drove off the bridge at full throttle and flew straight down into the water, leaving no chance of survival for those inside. 13 years have passed since those tragic events. Ningbei had become a fully grown young man who knew what he wanted to accomplish. He had returned to Dragon City to settle matters from 13 years ago and hold those who had robbed him of his closest people accountable. A loud shout nearby distracted the boy from contemplating the beauty of the approaching city. A beautiful girl approached her companion, young Mr. Liang, and informed him that her shoes, from a limited collection, had been ruined. She said they were soiled by an elderly man who said in a trembling voice that he was willing to pay. Liang muttered that the rascal shouldn't even come near him, then added that his girlfriend's shoes were worth so much that the old man couldn't even dream of. Turning to his guard, the gentleman told him to throw this old man off to feed the fish. The fact that some rich kid thought he could play with other people's lives really angered Ningbei. The guy approached these men and said that as long as he was aboard the liner, no one would lay a finger on this elderly gentleman. Frowning, Liang asked what kind of daredevil had decided to stand in his way, for it seemed he had yet to hear who owned this entire city. Ningbei irritably asked if the scoundrel knew who the old man he was about to throw overboard was. This question elicited snide chuckles from the gentleman and his date. It was noticeable that they had absolutely no interest in who was standing in front of them. Despite their apparent disinterest, our hero reported that the man was a veteran of the city's fire department, and the scars on his face were marks of his fame. The old man had defended the city from fire and saved countless people, and some scumbag decided that he could humiliate him. In Ningbei's opinion, people like Liang should have been exterminated. Hearing these words, the rich guy said that no one in Dragon City would dare to lay a finger on him, because he was from the Liang family. But these words did not make our hero retreat. On the contrary, he came close to the impertinent boy, and he began to retreat uncertainly. Noticing that the scoundrel was starting to get very nervous, Ningbei leaned even closer to him and asked in a threatening tone if the Liang family was really that influential. Without waiting for an answer, he grabbed the rogue by the collar of his shirt and lifted him into the air. The guy then effortlessly threw his opponent to the floor, enjoying the sight of the creep being unable to come to his senses. Walking over to where he was lying, Ningbei said that he could happily demonstrate what true strength was. At last, the liner docked, and the passengers could go out into the city. The young gentleman from the Liang family was led out by his guards, as he was so beaten that he could barely stand on his own, but he had the strength to shout threats. To Ningbei, these words were only empty words, for such rich sons were no real threat to him. Such guys could only swing their fists when they were surrounded by guards. In such moments, they immediately gained courage. Liang only fell silent when the footsteps of approaching soldiers were heard. Our hero thought with a smile that now this rich scoundrel would finally realize that he was not the only one who had some influence. Warriors approached the liner, their uniforms displaying a red sword emblem. Mr. Liang had no idea what they were doing here. His companion told him to behave with more restraint. After all, judging by the crest, the blades of the King of the North were in front of him. An elite squad of warriors lined up just before descending from the liner, saluting whoever came down to meet them. Raising their swords, the soldiers shouted in unison as the northern squad welcomed their commander. Going downstairs, Ningbei stated that he was an ordinary person without rank or title, so he could just be addressed by his first name. Lowering his head, the squad leader stated that they could not address the commander simply by his first name, for it violated their cardinal rules. As he approached the guy, Ningbei said that he didn't expect to see Mu Cheng among those who would greet him at all. The guy asked how his commander's journey was. This is the time to tell the story of a rich boy who thinks too much of himself and declares that no one in the Dragon City will dare to touch him. When the armed soldiers turned toward the upstart in a friendly manner, he immediately started making excuses and saying that there had been a misunderstanding. Mu Cheng sternly looked at this rascal and muttered that he was willing to happily continue this misunderstanding. Turning away, Ningben clarified that the others had nothing to do with it. Only Liang Yu, who had already begged for mercy, should have been punished. Of course, all these requests for help were ignored, because it's time to pay the bills and take responsibility for your actions. Meanwhile, a young girl indignantly informed her grandmother that they had been waiting for half an hour and still no one had come. The young mistress was shocked that her so-called fiancé was making her wait so long, unable to stand it. She told her grandmother that she was leaving immediately. She didn't bat an eye at her granddaughter's manipulations, but when she really started to leave, the old woman said that if she took another step, she would have to learn to live with broken legs. A couple minutes later, a young man came running up to them, informing them that the long-awaited groom was on his way. At last, Ningbei himself appeared on the horizon, accompanied by the northern squad. Upon noticing him, grandmother immediately ordered Qin He to stand in her seat and behave as befitting a young mistress. A man stood in the squad's way and said that Mu Cheng had crossed the border when he met the commander. Forgetting the ban, he believed that violators should be punished. Grandmother explained that in front of them was a central blade named Zhang Zhongquan, who was accosting his ward Mu Cheng, the northern tiger. But the situation was defused by Ningbei, who said that he was very happy to see Zhongquan since it had been many years since they last met. Bowing to the guy, the man said that as the commander of central China, he was pleased to welcome his northern counterpart. He also added that all 5 great commanders were willing to serve him. Ningbei reminded him that these honors were for naught, for they were equals. After that, the young man shifted his interested gaze to the old woman, beside whom stood a beautiful girl. Kneeling before the old woman, our hero bowed. The old woman said he had grown a lot, but was incredibly thin for his imposing stature. Ningbei was incredibly happy to see his grandmother, as she was what connected him to the past, where his parents were still alive. Noticing the sad expression on the guy's face, the woman didn't let him wallow in all these emotions, so she quickly dragged him to the car that would bring them to her house. Before getting into the car, the hero gave instructions to the soldiers. Mu Cheng along with his group he sent to North China, but Zhongquan ordered to stay by his side. The 2 presentable cars set off, quickly traversing the bustling streets of Dragon City. In the limousine, the old lady sat across from Ningbei and remarked that 13 years had passed like a blink of an eye. Nodding his head, the boy reminded that if his grandmother had not protected him, he would never have grown up, because he simply died that terrible night. The old lady smiled sweetly, after which she touched the hand of the girl sitting next to her and said that her name was Su Qinghe. The young man knew very well who was in front of him, so he said that if the young mistress was against their wedding, she could take it easy and break the engagement. Qin He jumped up from her seat with joy. She couldn't believe that her fiancé was okay with it. But unfortunately, what was against it was her grandmother, who told her to calm down immediately. The upset girl reminded him that it was the 21st century, and she, as a medieval princess, wanted to marry someone to whom she had been engaged as a child. The old woman menacingly reminded that this engagement was arranged by Qingbihe's grandfather, so as long as she didn't die, no one would dare to cancel the wedding. When the guy said that his fiancée had her own head on her shoulders, the woman preferred to change the subject, so she asked if Ningbei had time to meet Central Blade and Northern Tiger. Grinning, our hero explained that he and Zhongquan were quite close, the man often sharpening and cleaning his sword. Hearing these words, it was hard for the girl to believe that the illustrious commander of Central China was cleaning anyone's weapons. Disregarding the incredulous looks Qin He threw at him, Ningbei said that if the girl was dear to his grandmother, he would protect her for the rest of her life. He then ordered Zhongquan to announce to the world on his behalf that the young lady was under his protection, so that if anything happened to her, the sword of the Northern King would fall on the culprit. While Granny was praising the young man, Qin He felt that he was being overly possessive towards her. When the limo finally pulled up to the house, the guards immediately came out to greet their mistress. Our hero was a very well-mannered young man, so of course he helped the old lady out of the car. The residents also came out of the house, who immediately recognized Ningbei and indignantly asked the woman why she had brought him here again. The man angrily said that everyone knew that that accident was more than just an accident, but the grandmother still saved the boy, which brought the anger of the 3 heads of the Ning family upon them. This aggressive gentleman said that she should immediately break off the engagement and get rid of Ningbei. All the residents of the house agreed with this decision. They were against this guy having anything to do with their family. Looking at all this, Qin He realized that she could barely tolerate all these snobs. But they were guests from far away, so it was necessary to be polite to them. The shouting only quieted down when Ningbei stepped forward and ordered everyone to be quiet. After that, the grandmother spoke up, saying that this guy was then her family, so as long as she was alive, no one could hurt him. Except that once again the old lady ignored the fact that her granddaughter was adamantly opposed to this marriage. Ningbei calmly said that if his bride-to-be was against the engagement, there was nothing wrong with it. In that case, he would treat her like a younger sister. In his opinion, if he broke off the engagement, it would be bad for the Su family's reputation. But if they wrote the rejection paper themselves, he would have no problem signing it. Such a noble gesture surprised the girl. She asked if such a situation would damage Ningbei's own reputation, but he only waved it away, saying that it was nothing. These words caused the man to make his facial expressions less hostile. He informed her that in that case, they would break off the engagement immediately. Zhongquan got tired of listening to this nonsense, so the warrior pulled out a blade and said that if they tried this, he would cut out their entire family. But Ningbei subdued his ardor and ordered him to watch his tongue. In turn, the lord haughtily asked what kind of bold upstart thought he could destroy his family. This question angered Zhongquan. He proudly said his name and added that he was the commander of Central China, so it was within his power to destroy some rich family. At this moment, the northern squad appeared. Commander Mu Chung immediately declared that he too was willing to join in the destruction of this family. After these threats, the commander of the south, Guo Baifeng, stepped forward and said that he could answer Ningbei's abusers in the same way and help destroy their kind. He was supported by the commander of the west, Lu Gui, who was ready to join his comrade. The four men were extremely hostile, so it was quite dangerous to argue with them. Our hero realized that he was now facing 4 of the 5 commanders, and they were all on his side. Guo Baifeng and Lu Gui warmly greeted the returning King Ningbei. The visit of such important and high-ranking guests extremely agitated and stressed the head of the family. Looking at the man's concerned face, the Northern Tiger grinned and asked if anyone really thought that they couldn't handle taking down some high-born snobs. While the head of the family remained stunned silent, his younger relative declared that no one would be able to harm them in any way. It sounded so arrogant that Granny wanted to knock him with her cane. Ningbei was barely able to stop her. The woman said that as long as the guy was by her side, she didn't worry about anything, except that she was really annoyed by the boys in the Su family who didn't realize what they were doing. Ningbei was in agreement with her, so he nodded to Zhongquan, hinting for him to point these scum to their place. There was no need to repeat it a second time. Central Blade immediately declared a Level A alert. The message was delivered to the right place, and some action was taken. Upon hearing the commander's alert notices, everyone in the office was on their feet. The stern-faced woman declared that the fighters in 72 locations should go on alert. She also contacted Zhongquan to confirm the order, reminding him that if it hit the common people, the Dragon Guard would be alert. Except that Ningbei thought that 72 points was overkill. In his opinion, 1 point might as well be enough. Sighing, the man informed his office employee that he was rescinding the previous order, as only one group would suffice. Despite her own dissatisfaction, the woman said the assignment would be honored. One of the staff asked who the kid was that the commander listened to, because he seemed to have a lot of respect for him. Sitting down in the chair, she reported that it was an ordinary person whose name was Ningbei, but everyone knew very well that such a person could not be called ordinary or mediocre, for this was someone who was nicknamed the King of the North, or the God of War. The employee had heard of the man but knew little about him, for his case was on the 9th floor and was closed even to her. Meanwhile, Su's family members did not know how to react to all these statements by the 4 so-called commanders. The boldest or stupidest of them stated that he could see no action. There was only chatter, so one could assume they were just hired actors in front of them. The premise made the guy laugh so hard that he started waving his phone around and saying he'd hire a couple actors for this production too. But when he glanced at his smartphone, he froze for a moment at what he saw there. More precisely, what he didn't see, the signal. It was completely absent from everyone from the Su family. Just recently, everything was fine with the connection. It made people think that such a phenomenon had something to do with the guy standing in front of them. Suddenly, everyone turned around and noticed a squad of dragon guards heading towards the house, stating that they were having an operation here, so outsiders should disperse. They came here to arrest the Su family. That was the only explanation that was announced. These words created quite a furor, for the once brave men now did not know what to do or where to run. Ningbei calmed his grandmother down, saying that nothing bad would happen. These snobs would only be taught a lesson. To cheer up the old lady a bit, the guy said that today his plans included a visit to Ning's family. But my grandmother's reaction was just the opposite. She frowned even more and mouthed that all of this happened 13 years ago. Now the guy was also extremely annoyed to report that no matter how many years passed, that fateful night that changed his life forever would never be erased from his memory. After saying that, he smiled again, and after saying goodbye to his grandmother and Chin, he said that he had to go. Lastly, the elderly woman said words that turned Ningbei's world upside down. According to her, the kid's mother didn't die that very night. Hearing this phrase, our hero froze on the spot. He thought that he was too cruel and unsuccessful joke, because it simply could not be. But the old lady went on to share details, saying his mom works as a professor at the university. Ningbei couldn't find any words to answer anything, for he couldn't believe that the closest person had abandoned him for a whole 13 years and made him mourn his death. Meanwhile, it was a normal school day at the University of Dragon City. The students were sitting in a lecture and not listening too closely to the lecturer, who was in a wheelchair. Against the background of tired students, who could barely keep themselves awake, one boy stood out sharply, who came later than the others and stood near the door, looking at the professor. It only took one look for the young man to realize that his mother was really his mother, who was alive, though not very healthy. He decided not to give away his presence right away, so he sat down at one of the workstations and tried to blend in with all the other guys who were discussing the best way to skip a couple. Only the students realized that they couldn't just leave, because the teacher was very strict, and they could leave the classroom only by writing a note and explaining the reason for leaving. The student said he couldn't understand why such a beautiful woman was straining herself working at the university, because in his opinion, she could be earning with her body. Unable to endure such phrases, Ningbei abruptly interrupted this disgusting speech and ordered the boy to treat the professor more respectfully. Smirking, the creep said he was merely thinking of alternative income options for pretty women. These words became the last straw for our hero. He abruptly stood up from his seat, grabbed this talkative scumbag and slammed his face right against the table. The lad then raised his head and met his gaze with his mother, whom he had until that moment thought dead. The woman was shocked. She immediately realized that standing in front of her was her son, who should be in a safe place. But no, he was back in the city that once tried to kill him. Looking at her all-grown-up son was so strange, especially considering the moment that Mistress hadn't expected to see him at all. There were passions going on inside the university that could never have been thought of outside the building. But soon the mother said the whole family needed to reunite, so she asked her son to take her to the yard where his father worked. Seeing Ningbei, the man couldn't believe his eyes. He immediately remembered the little boy who was thrown out of the car to save. Now before him stood a grown and stately boy who could withstand all the difficulties of life. Embracing his son, the father realized that now everything would fall into place. After a second, the joy was replaced by anxiety. The man began to ask why the boy had returned to the city, for it was still unsafe here. Ningbei urged his parents not to worry about him, for he planned to use the Northern King blade to get justice. Of course, the father and mother doubted their son's venture, however, he clearly wasn't going to give it up. So the family decided to head home. However, they were stopped by the loud screams of a girl who was pointing out to her father who had beaten up her boyfriend. The man obviously held not the last position in the university, because he asked in a commanding tone how the guy dared to beat up his student right in the classroom. Bei's father stepped forward to defend his son to the vice principal, but the vice principal demanded that the boy be taught discipline. The deputy recalled how members of the Ning family were on their knees in front of him, begging for work so that he could kick them out at any time. The words about his parents kneeling hurt Bei, but his father asked him not to dwell on it. After all, it was a member of the Ning family in front of them. The boy now knew that the man in front of him was one of the dogs of his rotten family. Hearing the man continue to pour dirt on his parents, Ningbei angrily ordered him to kneel down. After saying that, he swung his hand and released a wave of powerful energy that struck directly at the deputy. She staggered to his feet, making them shake in pain. Unable to bear the painful sensations, the gentleman fell to his knees. His daughter asked in horror what he was doing. Ningbei no longer honored these people with a glance. He decided that he would make them pay for all the hardships and insults his parents had suffered over these many years. The pain from the broken legs was so intense that the man's body reacted with a kind of shameful reaction. Meanwhile, our hero's family has arrived in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Dragon City. His mom asked her husband to go grocery shopping because she wanted to make dinner for her son. They stopped at the bottom of some basement, and the father said, as if nothing had happened, that he would carry the mother downstairs, and the boy had to take care of the stroller. Bei was shocked by these living conditions. He could not believe that his parents, who were very influential people, lived in such conditions. Noticing the young man's gaze, his father said that aside from the high humidity, their dwelling was quite normal. Ignoring those words, the guy immediately called out to Zhongquan. As soon as that one came up, he was ordered to send men to pick up the stuff and move it out of here. His mother began to object and convinced her son that they were used to the place, and it was not worth moving them. But Bei heard nothing. All he could think about was that exactly 13 years ago, on that rainy day, they had been driven to a dead end that had led to such unfortunate consequences. Taking his mother's stroller, he declared that when he returned to the capital, he would kill 3 people, the first being Ning Fukuo. At this point, it was announced that the commander of East China had joined them. He reported that the sword of the Northern King was in his hand. Smiling warmly at Bei, He jokingly asked him to keep the sword for a few more days, as he needed more time to admire such a weapon. Smirking back, the guy asked to stop talking nonsense and give the sword to him. The commander of East China handed the gun over to its rightful owner without further ado. Feeling the heaviness of the metal in his hands felt good. Holding the sword in his hands, Bei felt more confident and secure. Turning to the warriors who surrounded him, the boy asked them to move some distance away, for he wanted to be alone with his parents. The commanders knew that once the sword of the King of the North leaves its sheath, no one can stop it. So they were inclined to think that Bei's assailants were the real villains. Still, Zhongquan knew a bit more, for he told them that their opponents were the Ning family. They weren't too dangerous, but that was no reason to be lenient. It was the evening of the patriarch's birthday celebration. The president of the financial corporation, Yuan Shen, presented a golden Buddha as a gift. It was reported that Mr. Liang was giving a 100-year-old ginseng and 16 jade bracelets, but after a few minutes, all the cheers were cut short, for something extremely outrageous had happened. The sound of a funeral procession was heard, and soon a coffin was brought in, and the guests were frightened, for they considered it a very bad sign. At the head of the procession was the commander of East China, who said the iron bell and the old coffin were gifts from an old acquaintance. After these words, the bell was struck. The sound was so piercing and loud that the people standing nearby cringed. The commander ordered his companions, who were walking near the coffin, to start crying loudly. All the guests knew that giving a bell to a living person meant wishing them dead, so it made sense that these guys wanted to cause trouble. One of the men stepped forward and asked in a serious voice if the guys had any grudge against the Ning family. But the Eastern commander only smiled and mouthed that no offense was out of the question. After all, this was his first time in Dragon City. In addition, he added that it was quite difficult to find such a large bell in the northern frontier. But it was not for nothing that this city was the capital of 8 dynasties, for relics abounded here. The mention of the northern border hinted at some details for the guests. They remembered those who had previously been part of their circles, Ning Changlin and Qing Honglan. There was speculation that their offspring were in front of them. The guests were quite right, because the idea of this ingenious gift belonged to Ning Bei. Coming here with their mother, they really wanted to wish a long life to their second great-uncle. Upon hearing the name of the boy who had managed to survive 13 years ago, everyone began to whisper, for there were rumors that someone had tried to kill him. One of the men stepped forward and asked if his elder brother's family had returned, after which he turned to Mrs. Honglin, saying that her chair looked shabby, so it was worth replacing. Her husband, Nin Canlin, Gruyo said he would sort out his wife's needs on his own. One of the guests defiantly said that the family should go back to where they came from, as they were no longer considered part of high society, but he was told to watch his language. The Ning family member smiled too good-naturedly and invited the relatives to go inside to talk. He didn't think it was a good idea to pull family skeletons out of closets in public, so it was better to finish off these upstarts without being seen. As our hero's family approached the entrance to the premises, the guests followed them like hungry predators just waiting for an opportunity to pounce. Such people were eager to do harm, which is why they took every opportunity to do harm, even if it was a harmless tripe. Ning Bei held his father down and didn't let him fall. He made a note in his head that all the people who were friends of his relatives deserved to be punished. The scoundrel who knocked Canlin to the ground was his brother, who came closer and started saying that today was the patriarch's birthday, which meant we should kneel down. Our hero did not fall for such provocations, so he asked his father not to delay, because they had to get there in time to become the protagonists of the event. The commander of East China stepped forward and expressed his desire to take care of the rabble himself. After these words, he drew his swords and was determined to teach manners to these ignoramuses. A few seconds later, the commander's blades stabbed into the legs of the upstart from the Ning family. They stuck just above his knee and prevented him from moving. This was a unique technique of the northern border. This caught the attention of the eldest family member. He said in surprise that Bei was going too far, but that was putting it mildly, for the lad had only just begun his conversation with his enemies. Now the man asked, without hiding his fear, what the young man wanted to finish. After thinking for a bit, Bei asked what they thought about completely exterminating the Ning family. Meanwhile, it started raining heavily, so most of the guests were forced to go inside the building. The patriarch, who had his name day, thanked all those who came to congratulate him on this day. The idyll lasted until the front doors were abruptly opened by 2 commanders to let the special guests inside. The family of our hero entered the spacious hall. The boy wished his grandfather a long life, but here his look spoke of a completely different wish. When the birthday boy realized who was standing before him, he nearly dropped the glass from his hands. Then he quickly regained his composure and said that he was very pleased to receive congratulations from such a gifted and brave young man. Another relative began to approach Bei. who remarked that he did not know the rules of etiquette at all, since he did not kneel before the patriarch during the congratulations. Such speeches greatly angered the Eastern commander, and he asked who the talkative man thought he was. The blonde-haired man said that his name was Liang Xiaolong, and he was known by every passerby in Dragon City. No one addressed him without respect. But the commander replied that he had never heard of such a man, so he had no reason to respect him. One of the guests whispered that the man before them was a worthless insect. After that, he called out to Xiao Yunshan, who immediately approached. His stern expression did not bode well. Noticing squad leader Xiao, the birthday boy immediately tensed up. People who had nothing to worry about would hardly behave like this. So far, retribution had passed him by, for Xiao's attention was on that rascal who had called the Eastern commander an insect. The man thought that this insolent man should be chopped into small pieces and fed to the dogs. Rolling his eyes, he was approached by Zhongquan, who asked his colleague to stop making things worse. All the more, in his opinion, such a reprisal will not help in any way. A much better lesson would be the deprivation of all property, including subsidiaries. Xiao Yunshan bowed to the central blade and declared that he would fulfill his assignment. The blonde was less fortunate, for he had been punched in the face and now could not even hope to escape. Mrs. Qing Honglang didn't like that there was so much violence involved, so she reminded her son of what he had promised her. Guy immediately ordered his companions to stop playing these games and get down to serious business. Looking at all this, the patriarch had no way of understanding where his enemies came from. He assumed that they had bribed squad leader Xiao to be on their side. The head of the family recalled that Commander Xiao's organization had never interfered in their internal affairs, so he was curious about what had changed today. Ning Bei's patience was running out, and he offered to settle the family matter amongst themselves, so he asked everyone extra to leave the building. The guests were so frightened that they didn't want to be involved in this showdown, so they hurriedly began to leave the room. Grinning, the old man said that it probably wasn't cheap to bribe the squad leader, but now he was gone, and there was no one to protect the guy. These words caused the Eastern commander to smile, for this elderly man had clearly underestimated them since he thought they were nothing. The head of the house really only saw in front of him a foolish youth, who could easily be thrown out the door, which is exactly what he asked one of his grandsons to do. Looking at Kanggu, the old man said that he never imagined that the Ning family would have their own primary-level master. Madame Qing Honglang became uneasy and turned to her son, asking him to be careful. After all, this Kanggu was extremely intimidating, and was clearly going to do anything to wipe them out. But as soon as Ningbei activated his abilities, the man froze in place, and in confusion he tried to figure out why he couldn't move. Meanwhile, the guy increased the pressure of his power on him and ordered him to kneel down immediately. His opponent collapsed to the floor and did as he was ordered without any objection. Everyone was so stunned by what they saw that they just couldn't understand what was going on, for Kanggu had never bowed his head to his opponent. But now the man was on his knees and realized with horror that he could feel a power on him that was on the level of a god of war. Of course, no one wanted to believe that Bei possessed that level of strength, because then he would be a force to be reckoned with, and no one wanted to do that. Except our hero wasn't going to ask these people what they wanted. He let his power spread through the hall and bring those he so wanted to destroy to their knees. Now these scoundrels were where they belonged, at the feet of the boy they had never been able to kill. The Eastern commander said that Bei had gotten to the northern border when he was only 8 years old, and had reached the warrior rank in 1 month. So a Ning family fighter couldn't compare to him. This information was a real blow to the patriarch, who now finally realized that the young man in front of him could be a serious problem. Meanwhile, the commander continued. According to him, Bei reached the level of war god when he was 17, at which time he was granted the title of King of the North. But he preferred to be called an ordinary man. Mrs. Honglan could only imagine how much suffering her son had endured during his long years on the northern frontier. Smiling warmly, the boy began to reassure his mom that he was perfectly fine. Stepping forward, Bei recalled that on that rainy night 13 years ago, his grandfather had been murdered by the current patriarch right here in this room. And his fourth uncle Ning Konghai stabbed him right in the heart, just for helping him escape and thus keeping him alive. All this he saw with his own eyes, and despite the fact that the guy was small then, all these events were perfectly imprinted in his memory. His grandfather protected him until his last breath. His uncle treated him like his own son. So now Bei won't be able to let go of his hatred until he gets his revenge. The patriarch now realized that his years of unpunished rule were over, and now he would have to pay for his sins. All he asked for was mercy. But mercy was out of the question, after all. Ning Kanggu had tried to kill his entire family, so he might as well not even try to ask for mercy. Taking the sword out of its sheath, the boy added that if the Su family's grandmother hadn't helped him escape, he would have been dead at the hands of his enemies long ago. So it was quite obvious to our hero that there were no innocents in the Ning family. Each of them had a hand in his parents' downfall. Instead of using the blade, Bei threw it to the floor, the blade stuck in the parquet. As the patriarch looked at the deadly steel, he saw his terrified expression. He now realized that karma had caught up with him. Not wanting to say goodbye to his life, the man rushed towards the sword, hoping to find some weapon that could protect him. But when he touched the handle, the old man realized that he could not reach it, because it was as if it had grown into the ground. The guy watched these futile attempts to lift the sword, not hiding a smile. He informed that the sword of the King of the North weighed 360 kilograms, so there was no way to lift it. Ningbei himself effortlessly grabbed his weapon, swung it, and did what he had dreamed of doing for so long, bleeding the one who had ruined his life. When it became clear that the patriarch was finished, one of the older men of the family declared that he would fight the young man to the death. But before he could finish this sentence, our hero had already pierced him with his sword, leaving no chance of escape. Looking at the corpses of those he hated with all his heart, Bei whispered softly that his grandfather and uncle could now rest in peace. Ning family members were so scared that they couldn't utter a single word. They hoped that at least their lives wouldn't be taken away. As he approached Ning Cheng, the young man muttered that he would kneel here for the rest of his life to experience his father's humiliation and his mother's pain. After that, he turned to his father and informed him that from now on, all of the Ning family's property belonged to him, as he was originally supposed to be the head of the family. The parents were amazed and could not say a word. The son informed them that he wished to visit the grave of his fourth uncle. He asked them to wait for him here. Stepping outside, the boy noticed that the weather was exactly the same as it had been 13 years ago, but now everything was different. Now he wasn't the victim. A few minutes later, a car pulled up to the house and honked at Bei. The commander of the West, Lu Gui, stepped forward and inquired who had come to see them. Without saying a word, a man got out of the car and opened the door in front of the old man. The elderly gentleman said that he wanted to see the young man who had been abandoned by the Ning family 13 years ago. He wanted to see how strong he had become since he dared to do such a thing. More people began to emerge from the car and surrounded Bei and his company. Taking out his sword, Lu Gui stepped forward and declared that he would have no problem clearing the way for the Northern King. But the Southern commander Guo Baifeng calmed him down, saying that he should not bear his sword in Dragon City, for there were no foreign invaders here as there were on the northern border. The boys determined that another vehicle belonged to someone in the Su family. Soon, Grandma Su came out of it, accompanied by Qin He, who was carefully holding an umbrella over her. The man accompanying the old man said that they had no need to fear this old lady. After all, the Su family had long been in decline anyway, but his opinion was not shared. The elderly woman smiled caustically and asked if Mr. Liang had come here to wish the patriarch of the Ning family happiness. The old man replied sharply that he would never congratulate someone who killed his own older brother. Pointing his finger at Bei, he said the kid had injured his oldest grandson, so he wanted the so-called patriarch to answer for it. There was a young guy sitting by the car, with a bright red mark on his cheek. He said he was hit by the commander of East China. Laughing, the warrior asked if they really wanted to hold Ning Fukuo accountable, since he was dead, and thus unlikely to be a valid interlocutor for someone who was not proficient in necromancy. This news came as a real shock to the old man. He couldn't believe that Fukuo had died right on the day he turned 80. Grandma Su entered the conversation and said that she could settle the matter with Mr. Liang's grandson, and the latter could go home to avoid getting wet in the rain. The old man was silent. He wanted to figure out what was going on. After all, Lady Su had sent him home for a reason. He also really wanted to know where that kid from the Ning family who looked like he had caused all this chaos came from. There was only one solution in the man's mind. It was to get away from the epicenter of the future hurricane as soon as possible. The son who accompanied his patriarch ranted with indignation that striking Shaolin had struck each of them, so it was impossible to forgive them for such an action. Coming a little closer, Lady Su urged Mr. Liang to be prudent. She reminded him that his family had saved up their fortune for over a century, so there was no need to do something that could ruin everything. Liang didn't want anyone to give him advice, so he thanked the old lady for her worries. However, he still wanted punishment for the one who attacked his grandson. Ningbei stepped forward and stated that the person they were looking for was his younger brother, whom he had no intention of giving away. In such a case, Patriarch Liang was willing to deploy certain resources to get his way. He decided to send Liang Feidao, who could change the minds of these boys with brute physical force, to negotiate. Seeing this man, Qin He was very scared for Bei. After all, the fourth strongest fighter in front of them was among the best from the city. The grandmother advised her granddaughter to worry less, because her fiancé had promised to protect her, and he would certainly keep his word. Grinning at the girl, our hero informed her that today he would show her the difference in levels between martial artists. Based on his words, first came the disciples, who were not much different from ordinary people, followed by the primary level fighters. Now they already possessed considerable strength. And then there were the ranks of warrior, general, and finally god of war. After activating his power, Bei revealed that the hallmark of the god of war was a powerful aura that could suppress an entire army. It was with this power that he planned to protect those he cared about. These words became more than just a promise to Qin He, as she felt that her attitude towards this guy was getting warmer and warmer. Of course, our hero didn't forget to mention that there were over 100 gods of war under his command on the northern frontier. Now, Liang Feidao was really scared, because he knew that all these words were not thrown to the wind. He was facing a serious enemy, so there was no turning back. There were differences among the gods of war. For example, Ning Bei, at the moment, was the strongest warrior in the northern border garrison. There was a reason why he was called a king. One wave of his hand could make his enemies flee without a backward glance, just to avoid his wrath. Now his force hit his opponent right in the chest and made him fly back a few meters. So now he was lying next to his family members and could barely move. They were just in shock, because before no one could defeat their main fighter so easily. But this guy was able to make Feidao cough up blood without even touching him with a finger. Hearing the commotion, Ning Conlin came out of the house, saying with a smirk that if he had known about his uncle Liang's visit, he would have greeted him properly. The old man was amazed at who he saw. He couldn't believe that the man had returned to the Ning family and was now the patriarch. Meanwhile, Canlin talked about how his son wasn't too familiar with the rules of etiquette, so he wanted to remedy the situation and invite the guests to the main hall. These words reassured Mr. Liang a bit. He snidely remarked that at least someone in the Ning family still had manners. After saying that, the old man, accompanied by his son and the guards, headed for the front door. Upon entering the main hall, the first thing that alerted the Liang family members was the huge number of armed people. They were uncomfortable with the fact that they had absolutely no idea what the Ning family was up to. When they reached the middle of the hall, they noticed that none other than Kang Gu was kneeling in the center. He didn't even try to move as if he had accepted his shameful fate. No one said anything, but it was noticeable that the men were unaccustomed to seeing Kanga in this position, for he was the one who ran everything in this house. But now things had changed. Even a strong martial artist was able to bring those who had ruled for years on end to their knees and shed the blood of those who had ruled for years on end. Old man Liang now realized that he had made a mistake when he didn't listen to Lady Su, for it was obvious that there was a big change in the Ning dynasty. The evening was getting more and more busy, so Ning Bei suggested that Nana move to a more comfortable and honorable seat. Mr. Liang was very stressed that he wasn't given any attention at all and had to sit at an ordinary chair like a mere guest. Meanwhile, the old lady took a more presentable seat and ordered her granddaughter to find Aunt Qing. Trying to figure out what was going on, Old Man Liang asked Canlin if he had really decided to return to his family after so many years of absence. Lady Su added with a smile that he didn't just return, but became the new head of the Ning family and the chief patriarch. Such a change was too sudden, and for a second the elderly gentleman was speechless. Ning Canlin shyly muttered that he didn't have any special talents, so he hoped that the elders supported him. Without waiting for a reply, the man introduced his eldest son, Ning Bei. Smiling awkwardly, the elderly gentleman said that he was glad to meet a worthy young man. Wanting to provoke this flatterer, old Lady Su reminded him that there were also plenty of promising young men in the younger generation of his family. Coughing, Liang tensely muttered that they were all a disgrace to the family when compared to young Bei. All this news had to be thought over alone, so the old man got up from his seat and expressed his desire to go home, for it was already very late. No one stopped him or prevented him from leaving the building. The man and his escort calmly walked out of the house. As they walked down the street, the old man didn't stop talking, for he was sure that very soon, Dragon City would change, because the discarded son of the Ning family had returned. Ning Bei followed Liang out. His father excitedly asked his son where he was going at such a late hour. He promised to return soon. He wanted to visit the graves. Soon the guy arrived at the cemetery, and when he approached Ning Kanan's grave, he discovered that someone had stolen his ashes. Bei's anger was unbounded. He was incredibly angry at the realization that his loved ones were not given peace of mind even after death. He decided that an investigation should be made now to find out where the ashes of the deceased had gone, and who had committed such a hideous crime. Zhang Quan and his companions decided to talk to the cemetery caretaker. Perhaps his cameras had picked up something suspicious. The worker was startled by the unexpected night visit. Central Blade revealed that the two graves in the northeastern part of the cemetery had been emptied. Someone had taken away the ashes of Ning Kangnan and Ning Kanshan. The employee's panic increased, and he practically said hysterically that he didn't know anything. The reaction was strange. It seemed who did a pretty good job and intimidated him. Zhang Kuang had neither the time nor the desire to deal with this, so he too decided to use the intimidation method. Ostentatiously pulling out a blade from its sheath, he asked for a better thought. Falling to his knees, the caretaker began to beg not to be killed. He immediately remembered that the criminals who stole the ashes were a young couple who had been here 7 years ago. Having at least some information was already a good thing, but Central Blade decided to push harder to get more information. This caused the poor man to cry. He didn't want to get involved in this sordid story. But those people paid him over 100,000 for his silence. The intimidation method was replaced with encouragement. Throwing a bank card in front of the employee, Zhongquan promised that he would get the same amount if he told the truth. Meanwhile, Ningbei stood beside the empty grave and mentally vowed to take revenge on the culprits for not being able to leave even the dead members of the Ning family alone. When Central Blade finally approached him, he asked if the man had been able to figure out what had happened. Holding out sheets of paper to him, Mr. Zhang told him that 7 years ago, a young couple had taken ashes from these graves. The watchman remembered these people, so he had no problem giving a description of them. Turning his head, our hero ordered that an artist be found who could paint portraits based on this description. When these criminals were found, he ordered that they not be spared. The guy also asked him to tell Mu Cheng to use his influence in North China, so they would be able to reach their goal faster. His companions were all ready to spring into action. They wanted to find the culprits as soon as possible, and punish them as they deserved. Despite the late hour and the bad weather, the light in the Nin's house did not diminish. The new head of the family sat in the study trying to sort through important documents. Ning Canlin had never seen himself as a patriarch, and it was very difficult for him to handle the role now. Bei entered the room quietly. He said that his father should rest, for today had been too full and tiring. Noticing the accounting reports in his father's hands, he asked if there were any problems with the Ning family's finances. Canlin replied that it was much worse than one might think. After familiarizing himself with the documents, he found that the family business was doing extremely poorly. The company's shares were pledged and debts reached almost $1 million. But all this news didn't scare Bei in the least. He smiled and asked warmly for his father to let him deal with it. Their conversation was interrupted by the mother Qin he brought in. The woman felt that their son didn't need to take on all the family's problems. The guy brushed off these words, and wanting to change the subject asked why Qin he decided to stay. The girl smilingly replied that her grandmother asked her to talk to Auntie Qing Honglang, except that the mother did not allow her son to ignore his words, so she reiterated once again that he did not need to worry, because the current patriarch will deal with the financial issues himself. Ningbei now had to spell out more clearly that all of this was nothing that he would deal with rather quickly. Picking up the phone, he made a call, but was told that the president was already resting, so should call back tomorrow. Bei didn't stop that. He ordered the president to be woken up immediately, and told that he was being asked by the common man from the northern border, so he should call back immediately. Hearing her son's tone like that, Mrs. Honglang awkwardly said that he was asking for help in a rude way, but the father was more interested not in how, but with whom his son was socializing. So the man immediately asked who he was calling. Bei replied that it was just one acquaintance of his. To avoid further questioning, the young man said he would go to the kitchen, for he wanted to have something to eat before going to bed. Looking at Ningbei's behavior, Qin found it extremely outrageous. She didn't understand how one could be so spoiled. She was sure that after such rude requests, no one would want to help him. But the girl realized she was wrong as soon as she heard the phone ring. Everyone was extremely surprised that Bei got a call back. And not just any call, but a video call. When Canlin answered, he saw a kind-looking man looking at him with a smile on his face. Xin He immediately recognized this person, and it made her open her mouth in shock. In front of them was the richest man in the world, whose name was Qiao Shi. It was hard to believe that Ningbei had taken to calling the richest man so easily, calling him merely an acquaintance. Qiao Shi finally broke the silence and asked who he had the honor to talk to. Canlin immediately said that the call was made by his son Ningbei, who had now withdrawn, so he could call later. However, the man tensely said that he was completely free right now, so he could wait. Bei finally entered the room, a tray of fruit in his hands. His father immediately rushed him, saying that Mr. Chow was on the phone. The rich man called Bei by the title Your Majesty. The guy didn't blink an eye and asked him not to call him that, especially when he was at home. It was noticeable that Mr. Chow was very nervous, for he immediately began to make excuses and say that his phone was out of hand. Otherwise, he would have answered right away. But Bei wasn't annoyed about it. He reported that he was only calling to remind him of a favor the man owed him. As it turned out, 3 years ago, the guy had saved Mr. Chow and his entire family. So now he was ready to fulfill his every request. It was immediately clear to everyone why the rich man respected Ningbei so much. Smiling, our hero said he needed a certain amount of money. Turning to his father, he asked exactly how much money was needed to close all the debts. Canlin felt uneasy when he voiced that the Ning family owed 8 billion in principal debt, but there were also several short-term debts. But Qiangxi was not embarrassed at all when he heard the amount. He promised to give 10 billion, and added that it was not even close to what Bei had done for him. Then he said that if that money wasn't enough, he was willing to add as much more. When it was brought to the attention of everyone in the room that it was dollar currency, they were simply shocked, because the price tag was simply enormous. Canlin modestly said that if we talk about the price in dollars, they don't need more than 2 billion. So there's no need for the man to donate such a huge amount to them. Qiaoxi was extremely astonished when he heard these words, but he was even more surprised when he heard that as soon as the Ning family dealt with the hardship, he would immediately repay the debt. After thinking for a bit, Mr. Chow said that the family did not have to return anything to him, for he wished to make a gift. But the patriarch said that the amount was too large to accept as a gift. The conversation was finally over. Canlin admired how generous Qiaoxi was, but his son knew that the man was just a cunning businessman. But of course he didn't talk about it, because now that everyone was happy, he could finally go to bed. At last, the guy turned to Qinhe and clarified. If she really had a test tomorrow, the girl confusedly asked how he knew. Instead of answering, Bei sternly told the young lady to go to bed early, and he would give her a ride to the training facility tomorrow. Morning came, and our hero, of course, fulfilled his promise. He, like a real gentleman, picked up his lady and took her to the right place. The driver opened the door in front of the lady, and she smiled gratefully. Her friend immediately ran up to her and asked in surprise why she was in the Ning family's car. Then the stranger's gaze scrutinized Bei, who was sitting in the front seat. The shy girl looked away and asked her friend in a whisper what kind of handsome man had brought her in his car. Qinhe didn't know what to say, so her acquaintance assumed that it was the same Ning Bei she had been engaged to since she was a child. When the young lady answered nothing, her curious friend inquired what university Ning Bei himself was studying at. Our hero didn't really like to talk about himself, but this time he shared that he didn't attend a regular university, but he attended the Balian Military Academy. A passing student could not contain his surprise when he heard the name of this institution. The girls asked if he knew anything about it. The conversation was heard by another student, who said that it was a third-rate academy that was nothing. But his interlocutor was sure that all this was nonsense, because his brother studied there. Hearing this, the blonde only grinned and said with irony in his voice that his brother was the real hope of their village, so a prayer of thanks should be offered for getting him into the academy. Such disrespect was unjustified and extremely outrageous. So the graduate of that very academy, Balian, got out of the car. Everything about Ning Bei, from his gaze to his gait, said that he would not have a nice conversation with someone who dared to insult the institution that had raised him. Qinhe realized that this would not end well, for her so-called fiancé was once again picking a fight. Then she decided that it is necessary to prevent a conflict. Approaching the guy, the young lady asked if he was not late for home. Our hero immediately realized that he was being sent away. The blonde-haired student was unhappily watching the couple. He had been courting Qinhe for a long time, so he was not happy about the appearance of the so-called fiancé. Noticing Ning Bei's belligerent attitude, he approached him, introduced himself with the name Shi Zhengxiang, and said that he apologized for his words, as he had never heard of Bailiang Academy. The young man didn't answer anything. He didn't even extend his hand to greet his new acquaintance. He disrespected him. This behavior embarrassed the student, because he wanted to smooth the edges and not provoke a conflict, but his efforts were not appreciated. On the contrary, he was told with the utmost disrespect that all sorts of ignorant people need not know about the existence of a prestigious military academy. These words made Qinhe's friend very angry. After all, she was also that ignorant person who had no idea that such an academy existed. A boy who had a brother studying there told me that Balian was admitted at 16, and after 5 years of training they graduated as officers. Smiling wryly, Shi Zhengxiang asked what Bei's rank in the academy was. The latter replied that he was the most ordinary person. Satisfied with this answer, the blonde said that he thought his interlocutor would dare to pass himself off as a combat officer. But in fact, he was just a clown who was fooling everyone. These words didn't faze Qinhe. She told the guy that Ning Bei wasn't lying, and he definitely wouldn't fool someone like an ordinary student. Of course, Bei was very pleased that the girl thought so well of him. But he said that the words of such a petty rascal could not hurt him, so she should go to class, and he would pick her up in the evening. When she asked what the boy's plans were for today, he said with a smile that he would probably kill one of his enemies. Shi Zhengxiang thought it was a bad joke, so he called the guy a crazy fool. Oh, he didn't even realize how right he was. This was exactly what Bei became when people allowed themselves too much and acted like they were immortal. Noticing the change on the boy's face, Qinhe tried to distract him. and reminded him that he had promised Auntie Ching that he wouldn't fight anyone. Ning Bei remembered his promise perfectly well, but nevertheless, he kept a murderous gaze on that blonde man. When he decided to clarify whether the Shi family member in front of him was indeed a member of the Shi family, Zheng Xiang smiled broadly and muttered that it was best not to mess with his family. Letting the threat pass his ears, our hero ordered the arrogant fellow to tell Shi Kuanjia that he was expecting their family at 8 o'clock tonight at his house. This order seemed simply absurd to the blonde. He thought this boy was crazy if he really thought his older uncle would want to date him. Ning Bei was already on edge, so he didn't even try to hold back as his power surged out. One swing of his hand caused poor Shi Zhengxiang to end up on the ground. His shoulder, which had taken the brunt of the blow, began to ache terribly, so that he couldn't even get to his feet. Covering her face with the palm of her hand, He just wanted to see the fact that her fiancé had attacked the man again, even if the man was doing his best to get what he deserved. Before she could express her outrage at what had happened, the guy got into his car and quickly sped away. He headed home, or rather to a place that had been home years ago, but now seemed completely foreign. He was met there by his smiling mother, and then Bei thought that perhaps this place would become home to him again. The woman said she was very disturbed by the fact that their relative was kneeling in the middle of the house all night. He was Bei's uncle after all, and she felt it was time to let him go. But her son thought otherwise. This man had tried to kill them, so he didn't want this rascal to get off too easy. After that, he revealed that he had already chosen the person he would kill next. That person was Qing Fengye. Looking at his mother's surprised face, the boy moved closer and asked defiantly if she would try to stop him. The car raced down the road as fast as the memories of that terrible night flashed through my mind. In front of Ning Bei's eyes was the crying face of a mother who was banging on the closed doors with all her might and begging for her child to be saved. Even the toddler realized that her actions would not lead to the desired result, so he tried to stop her. Her companions were saying that they should leave, for the enemies were very near, so they should stop begging these traitors to help them. But it was very difficult for Qing Honglang to accept that the people she considered her family, whose lineage she belonged to, didn't want to help her. She just couldn't bring herself to leave, so her husband's brother had to pick her up and lead her to the car. The moment they turned their backs to the front door, it opened abruptly. One would have thought that someone from the Qing family had taken pity and wanted to help, but that wasn't the case. Some scoundrel had stabbed the defenseless Ning Kangnan right in the back. His brother had expected anything but such a mean blow that was fatal to the man. The vile relative of his wife was not at all sorry for what he had done. On the contrary, he seemed to revel in the cruelty he had done. All of this happened in front of Ning Bei's eyes and put the deepest mark in his memory. He wanted revenge, and now had the power to take it, so that his uncle's soul would finally find peace. His car pulled up to the very gate his mother had desperately knocked on 13 years ago, but instead of help, they received another blow. Seeing the Ning family's car, the guards immediately started hustling to open the door as soon as possible. Bei thought that they had better do it that very night. Inside him, everything was boiling with anger, but he tried to restrain himself because revenge is a dish that is served cold. A quick kill would hardly satisfy him, but keeping himself under control was incredibly difficult, especially when the memory of that rainy night caught up with him, the red doors of his grandfather's house remaining tightly shut. In the back seat sat his parents. You could see how hard it was for them to keep their cool. His mom almost cried when she mentioned Cannon being killed right there. Now the Ning family's car was being welcomed with open arms, except now Bei and his parents didn't need that hospitality. They needed retribution. When no one got out of the car for too long, one of the men moved closer and invited the guests to come inside. The tinted glass rolled down, and Bei indicated that he was waiting for the head of the house to personally open the door for him. Neither the butler nor the other servants recognized the fellow who sat behind the wheel. In their opinion, he was too young to require such special treatment. The gentleman was extremely embarrassed because he had no idea who was in front of him, so he was willing to open the doors in front of his guests. Ning Bei's parents' gazes were directed towards someone who seemed to be beginning to realize who had stopped by to visit them. One of the Qing brothers couldn't believe that after so many years, he was seeing a sister in front of him who shouldn't have survived. Qing Honglang was not happy to meet her second brother who had committed a terrible betrayal and had absolutely no regrets. The man said he no longer considered himself her brother, as she had long since ceased to be part of their family. If only a second ago they were trying to be polite to them. Now the masks were removed, and the scum ordered the unwanted guests to be thrown out immediately. Ning Bei got out of the car and asked why the dear relatives were in such a hurry to drive them away. Was it out of intense guilt? These words didn't hurt the man in the slightest, who reminded him that the Qing family was one of the 7 richest in Dragon City, so they never regret what they commit. These words didn't faze Ning Changlin, who said that his wife's relatives would now take back their words. After saying this, he handed Brother Honglan a folder of documents and ordered him to immediately read what was written there. Without waiting for the creep to come to his senses, the man took his wife's stroller and said they would wait inside. Taking a quick glance at the document, Qing Tenshin was shocked by what he managed to read. He was approached by his worried sister-in-law who asked what was written in that mysterious paper. The second brother informed him that it was their contract with the Ning conglomerate. The head of the house couldn't understand where these people got their contract from and why they were traveling around the city in the Ning family's car. But instead of answers, they heard a demand to read the document to the end and sign to break the contract. The words said caused a wave of indignation. Qin Tenshin boldly said that their family had put a lot of effort into this matter, so no one would dare to break this contract. He pointed to this document and almost shouted that all of the Ning family's resources had been invested in this cooperation. The second brother stated that Canlin and his family had no authority to break the contract. Now was the long-awaited moment when the man could announce that he was the new head of the Ning conglomerate, which gave him all the necessary powers. His wife's brother stated with absolute certainty that the patriarch of the Ning family was Kanhai, who would in no way cede his place to Canlin. He immediately reached for the phone and said he would make a phone call that would help him figure things out. Ning Bei didn't stop him and talk about how there was no way to reach Kanhai. He let his uncle come to the right conclusion on his own. Of course, no one answered the call, because being dead it was simply impossible to do so. So Tenshin decided to call Ning Fugi. No one answered, so it was decided to call Ning Kang. Maybe at least he could explain what was going on. Finally, after several long beeps, the call was answered. Tenshin immediately began to question Kanggu about what had happened at Ning's house. The man's voice was weak. The words could barely be made out. Listening to the story of Ning Bei invading the patriarch's house as he celebrated his birthday, Mr. Qing's eyes grew wider and wider with surprise. It was hard to believe that the culprit behind all this chaos was Ning Bei, the same boy who had failed to kill 13 years ago. But what was more frightening was the warning of a strong and fearless warrior like Kanggu, who spoke with a note of panic in his voice about not provoking this guy. It was incomprehensible to Tenshin what could scare one of the 10 strongest fighters of Dragon City. Ning Kanglin's patience was beginning to run out. He demanded that the head of the Qing family sign the documents to break off cooperation. To be honest, the men were at a complete loss. They didn't know what to do or how to act. The older brother's wife decided to take a gentler and more cunning course of action. So she approached Honglan and reminded her that they were family, so she should ask her husband not to doom them to bankruptcy. Except that Bei's mother hadn't forgotten all the pain her so-called family had caused her, so it was too late to push pity. Ning Canlin recalled that when he and Honglang married, he used all the resources of the Ning family to raise the Qing dynasty from a small company to one of the 7 great families. Now he was determined to take back all that he had once lent to these rotten people who had abandoned him in his time of need. While the 2 brothers stood listening to these words in utter confusion, a third brother approached them and ordered them to sign the document. This was the same Qing Fenhe, the person who had brutally and despicably killed Kangnan, and now he was the first on Bei's list. The man said that the Ning family was not in a good position themselves. They had invested more than 10 billion in the new neighborhood and suffered huge losses. Cannon's killer believed that this family was under a lot of pressure, and without their support, they simply wouldn't be able to stand. According to Fenghe, the new neighborhood was soaking up money like a swamp, so it would be better if they went out of business, except that the redeemed belonged to them, which meant guests could rest. These words did not surprise Canlin in the least, who said that everything that belongs to the Qing family is accounted for in this document. Finally, the third brother took a closer look at the paper he had in his hands, and after reading it, he could barely utter a word. Coming to his senses, the man shouted that the Ning family were the real exploiters. Nodding his head, Canlin mouthed that they were, and they had come to punish their enemies. One of the brothers said they had invested more than 6 billion in the business, but the profits from these 2 small projects barely reached 2 billion. But Fenghe insisted that his brothers sign the contract and did so immediately. He believed that the Liang family could become a worthy shareholder when all 3 projects were completed, which would be enough to pay off the bank loan. After hearing these arguments, the brothers began to agree to sign the document, and they did so, hoping that their family would not be at a loss afterward. While the Qing brothers were standing over the document, Canlin received a call from Chao Shi. He was confused and didn't know what to do, until his son with a chuckle prompted him to answer. Upon hearing this name, the Qing men couldn't believe that the richest man was calling. They thought that Canlin simply couldn't be familiar with such people. But they were wrong. Mr. Nin received a call from a well-known businessman who politely asked if he was distracting the man from important business. Bei's father replied that he was completely free. He was interested in what Mr. Chao's business was. Rich smiled broadly and said that the council had made a unanimous decision in favor of investing in the Ning family. This news came as a real surprise to the new patriarch. He thought his family would just be helped to get back on their feet, but they had high hopes. Xiaoxi notified that his company was willing to invest $10 billion at 10% equity in the Ning conglomerate. If this news was joyous for the Ning family, the Qing men were simply shocked and could barely string a few words together from shock. Canlin couldn't believe that someone was capable of such generosity. It was truly a gift from heaven, sent for all the suffering his family had endured. However, Ning Bei intervened in the conversation and sternly said that 10% was too much. Noticing the King of the North in the phone booth, everyone present in Xiaoxi's office rose from their seats and bowed respectfully to him. The Qing family couldn't understand what was going on and what the richest man in the world had to do with Canlin. Ning Bei's remark was heard, and Mr. Chao said that they would agree to 5%. In truth, even 1% would suit them. But the patriarch agreed to 5%, so the deal was done. Of course, Bei could have hammered out even more favorable terms, but his father was satisfied, which meant he was also satisfied with everything. Everyone in Chao's office was also happy. They didn't care about the stocks and money. The most important thing was that the company now had an official connection with the King of the North. When one of the brothers finally regained the power of speech, he asked if the insolents thought they could defeat the Qing dynasty. Money did not solve everything. There were still martial artists. Grinning, Bei reminded him that Qing Fenghe was just such a master. Turning to his parents, he asked them to take a little walk around the estate grounds. They didn't really want to leave, for they knew that a nasty act of violence might be about to happen. Yes, it was. But Ning Bei was sure that teaching his enemies a lesson was necessary, so the guy activated his power and a strong wind swept through the room. Feeling the powerful energy, the Qing brothers began to huddle together in fear. They didn't expect that a young guy could wield such power. She brought them to their knees and kept them off their feet. All the men could do was try to keep their heads straight. The brothers were simply terrified, for they realized that the martial artist in front of them was a martial artist. The guy realized that it was beginning to dawn on his enemies who stood before them. Now he couldn't hold back a smug smile. Qing Tenshin finally realized and understood why Konggu was saying that this young man should not be provoked. After all, he was indeed strong and powerful. With his help, the Ning family could reach unprecedented heights. Feeling the effects of someone else's power was something new and unpleasant for Feng He, so he decided that he should deal with such a dangerous opponent as soon as possible. As the boy turned away, his uncle drew his sword and decided to attack from the back. He liked to kill people when they least expected it. He was already swinging, and could imagine the deadly steel taking the life of this insolent boy who thought he was someone important. However, he was unable to strike, because his body froze at the exact moment when the sword should have touched his opponent's body. Turning his head, our hero said that he wouldn't let Feng He kill him with the same method he used to kill his uncle. Bei was disgusted to even look at someone who was willing to kill a person so dishonorably just to do a worthless favor for the Ning family. The lad's face was completely impassive the moment he let his power spill out and take the life of someone who didn't deserve the privilege of walking this earth. Thus, the retribution that had been pending for 13 years was finally accomplished. The vile murderer was finished so quickly that he didn't even have time to say his last words. After that, our hero decided that for today the communication with relatives is enough, so he turned around and went away from this house. Even when the guy had already left the manor, his uncles were shivering, because they had finally realized that they were dealing with the very god of war from the northern garrison. When the Ning family finally arrived home, they were greeted by the butler who informed them that Su Qinghong had arrived. Bei's parents warmly greeted their guest, who smilingly announced that he had a gift for Auntie Qing. Honglan was very pleased, though she said that gifts were not necessary, for the lad was no stranger to them at all. Noticing the stare directed at Ning Bei, the parents guessed that the guys needed to talk. So they decided to leave them alone for the boys to discuss the issues that were important to them. Bai, like a true hospitable host, invited his guest to sit down. He wondered if the Su family had any problems. Making himself comfortable, Su Qinghong said that although his family wasn't as strong as before, they could deal with their problems on their own. These words pleased our hero, because they made him realize that in front of him sits a strong man who was used to rely solely on his own strength. The guest was sure that the Ning family was going through dark times, so he offered them 300 million on the condition that the engagement with Qin He would be broken off. To prove his words, he held out a bank card to Ning Bei that contained these funds. Bei took the card in his hand and immediately snapped it in half, then told his guest it was time to go home. Qinghong was extremely displeased. He tried to convince the guy, saying that he had spent his whole life in the northern garrison and didn't even know what his so-called fiancée liked. After listening attentively to this fiery speech, the lad did not deny anything. He only asked why turn the engagement into a real bidding. This question confused the representative of the Su family. He did not understand what was wrong. After all, this marriage was originally a marriage of convenience. The young man had no time to reply, for their conversation was interrupted by the butler, who informed him that someone was looking for him. He allowed the unexpected guest to enter, and soon the clatter of a woman's heels was heard. He was approached by a beautiful woman who bowed courteously and said that she was pleased to welcome the King of the North to Dragon City. Hearing this address, Ching Hong was extremely surprised, for he had no idea that Bei was such an important person. The woman introduced herself by the name Mu Shi and said she was the president of the Asian branch of a company owned by Qiao Shi. She received a message from the head of the company that they needed to transfer $10 billion to the Ning conglomerate. This information couldn't settle in Chin Hong's mind, after all. He was completely convinced that the Ning family was almost bankrupt, and here such details were appearing. It seemed that all these sums were mere trifles to Bei, for he asked the butler in a casual tone of voice to conduct this lady to her father for the further signing of the contract. Catching the perplexed look of his guest, the fellow said that he was not interested in money, for if he needed it, many would gladly give anything at his first request. After that, he reminded that the wedding with Qin, he was organized by his father's generation. So, if the Su family had anything to say, let it be his grandmother's. Such an imperious and demanding tone put Ching Hong in a stupor, for he had not expected to see such a wise and confident young man in front of him. Ningbei had been speculating all day about why the Su family was willing to pay a huge amount of money just to break the engagement. They were clearly up to something. These thoughts were put aside as soon as one of the warriors entered the office to report something of great importance. Putting all business aside, Bai immediately asked if they had managed to find those who had stolen the ashes of his grandfather and fourth uncle. The warrior's face immediately changed and became extremely uncertain and tense, as he reported that the captain had sent him to say that they had not found the kidnappers. The anger inside our hero was so strong that it made him literally crush the glass beaker in his hands. It was obvious that the military man thought he was guilty, for he got down on one knee and continued to report that their men had found traces of fourth elder Ning. The news that the fourth uncle was alive was so startling to the boy that he slammed his hands on the table, causing it to crack deeply. The tense man reported that so far they had only found traces, but there were strong indications that the elder was still alive. Bei ordered to contact Luo City immediately. All their people should be engaged in the search for this man. He wanted to believe that his favorite uncle was alive and not killed by a cruel stab in the back. The Ning family's car quickly left the boundaries of Dragon City and raced towards Luo. Ningbei ordered the squad leader to go even faster, but then they might exceed the allowed speed. No matter how hard they tried to move faster, the traffic still managed to hold them up. This made Xiao Yunshan extremely angry, who was also anxious to know if fourth elder Ning was able to survive. A man whose car was stuck in the traffic jam near our heroes said that it was useless to get angry and honk, because he was stuck here for 2 or 3 hours every day. Of course, Ningbei didn't want to waste so much time, so he told him to send out a helicopter. Xiao Yunshan said that one was just nearby on a mission. The guy even promised to help them finish this task. The main thing was to get him in as soon as possible. Nodding his head, the squad leader said that he would immediately report this request to the right people. Not 15 minutes later, the helicopter had already arrived at its destination, much to the amazement of those languishing in traffic. People could not understand how and why the helicopter was here. They were extremely surprised and frightened. The squad, on the other hand, acted like they were picking up high-profile people out of traffic every day. Ningbei was satisfied when he saw the ladder being brought down. He couldn't wait to get to Luo to find out about his uncle. Ordinary people watched with open mouths as the strange guy flew away in a helicopter that took him right out of that cluster of cars. Flying over scenic areas, the helicopter quickly traveled great distances. Soon he landed in a small clearing that was clearly not designed for special landings. As soon as Bei got out of the helicopter, he immediately asked what the current situation was. The squad members didn't know what information to share, because they had no idea who they were facing. However, Xiao Yunshan's commanding voice that ordered them not to prevaricate quickly brought the guys to their senses. One of the guys reported that they arrived at the location to check out a missing persons report in the area and were attacked. The commander swept up that Kobayashi was already at primary level, which meant that an ordinary beast was incapable of injuring him. A second warrior entered the conversation and said that the beast was extremely ferocious. It was moving at about 10 meters per second. He assumed that the creature was at warrior level. Ningbei realized that it was too late to retreat since they were already being watched, so the commander ordered him to help the injured man while they dealt with everything in the meantime. Suddenly, our hero noticed in the bushes nearby some strange movement. It was so fleeting that at first he thought he was imagining it. But no, Kobayashi also noticed something strange and shouted that it was a beast. Just as quickly as it appeared, it disappeared, making the warriors look around in bewilderment. Now no one doubted that they were dealing with someone incredibly fast. Suddenly, a young lady appeared from somewhere and started cursing at the warriors and asking if all the fighters in Dragon City were so useless. Her brother standing nearby tried to calm her down. But the girl was convinced that the men standing in front of her were really weak since they couldn't handle the beast. Listening to such speeches was unpleasant to say the least, so Xiao Yunshan asked what kind of person was heaping accusations on them. One of his subordinates said that the lady's name was Liu Linger. She was the granddaughter of Liu Lao, a doctor from the Central Plains. The beast attacked when she was gathering medicinal herbs. Her brother was more diplomatic and non-confrontational, so he apologized for his sister and admitted that she could be too rude at times. These words were nothing until the girl herself recognized that she was wrong. For in saving her skin, one of the warriors she had accused of weakness had suffered. After carefully examining the lady, Ningbei noticed that her bag contained a century-old herb that could relieve pain. Abruptly covering the bag with her hand, Liu Linger rudely asked what they needed, for she had been searching for this plant for a very long time. Such impertinent behavior really displeased Bei, especially since everyone could see that the poor warrior had blood all over his bandage, so it was pretty obvious what they wanted from the mistress. But our hero realized that they wouldn't get much from such a person, so he ordered her to get out of here immediately. In his opinion, if she thought experienced fighters were useless, she was quite capable of leaving this place on her own. After saying that, Liu Linger immediately lost her courage and said that she had to be protected from the beast. The squad leader entered the conversation and reminded them that their mandate was to eliminate the beast, not to protect the young miss, for they were not personal guards. This attitude is extremely angry girl, who now also began to threaten that her grandfather will punish the scoundrels who left her to her fate. Xiao Yunshan couldn't stand it and said that Mr. Liu has been practicing medicine for many years, so having a descendant who spared an anesthetic herb for a sick person is a real shame to the family. By now, her brother was also starting to blame her for chasing them out of the clearing. But his sister still didn't see it as her fault. Although the girl was bold and rude, the squad leader was still worried that the granddaughter of such a famous doctor might have been hurt. Our hero answered nothing, for his power told him that very soon their space would be invaded by one who saw them as victims. As it happened, a huge predatory cat was quickly approaching Liu Linger and her brother, clearly satisfied that it had finally trapped its victims. The animal growled loudly, making it clear that her pretenders to a light snack were not getting out alive. Falling to the ground, Miss Liu began to quietly call out for help, hoping that the very same useless warriors would save her life. There was a powerful aura emanating from the wild cat that indicated a high level of ability. The girl felt it and was so scared that she couldn't even move. She only managed to scream. But that in no way stopped the cat from jumping, which could definitely cut off Liu Linger's life. Xiao Yunshan was now certain that they had made a mistake the moment they let the girl go on her own to reach the city. The animal was so close to the doctor's granddaughter that there was no hope of saving her. However, at the very last moment, something small that resembled a leaf from a tree flew into the beast's head. Suddenly, the huge cat rolled onto its side and didn't move anymore. The frightened girl began to crawl away from the scene. Her brother immediately ran over to her and began to lift her to her feet. Even from afar, one could see how unfortunate Linger was trembling. Turning his head, the squad leader saw that the neutralization of the beast was the work of Ningbei, who used the first leaf he could find as a weapon. The warriors also took notice and were shocked by the guy's skill. They decided that in front of them was a real god of war. The mission was accomplished, and our hero announced that Xiao Yunshan was going to Lua with him, and the rest could return to Dragon City. The squad members did not understand why this stranger was called the Commander of the North. After all, this was the first time they had seen him. But they knew very well that only one person could wear the gilded selenium robes. This was the one who had the authority to order all 5 commanders. They didn't get to question who was in front of them, because the mysterious guy got into a helicopter and flew away. While they were flying, Xiao Yunshan revealed that Ning Xiangnan was alive, after which he took the remote control and showed all the things they had found. In the footage, a man could be spotted who looked too much like one of Nin's sons. There could be no mistake. Ningbei was happy to know that Cannon was alive. The hope in him had turned into confidence, especially after he saw this footage. Meanwhile, the man was living his ordinary day, and did not even suspect that any of his relatives knew that he was alive. He went to the local market where he was greeted with a friendly welcome, and asked if his great candied hawthorn would be on sale again. His longtime acquaintance grudgingly said that if he needed money, he could accept her son's job offer. But Mr. Ning never showed up for the interview. This conversation was overheard by a lady who said that Ning Kangnan's health left much to be desired, so the esteemed Mrs. Zhao might not bother. Upon realizing, the woman said her husband asked her to give the family money to pay for their son's school fees, but Mr. Ning said they could not accept this money, for they had not yet had time to pay back what they had borrowed last time. Despite her excuses, Zhao still held out the envelope to them. Cannon's wife didn't know how to thank the generous woman, so she corrected her little daughter to tell her auntie thank you. However, the family's problems did not think to end. A gang of men were already moving in their direction, who clearly not friendly asked when the payment of the water bill was due. One of the employees of the establishment the bandits had come to gave his share of the payment, which brought a satisfied smile to the ringleader's face. But this man was evidently short of money, for he immediately asked Nina when he would pay his portion. The one replied to the man, whose name was Liang, that he couldn't raise the required amount so quickly. The man didn't like the answer very much, so he kicked Cannon's bicycle with his foot, so that it fell to the ground with a loud thud. All the candied hawthorn that Ning had wanted to sell was now lying on the paving stones. Picking up one stick of berries, Liang tapped Cannon on the head with it, and told him that he wouldn't lower taxes with his whining. Daughter Nina couldn't stand the fact that her daddy was being humiliated, so she ran up to the thug and shoved him hard, shouting that no one would hurt her daddy. Luo roughly pushed the girl away, so little Guoguo fell to the ground and hit her knees hard. Her mother immediately started to calm her down, but the girl could not stop crying, not because she was hurt. The main reason for her hysterics was that her father was being hurt. At that moment, Cannon felt such an intense anger inside him that he wanted to destroy this scoundrel on the spot. As the bike was falling, an envelope of money fell out of the basket. The bandits noticed it and intended to take it away. Liang realized that his debtor wanted to stash the money, and this caused a new wave of anger in him. He began to threaten that he would tear the man into small pieces. Looking at his wife Qing, Cannon ordered her to take her daughter home immediately. Coming around him from different directions, the bandits smirked and asked if their debtor had decided to put up a fight. Without answering anything, Ning snapped the man's arm so fast that he didn't even have time to react and block the blow. The injured ringleader began to whimper like a child due to his arm hurting badly. A strong energy was building up around Cannon when he said that people could attack him, because he deserved it after failing to protect his brother's family. The man literally flashed like a torch as he spoke of how those who dared to offend his wife and daughter would be dead. The bandits did not take these words seriously, so they said that their debtor must shut his mouth, or death would knock exactly at his door. They made a huge mistake when they underestimated their opponent, and now they had to pay for it. It wasn't difficult for Ning Kangnan to land heavy blows on each of his opponents, so now they were knocked out and were helplessly falling backward, trying to avoid trouble. When the men realized that Ning was not going to back down, they turned around and started running away, saying lastly that they would not forgive such treatment. But Cannon didn't care, especially after he coughed up blood violently. He was helped to stay on his feet by a man who was working nearby. Noticing the condition her husband was in, Qing and her daughter immediately ran over to him. Nina was getting worse, and his friend said that an ambulance would be necessary. At this moment, two warriors dressed in black suits appeared on the street. People recognized them as squad members. Upon noticing them, the man fearfully told his wife to get Guoguo, and they would run as far away as possible. Mrs. Zhao said that it's all nonsense, because if they deal with bad people, they can report to the police. But Cannon confidently said that the police cannot always help. He ordered everyone to go home, because this time they are not dealing with bandits, but with real killers. Trying to stay on his feet, Mr. Ning boldly approached the warriors and said that Fukuo had done a good job this time, and even involved the Special Operations Department. The guys in uniform did not react to these words in any way. They only asked if the person in front of them was really Ning Kangnan. Nodding his head, the man revealed that he had been in hiding for years, but now apparently he had been found to kill. But instead of attacking, the squad boys greeted the fourth elder of the Ning family. This made Cannon open his mouth in surprise. He had absolutely no idea what was going on, or why he was being treated with such respect. The squad members explained that the commander had given orders to find the lost fourth uncle, who was thought to be dead. You could see how Cannon felt calmer after those words, relief enveloping him as he recognized that it wasn't Fukuo's servants who stood before him. Now that his body had finally relaxed, the man was overtaken by the effects of the injuries the bandits had inflicted on him, and he lost consciousness. Cannon was carried into the house and an ambulance was called, which arrived very quickly. The squad guys gathered the best doctors to examine the fourth elder of the Ning family. One of the medics stated that the patient's pulmonary arteries were damaged, and there was nothing they could do to help him. The warrior was so angered by such a response that he began to threaten the doctor, but his comrade asked him to stop immediately. Looking angrily at the squad guy, the doctor asked if he thought he didn't want to save a patient. Threats would not help a dying patient in any way. An elderly man entered the room and said that the young man should not be blamed for his anger, for the doctors were among those who pronounced death everywhere they went. Turning to his grandson, the gentleman asked him to get the silver games. Everyone froze as soon as Ningbei entered, his stern gaze directed towards the bed where his uncle lay. A warrior from the squad approached him and informed him that the fourth elder was now being examined by acupuncture master Dr. Liu. He asked that the patient be seated, for in that position, the examination would be more accurate. Closing his eyes, the healer concentrated on his energy, which helped him analyze the patient's condition. After that, he sharply touched Kangnan's forehead and seemed to transfer some of his healing energy to him, which was capable of curing his ailment. It seemed to everyone that the patient had fallen into a trance for a while. So strange and peaceful was his state. After coming to his senses, the first thing Cannon did was to thank Mr. Liu for saving him. But the healer said that it was too early to say thank you, as he couldn't do anything about the old wounds. Dr. Liu had set a fairly clear deadline of 3 days. He didn't think the patient would live longer after all. Even the higher powers would find it difficult to save his life. Ningbei entered the room, and all the warriors immediately greeted their commander. Recognition flashed across Cannon's face, and he hesitantly asked who stood before him. Smiling gently, the boy informed his fourth uncle that he was the one he had tried so desperately to save that terrible night. The man couldn't believe that in front of him really stood that little Bei, who was crying beside his mother, who was trying to reach out to relatives. They embraced, and the act seemed to erase all the horrors of the 13 years they hadn't seen each other. Ningbei said that they would discuss everything a little later, and right now, healing Uncle's wounds was the priority. These words annoyed Dr. Liu, who once again reiterated that it was impossible to heal the patient, except that needles could prolong life a little. With a disgruntled glance at the Lord, Bei muttered that he really wanted to see the legendary doctor's skills. But when he saw them, he realized there was nothing special about them. Poking his finger right into his uncle's chest, the guy said he could show him how to cure a sick person. Reaching for the needles with his hand, he took a couple pieces and walked resolutely over to Kannon. The young man reported that not even the king of the underworld could take away his loved one. The doctor's eyes widened in surprise when they realized that this guy could control the needles with chi energy. With such skills, he could become the best healer in the country. The needles lit up with blue flames and began to slowly approach the body of the terrified patient. One sweep of Bei's hands and they dug into his uncle's skin, who cried out at the sudden strength that filled his body. Seeing that the young man was using the 7 needles transparent gate technique, which helped to reverse the pulmonary arteries, the healer wondered what kind of master stood before him. Ningbei ordered his uncle to keep the needles out for 7 days. After that period of time, you can take them out and then everything will be fine. After that, the guy turned around and silently headed for the exit of the house. Noticing the cloak with the golden cylindr, Liu guessed that the King of the North himself was in front of him. When our hero went outside, Kanon's wife worriedly asked how her husband felt. The young man said that he was fine, just need a good rest. After that, Bei crouched down to be on the same level as little Guogo. He asked if she knew who he was. Her mom prompted that Ningbei's older brother Ningbei had come to visit. The girl was visibly surprised, for her daddy had told her that her brother had traveled very far away. She knew that was what they said about those who died. Stroking the little girl's cheek, Bei noticed a large abrasion on her face. He wondered where it came from. This question made the girl cry and tell about being hit by a bad bald uncle who had hurt her father too. Guogo's story was enough for the King of the North to order the squad leader to find this scoundrel and kill him. But the rascal had found himself. He and his whole gang were on their way to Kanon's house to take revenge on him for daring to hit him. Ignoring Bei, Liang pointed his finger at Ning Qing and muttered that she was their debtor's wife. Anger was gathering inside Bei and he wasn't going to stop it. Taking off his cloak, the guy stepped forward determinedly, intending to deal with these thugs. Without further ado, the lad drew his sword from its sheath and was ready to use it against his enemies. One swing and the arm of the main bandit fell to the ground before he could even squeak, and the limb was already severed. After examining the rest of the scum, our hero asked who wanted to repeat the fate of his friend. At first, none of the men answered, but when they came to their senses a little, they began to shout that they belonged to the Axe Gang. Xiao Yunshan punched the boldest of them and said that it made no difference to them which gang they belonged to, closing Guogo's view so as not to traumatize the child with violence. Bai told her mother that they shouldn't be here. Afterward, he asked the squad leader to maim those who had harmed his family. The warrior was only too happy to carry out this order, because he himself was eager to teach the scoundrels a lesson. While he dealt with the bandits, his subordinates escorted Ning Kongnan to Bei's car. Neighbors were watching all this. Some of them said that they guessed that Nina's family was not easy. They assumed that the man was hiding here from enemies. One of the squad members walked over to Mrs. Zhao and handed her an envelope, saying that inside was the amount of money they had borrowed from Ning Kongnan. The second warrior presented them with a suitcase containing what looked like bars of precious metals, a gift from the commander as a token of gratitude. The neighbors were happy for the woman, saying that good deeds are always rewarded. She had taken care of the Ning family for so long, and now it was not in vain. After a brief farewell, Bei took his relatives to a place they could now call home. Sitting in the car near her parents, Guogo kept throwing curious glances at Bei. Then she couldn't stand it and asked if he was really her brother. The guy smiled and nodded his head. Cannon finally revealed that when his chest was pierced with the sword, everyone thought he was dead. But little did they know that his heart had been shifted to the right since birth. Taking his wife by the hand, he shared that she had secretly saved him, and they had been hiding together ever since. For his sake, Qing had not contacted her family all this time. The woman just shrugged and said it wasn't worth bringing it up, because it was her personal choice. Ningbei recalled that as a child, fourth uncle was an idol to him, resolute and bright. Someone who suppressed enemies with his intelligence and strength. Laughing, the man muttered that it was so long ago that it wasn't worth remembering. However, he promised that once they got home, he would be the man he was before again. The car arrived at the mansion when it was already completely dark. At the gate stood an annoyed Qin He, who was clearly dissatisfied with something. As soon as Ningbei got out of the car, she immediately started talking about how he was a liar, because he never picked her up from the university, and she, by the way, waited for an hour and a half. The guy's face didn't express much remorse as he apologized, and said he'd completely forgotten to pick up the girl. Following Bei, Suqing got out of the car. She smiled uncertainly and asked if Qin He remembered her. Of course the girl recognized her aunt, whom she hadn't seen in a very long time. Ning Kenglin came out of the house, unable to believe that the fourth brother was actually standing in front of him. Ningbei was very happy to see his family reunited, even though it had been many years. Taking the woman's hand, Qin He pulled her into the house, saying that grandmother was also here, so they should see each other soon. When Suqing saw her mother, whom she hadn't spoken to in 13 years, she couldn't utter a word. Mrs. Su smiled warmly and cried. Hugging her daughter, she resented her for not contacting her for so long. Watching this reunion, there was so much warmth on the guys' hearts that they couldn't help but smile. Leaving the elders alone, they went for a walk. The guy apologized for forgetting to pick up Qin He. He was willing to fulfill any of her requests, but the girl said that he had nothing to apologize for. But still, she had one wish, though it could be considered meaningless. Smiling mysteriously, the young man said that Qin He could just say, and he would fulfill everything. In fact, the girl even had a few wishes. The first was that after today, her aunt and grandmother would live peacefully and know no worries. Nodding his head, the guy informed that while he was here, he would provide his loved ones with peace and protection. The second thing Qin He wished was that everything went smoothly with the financing of the Su family conglomerate and her elder brother could exhale peacefully. Frowning, Bei wondered if their conglomerate was funding something. The girl said it has been going on for 3 months, but according to her brother, the case is going very hard because of the harsh conditions. Then the young man suggested withdrawing money and teaming up with Ning family. But Qin He shook her head and said that it wasn't as simple as one might think. She didn't explain what this was about, instead changing the subject and announcing that she had a final third wish. She was heartily tempted to say that her wish was to keep the engagement, especially now that they had met. But she voiced something else entirely. The girl said she would love to see a guy who didn't go to a regular school go to a university and complete a 4-year curriculum. Ningbei recalled that a diploma from the Bailin Military Academy was valued much higher than an ordinary university diploma. Then the girl emphasized that she had never heard of it. So that begged the question, how would he look for a job if the companies didn't know about his academy? These words made our hero laugh out loud. Qin, he realized the absurdity of her statement after all. In front of her was Heir Ning, who doesn't need to refer to an educational institution. After stroking the girl's head, Ningbei said that she didn't have to worry, for he had promised to fulfill her every wish, especially since he wasn't at all opposed to getting a degree from a regular university. After a while, the house guards announced that the Schur family had arrived for a visit. The owner of the house came out and told the guests in a friendly manner that if he had known they would visit at such a late hour, he would have met them earlier. But Principal Shi was clearly hostile, for instead of greeting him, he started talking about how he didn't care who won their family struggle. He was only interested in the fact that one of Ning's family members was a criminal who harms others. Grandma Su came forward and asked what her son-in-law had done to offend the principal's family. The man ordered his son Zhenxiang to come closer to the old lady so that she could realize how badly Ningbei had injured him. Cannon intervened in the conversation and said with a smile that the guy's wounds weren't fatal, so there was nothing to worry about. At first, Master Shi wanted to be indignant, but when he realized that the fourth elder Ning was standing in front of him, he could only open his mouth in surprise. Looking at the confused man, Cannon could only smile widely and ask if the principal was doing well. She couldn't understand why this person was here. After all, everyone knew that he had died many years ago. He thought that there was something very strange going on in the Ning family. Anyway, the man recalled his son being brutally beaten, so until they get an explanation, they're not going anywhere. It was hard not to notice this gentleman's belligerent attitude, so Kang Nun sternly asked exactly what kind of explanation the man wanted. According to Shai, it was simple. Ning Bei should come out to them, get on his knees, and admit that he was wrong. Bei and Qin he entered the room. The girl was very indignant at Mr. Shi's request. After all, his son was the first to start throwing insults. With a stern look at her granddaughter, her grandmother ordered her not to interfere in the conversation of the elders. The woman felt that Ning Bei shouldn't maim everyone, so urged him to apologize to the kid. But the Shi family was not satisfied with a simple apology. They demanded that the culprit repent on his knees. Otherwise, the Ning family would have to face the consequences. Ning Bei disagreed with the decision and expressed his opinion on the fact that the grandmother was too partial to the Shi family. These words extremely angered Mr. Shai. He was disgusted that the young man was implying that they were being favored. The old lady asked Bei to show respect. After all, Shi's grandfather was her brother. As he came closer, our hero asked if he was really required to kneel down and apologize. When he was nodded affirmatively, he chuckled and muttered that in that case, the Shi family would never be able to accept his adoration. The phrase brought a smile to the face of the head of the family. The man mouthed that the boy could not worry, for they were ready to accept any consequences. For a second, everyone in the room thought that Ning Bei would actually kneel before these people. Grandma Su got up from her seat and yelled about how she didn't ask her son-in-law to kneel, so he should stop. An elderly man burst into the mansion, who also asked the guy not to do it. Zheng Xiang and his father jumped up and began to ask why their patriarch had come here. But instead of answering, the elderly gentleman slapped his son in the face and ordered him to kneel down. The one was puzzled. Pressing his palm to his cheek, he asked what was going on. But Patriarch Shi once again shouted the order to kneel, and this time it was impossible to disobey him. The man obeyed the order. Although he didn't understand why he would do so, Zheng Xiang couldn't believe his eyes. Getting down on one knee, the old man bowed his head and said that the Shi family of Dragon City welcomed Commander Ning. This action caused old lady Su to be shocked. She told her third brother that she would protect his family as long as she was in this house. But the men of the Shi family were silent as they were astonished that their grandfather had called this guy a commander. With a grin, Bai said that he had already mentioned that the dear guests wouldn't be able to take his adoration. Turning away from the kneeling men, our hero informed them that they had 10 seconds to disappear from his sight. Bowing once more, the old man thanked the lad for the mercy he had shown their family. Turning to his relatives, the patriarch ordered them to leave the Ning family's mansion immediately. Considering the heated situation, Grandma Su said she had to leave too. Her daughter Qing volunteered to escort the woman. The head of the house didn't understand what had just happened, so he asked his son why he had gotten involved with the Shi family in the first place. Looking at his father, the boy said that Zheng Xiang had provoked him himself. It seems he was chasing Qin He. This was what led to the small quarrel near the university. Ning Kunglang observed that his son had accomplished a lot in the 13 years he had spent on the northern frontier. Averting his gaze, the young man said that he was defending their country's border from invaders, so there was no question of rewards or honors. When morning came, Ning Bei decided to meditate for a while to restore his inner balance, but his peace was disturbed by Qin He, who accused him of being a liar. These words caused bewilderment inside the boy, for he had no idea what the question was about or what he had done wrong. Jumping to his feet, he listened to the disgruntled girl who wondered if he remembered what he had promised last night. With a wide smile, Bei said that of course he remembered her wish and would definitely keep his word. On leaving the house, our hero and his companion met Ning Canlin. They informed him that they would be stepping back for a while. His father said his mom was worried that Bei would have a hard time adjusting to society, since he had lived on a military base for many years. The boy was surprised to hear about his mother asking Qin He to accompany him to the university. His companion winked and said she thought the idea wasn't so bad. Ning Bei was very pleased that the girl didn't mind spending time with him. Upon arriving at the university building, one could notice many students walking leisurely to their pairs, chatting amongst themselves. After passing by them, Qin He said that they needed to visit the headmaster first, and only then could they figure out where to go next. Except that when they got to the principal's office, his secretary said that the gentleman was not in attendance, and the boys needed to sign in to meet him. The girl decided it wasn't worth complicating the process, as she could just call the person she needed. When she unlocked her phone, it could be seen that there was a picture of Ning Bei on the home screen. No doubt he noticed it, for a mysterious smile appeared on his face, but the lad said nothing. After locking her phone, Qin He embarrassedly asked where the guy's gaze was directed, but he only laughed without answering the question. The girl tried to call the principal for several minutes, but he never answered the phone. She assumed the old man had gotten drunk again. Her attention was drawn to the fact that the guy didn't react at all to her words. He stood silent and stared at the portrait that hung on the wall. For some reason, he was very interested in the image of the elderly man who ran the institution. Then he abruptly turned to the girl and held out his hand, hinting for her to give him her phone. He wanted to call Director Sun by himself. The guy didn't answer the question of how he knew the man. He silently called the secret line, which angered the number holder. Ningbei only said a few words, but his voice was immediately recognized and welcomed by the King of the North. Not wanting to waste time exchanging pleasantries, the guy immediately said that he was at Liang Academy and was very interested in where teacher Song Jen was. The person on the line replied that the man used to work there, but then he was fired because there were complaints that he was a bad lecturer and inferior to his colleagues. Without hesitating for a second, the young man ordered him to find Mr. Sun Jen and inform him to call him. His companion was completely puzzled. She asked in surprise if the guy had studied with Professors Kun Lin and Xu Yuan. Bei said that he had indeed attended their lectures. A delighted girl asked if the guy realized how incredible these teachers were. One was a dean of a medical school, and the other a nuclear physicist who won an honorary Gordon Bell Award. To which Bei said that the girl just still hadn't realized what kind of place the Balian Military Academy was. Not even a couple minutes later, the young men called back. Such a speed of response was simply amazing. It once again proved Bei's high status. It was Teacher Sun. Our hero politely asked the gentleman to come to his office, for he was right in front of the door. The headmaster finally remembered that he had informed him yesterday that a new student was to enter the university, but he had no idea that it was about the King of the North. The man was not at all embarrassed by the fact that he was at an important meeting. Dropping all business, he went straight to the office. A few minutes later, Mr. Sun was already outside his office and smiling welcomingly at the visitors. Opening the door in front of them, the principal invited the boys inside so they could discuss all the important matters. He introduced Ningbei and said that it was the exact student she was talking about. The director said that they knew each other, as they had the chance to meet 5 years ago. However, Ningbei wanted to introduce himself formally. He gave his name and added that he was the eldest son of the Ning family who was born in Dragon City. The fact that the guy was born in Dragon City surprised the principal, because Bei had never mentioned it while he was in the military academy. Qinhe intervened in the conversation and asked Mr. Sun to help them with the documents so that the admission procedure would go faster. But Song Jen abruptly said that enrollment was impossible. The girl anxiously asked what was wrong. It was like that. It was just that, in the principal's opinion, with Bei's education and talent to study here meant wasting time, he offered the guy to be an honorary dean. This proposal did not seem like a good idea to our hero, because he could not give a guarantee that he would come every day. Song Jin urged the guy not to refuse so immediately. After all, he hadn't even inquired about his salary yet. After saying that, the gentleman took out a big box. When he put it on the table, the guys were surprised to find a big stone in there. He assumed it was a diamond. But Bei said there was something more valuable in front of them, and it was a spirit stone. Taking it in his hands, the young man explained that the Tang Empire was created by martial arts masters. These stones were required for their development and training. The stones were very rare, but even so, the headmaster offered to give Bei one a month as payment for his work as dean. This suggestion surprised the young man, and he asked if the gentleman had so many spirit stones. Embarrassed, the old man said there was only one available right now, but he became convinced he could find more. But our hero was only willing to work for 3 stones a month and was unwilling to discuss another price. Strangely enough, Director Sun was happy about the news and immediately said that they had an agreement. After that, the man immediately left the office. He asked where he had gone, to which Bei shrugged his shoulders and replied that Sun must have immediately started searching for spirit stones. When the headmaster returned, his colleagues couldn't help themselves and followed him, for everyone wanted to get a glimpse of the King of the North. As they entered the office, they began to marvel at how young the man about whom so many rumors had been circulating was. Sun asked his colleague Li if he remembered the theory of anti-gravity published by Mr. Yang in an academic journal. Correcting his glasses, Li said that it was impossible to forget such a thing, because the article advanced anti-gravity research 10 years ahead, except that the man didn't understand what the question was about. Pointing his hand at Ningbei, the director stated that this amazing work was the work of the guy standing in front of them. The professors were amicably outraged, asking why Mr. Yang would want to steal someone else's accomplishments. But Ningbei clarified that it is not considered theft if the work was used with his permission. Now everyone was very interested in what the purpose of this article was then. Without a second's hesitation, Bei replied that he wanted to reveal the industrialization of anti-gravity in his work. These words confused everyone who heard them, because it was clear that the guy had a completely new view on the problematics of this topic. As the silence dragged on, Bei muttered that he didn't have much time to waste on idle chatter. He was about to leave when suddenly one of the professors asked him to stop and informed him that he too had a spirit stone. The mention of this mineral interested the guy and made him not leave so quickly, especially when the other men said they too had this special stone. Our hero was very surprised by the fact that all the teachers that stood in this room possessed spirit stones. One of them explained that 10 years ago Chung had explored Mount Bian, and there he had found such a stone, mistaking it for a diamond. But when he returned and investigated, he realized it was something else. So he just handed out pieces of the stone to them, and when Sun said the King of the North needed them, they gathered them up and brought them over. Now our hero became very curious about where exactly this amazing mineral was found. The men said amicably and with a tinge of sadness in their voices that only Chung knew about it. Bei asked if he could meet Professor Chung. He was informed that it was impossible. Director Songjun added that the man had long since died. The location of the huge stone was not known to anyone, making it extremely difficult to find. The principal said that the professors would have the opportunity to evaluate Mr. Ning as dean. He was willing to personally see to it, but his colleagues thought he was joking, because they believed that the article on anti-gravity alone allowed Mr. Nina to be considered an academic. One faculty member said that deans typically directed students and supervised large research projects. The team was sure that the guy should join them, because the main direction of their research is just the industrialization of anti-gravity. Examining the stone in his hand, the young man said that they would definitely discuss it all, but first he wanted to know more about the stone. He was told that Chung and Wang had found them on Mount Bian. They knew nothing else, and now the men were gone and they could not get information. After thinking for a bit, Bei asked how long these professors had been in the mountains. The director said they were there for about 10 days. The men didn't take much food with them, so they didn't expect to be there for a long time. It was obvious that 2 men couldn't have gotten far in 10 days and come back, so the search area was limited to 100 miles. Despite the unknown, Bei was very happy with the fact that the spirit stone dwelling was within a known radius. Walking out of the university, he asked where Ning Bei was going now. He replied that he was going home at once, for with these stones he could easily put his mother on her feet. At that moment, the girl thought disappointedly that trying to get Bei to go to university was a futile venture. Walking through the city, the guy noticed that a large number of people gathered in one place, which spoke of something extremely interesting. As he got closer, he noticed an overturned ambulance near where the victim was lying. Men were shouting nearby, one of them demanding that he be compensated for his car. But he was rudely told that he should not throw himself at others if he got behind the wheel while drunk. These words only irritated the scoundrel, who punched the man in the face and said that he was Du Hao, which meant he could do whatever he wanted. Hearing that the gentleman was from the Du family, people began to pivot back, realizing that they didn't want to provoke this person. A girl sitting next to the victim asked for someone to help her grandfather, because her brother had just returned from the northern border, where he had spent 10 years, and all he wanted was to see the old man. The young mistress with tears in her eyes began to beg the elderly man to hold on, for he too wanted to see his grandson more than anything else in the world. At that moment, Ning Bei emerged from the crowd and began to resolutely approach the scene. The first thing he did was to order that very Mr. Du to release the man immediately. Du Hao did as he was ordered, and when he realized it, he angrily asked how the guy dared to order him around. When Ning Bei turned around, the Lord thought that the rant had made him frightened and run away with his tail tucked. It gave him a foolish courage that spurred him to pull out his dagger to teach the impertinent boy a lesson. Mr. Du decided to attack from the back, believing that his opponent was weak and he wouldn't be able to repel the attack. However, Bei only needed one swing of his arm to disarm his clumsy foe who, for some reason, thought he was a strong warrior. His arm was injured from the impact, and the man began screaming all over the street about how much pain he was in. Walking up to one of the victims, Ning Bei felt his pulse and reported that it was useless to try to save this person. Afterward, he approached the injured old man and his granddaughter. Bei asked a question about her brother who served on the northern border. She confirmed that the brother had indeed served there, and afterward asked if the young man could help her grandfather. Leaning over the old man, Bei performed a small examination and concluded that his illness wasn't that dangerous, which meant it could be easily cured. The bewildered girl reported that 6 months ago, the doctors were surprised that the man was still alive at all. She thought his affairs were quite bad. At this moment, doctors began to run up to them, anxiously inquiring how Mr. Chow was feeling. The young girl rejoiced, for she saw her uncle Zhen, who was rushing to help. The doctor who ran up calmed the crying Yizhen down, telling her to take Mr. Chow to the hospital as soon as possible. But Ning Bei thought it was a very bad idea, because the patient was in a critical condition, which meant it was a very bad idea to transport him. The doctor didn't like his suggestions being questioned, so he asked who was standing in front of him. Instead of answering, Bai demanded that he be provided with silver needles immediately. Without hesitation, the man quickly retrieved them, and only then asked how the guy knew he had them. There was no need to answer that question, for the doctor fell silent as soon as he saw that Bai could operate these instruments with ease. Only a few seconds had passed and the needles had already been placed in all the right places on the elderly gentleman's body. We could only hope that it would help. All the healers were simply amazed at how deftly the guy controlled the needles with chi energy. But the old man still didn't open his eyes, and his body began to tremble, which didn't stop. That's when our hero realized that it was worth using the spiritual stone he got from director Sun Zhen. By putting his power into this item, Bai activated its healing effect, and that power began the healing process. Not a minute later, the male victim had already regained consciousness and opened his eyes. Ning Bai informed the gentleman that he had extended his life by a year, and if he took good care of his health, he could live another 3. When the guy with a sense of accomplishment was about to leave, the old man asked him to stop. Not only did the healed man want to talk to Bai, a representative of the Du family who had attacked him with a blade earlier was walking towards him. He demanded that the young man introduce himself. This arrogant and overconfident rich man has already bored our hero. So he swung his hand and put some of his power in there to deal with the creep without approaching him. Instead of getting answers to his questions, the cocky rascal was punched in the face and was now trying not to pass out while lying on the pavement. The people who were watching closely could not think that anyone would risk hitting a person like Mr. Du. The old man, who was held under the arms of his granddaughter, said that the lad need not worry about the consequences, for he would help settle everything. Holding out his business card to Bai, Grandpa said that if he had any problems in Dragon City, he could feel free to contact him. His granddaughter smiled broadly and sincerely thanked him for his help. Our hero said no thanks. He inquired the name of the girl's brother, the one who had served on the northern frontier. At the young mistress's words, his name was Qiao Dong. It was noticeable that she was very proud of her relative. This name was familiar to Ning Bai, because it belonged to the Eastern Wolf. The girl was surprised to ask if he knew his brother. The young man nodded affirmatively, saying that Qiao Dong was a true hero, for he leads Bai Liang's army of hundreds of thousands of elite warriors, and earned his nickname by performing many military feats. East Wolf's relatives were incredibly happy to hear such words. They became even prouder of him, for he truly deserved it. Interest took over, and Jen decided to ask what their new acquaintance's name was too. After giving his name, the boy added that if the family needed his help, they could find him in the Ning family. It was evident that these men were grateful both for saving their lives and for the guy kindly offering his help. The next day came, and a joyous event took place in the Ning family home. After 13 years, Mrs. Qing Honglong was finally able to overcome the effects of the injury and get back on her feet. Looking at the happy mother, whose eyes were burning again, as they had done many years ago, our hero realized that for the sake of such a thing, he would not spare 7 spiritual stones at all. Mu Si, the president of Chaoxi's Asian branch, entered the mansion. She congratulated the woman on her recovery. As it turned out, the employee came here to report that $10 billion had been transferred to the accounts of the Ning conglomerate. This news made the guy very happy. He asked Mu Si to go to Ning conglomerate and help his father organize an exploration subsidiary. Having received the order to explore Mount Bian first, the woman set out to fulfill it. What he heard alarmed his mother, who became very interested in why her son suddenly decided to go into geological exploration. But Ning Bai didn't bother to tell her his motives. He only mouthed cryptically that he was looking for something specific. Night had fallen, a time of rest and peace, except that for some it wasn't like that at all. Ning Bai's peace was shattered the moment he burst into his room, telling him to get dressed and follow her immediately. Tearing himself away from the magazine he was looking through, the guy asked if the girl really wanted them to go to Tang Yuxing's birthday party together. This question infuriated the girl, who didn't understand why Bai was still sitting still if she knew perfectly well that they needed to attend the event. Looking at the fact that the guy was in no hurry to pack, He walked closer to him and said in a pitiful voice that she really wanted him to keep her company. That gentle voice made Bai soften his tone a bit and calmly let it slip that he didn't like such noisy gatherings. Realizing that her tactics were not working, the girl decided to take a more effective route and call Auntie Qing. The mother on her feet approached the guys and said that if her son didn't go with his fiancée to the event, she would embarrass her, because she would have to explain his absence. Feeling the pressure of these 2 women dear to him, the guy suddenly realized that life was much easier in the border garrison. So he had nowhere to go. He had to put on a festive outfit and go wherever the bride would take him. The main thing was to remember to take care of safety. Watching the guy strapping on his weapon, He asked if this was really necessary. This made Ning Bai wonder if he was trying too hard. Perhaps he should try to relax. Anxious thoughts that he could so-and-so become part of the society of Dragon City made the boy leave the sword where it hung. He decided to give up the costume because he thought it was better to dress simpler and be himself, rather than trying to pretend to be someone else. When evening came, a presentable red car was speeding down the road to ensure its owners arrived at the event on time. All along the way, He only thought about the fact that fate had brought her together with a true stubborn man who only did as he decided. Finally, the car stopped near the entrance of Sanyang Entertainment Center, from where loud music was already blaring. People who danced in this place felt very relaxed and free. As soon as He's friend spotted her, she immediately waved her hand and started urging her to come over to her table. The girl grudgingly asked if they had started drinking without even waiting for her to arrive. Her friend laughed awkwardly and raised her glass. The guys sitting nearby immediately asked who it was that had come along with He. For this was the first time this stranger was in their company. The friend informed that it was her fiancé, who had been admonished since childhood. For some reason, these words caused a burst of laughter among the guys. They were laughing at the fact that someone still chose their children's groomsmen from childhood. Shinha was very embarrassed and uncomfortable. She irritably asked that the guys stop mocking her and her couple. The atmosphere was diffused by a good-natured guy named Tang Jiaoyun, who thanked Ningbei for taking the time, and he came to his little sister's party. Those words angered Yusun, who said it was obvious to everyone that she was the older one in their couple. Chuckling, He explained that the guys were twins, and Yuxing was born 10 minutes earlier than Jiaoyun. When Ningbei was offered some relaxation and a drink, he immediately declined, saying he was not allowed to do so. Jiaoyun didn't insist, saying that today one could forget about the prohibitions and just let themselves go, but if one didn't want to, they could not overstep their principles. But the other guys didn't support him, because they thought that if a guy doesn't drink, it means he doesn't respect the birthday girl and wants to spoil everyone's evening. The fact that his friends were pressuring the guest really displeased Jiaoyun, who grudgingly told them not to make a quarrel. In order not to provoke scandals, He announced that she would drink to the birthday girl's health instead of her fiancé. The guy really didn't like the idea, even though the girl said it was fine and she'd have no problem doing it. Friends of the party organizers began to scoff and say that Ningbei was a wimp if he really let his girlfriend drink instead. One of the guys called Ningbei just an abandoned child, a dog who was thrown out after his family died. With a clinking sound, Jiaoyun placed his glass on the table and ordered Mr. Shi to stop making trouble. After all, today was his sister's birthday, and he would finish off anyone who spoiled the party. The buildup was defused by Yusun, who said that they all needed to calm down and relax a bit. Ningbei took the glass from He's hands with a frown, causing the girl to question what he was doing. Relenting a bit, the guy said he had promised his grandmother that he would protect his fiancée, so he wouldn't let her drink in his place. While he tried to stop him, saying that Bei was forbidden to do so, he drank the contents of the glass in a volley. After that, he muttered that he would have had to break either the ban or the promise anyway. His choice fell on what was best for the girl. It made her smile dreamily, for the gesture spoke of Bei caring for her, which meant she had some feelings. Noticing that the guest had loosened his principle, Jiaoyun offered to make another exception and have a cocktail with him. Noticing that the guys were starting to get along and have a good time, the birthday girl approached her friend and beckoned her to the dance floor. Meanwhile, the guys were approached by a smiling guy who cheerfully asked why it was that he was not called to their company. Jiaoyun was very happy to see his third brother Yue. He didn't even realize that he would come to today's celebration. Taking advantage of the moment, the birthday girl's brother introduced Ningbei to Yue Feng, even though the latter had surely heard of the eldest son of the Ning family, who was once again reviving his influence. Nodding his head, the newcomer said that he had indeed heard a lot about the guy who had literally stirred up Dragon City with his presence. Looking at Yue Feng drinking glass after glass, our hero suggested that with his internal injuries, it was worth limiting his drinking. His new acquaintance was extremely surprised, asking if the guy had any medical skills. The fact that Yue Feng didn't deny his health problems made Jiaoyun extremely wary. So the third brother had to explain that he was part of the Special Operations Squad, and had once had a mishap. Once their captain invited a real demon who wielded immense strength to prepare them for real combat encounters, Yue Feng admitted that he couldn't even endure 10 blows. Surprised by this story, Jiaoyun asked if he had really reached the rank of a warrior. But Ningbei felt that if that was really the case, it would not be possible to get off so easily. These words made Yue Feng wonder if Bei was also proficient in martial arts. The guy blurted out that he was. His new acquaintance said that he never thought that he had mastered ancient martial arts. He was curious if the guy could determine his strength with just a glance. Ningbei was about to start analyzing the guy sitting across from him, but something more interesting caught his attention. There were many beautiful girls on the dance floor, but the brazen stranger decided to pick on He specifically. He persistently asked her to dance with him. The girl was trying to be polite, so she smiled sweetly and said she wouldn't accept the offer. This young man was clearly not used to getting rejected after all. The word no did not stop him, but only whetted his appetite. Now he was offering Chin He a drink with him. She refused, but her friend didn't mind having a drink with a handsome stranger, so she expressed her desire, which made Chin He very angry. A smile lit up the guy's face as he held out a drinking glass to his new acquaintance. Yu Qing took the glass without a second thought, but when it came to Chin He, she hesitated, for she couldn't decide if she should trust this person. Exhaling, she decided she needed to relax, so she reached out to take what was offered. But her fiancé prevented her from doing so. Ningbei snatched both girls from both of them, with a stern look at their new acquaintance. Of course, the ladies were outraged, because they considered this action a manifestation of excessive masculinity, and they believed that no one dares to decide anything for them. The guys also didn't understand why he suddenly started acting rather belligerent. Zhao Yun asked about the reason for this behavior. In response, Ningbei simply handed him the glasses and asked him to look at the contents himself. Without waiting for Zhao Yun to analyze, our hero slapped hard at the blonde man who was so eager to treat his fiancée and her friend. Meanwhile, Yuxin's twin was horrified to realize that the contents of the glasses had been spiked with something forbidden, something that could have a strong effect on the girls. A friend who came up to him said that the blonde must be sick of living if he allows himself such antics. Noticing that trouble was brewing on the dance floor, security guards immediately arrived, rudely pushing people around to get closer to the troublemakers. When they asked Zhao Yun, who was holding the bastard by the throat, what had happened, he ordered Du Yuan to be summoned immediately. The guy was cautiously asked who he was to demand this. The young man gave his name and emphasized that he came from the Tang family. This news didn't just surprise the guards, it made them open their mouths in surprise and take a few steps back. A smiling man emerged from the crowd and kindly inquired what had angered the young master from the Tang family. The outraged young man revealed that his sister had almost been drugged, and no one knows what might have happened to her if they hadn't checked her glass in time. President Du staggered upon hearing the news. The guards worriedly asked what was wrong with him, but the man assured that everything was perfectly fine. His gruff voice hinted that orders should be carried out immediately, so when he gave the order to drag the intruder into the street and break his legs, it was immediately carried out. After that, President Du turned to young Master Tan and asked if he would be satisfied with this resolution to the situation. Yuxin, who capriciously declared that she was tired of dancing and wanted to be in a separate room for karaoke, intervened in the conversation. Du promised to arrange it immediately. On the surface, President Du was very gracious. However, Ningbei found him suspicious. It was something on the level of intuition. The man didn't like Ningbei either, so he ordered his assistants to keep an eye on him. The woman behind him asked why not grab him at once. Turning his head around, the gentleman rudely told his assistant that she was very stupid if she thought provoking members of important families was a good idea. When everyone had already calmed down a bit after what had happened, the guys noticed that Ningbei was overly tense and as if he was on alert. They were not mistaken. Our hero was really worried, because he felt that someone was following them, and he informed his companions about it. It wasn't just them who heard this, but also the one who was directly involved in the surveillance. It was terrifying to realize that the assignment Du had given had failed. Except Zhao Yun doubted that anyone would dare to follow them. Bei said that the guy could relax. After all, the original target wasn't him at all. Deciding to change the topic, Yue Feng asked how his new one knew that the person who had injured him had not reached the rank of warrior. According to Bei, there were certain characteristics inherent in those who had reached this rank. They had comprehended how to put energy from the Dantian into their strikes. After this description, Yue Feng realized that if he received a blow from such a warrior, he would still be lying in a hospital bed. They were distracted from their conversation by Yusin, who said that they should stop the boring conversations and replace them with cheerful singing. Some of the guests started bullying Ningbei again, urging him to sing to show off in front of his fiancée because by refusing, he would be disrespecting the birthday girl. These guys were still convinced that they were the outcast of the Ning family, who just thought he was a big shot, but was in fact worse than an abandoned dog. Their mouths quickly slammed shut as they received a kick that caused them to shift to the edge of the couch. Zhao Yun asked why the guys were so fond of talking nonsense. He suggested that they should go away if they couldn't have a quiet time with them. One of the troublemakers was outraged at this suggestion. He couldn't believe that Zhao Yun was willing to quarrel with him over some scum. But the boy told this rich boy that he thought too much of himself, for by quarreling with him, he would lose nothing. Leaving, this conflicted guest said that they would still see who had more to lose. After all, Brother Yuxing was only a primary level fighter. Ningbei tried to ignore all these provocations and loud words against him, but when he was once again called an abandoned dog, he couldn't stand it. It took him a second to get close to the object of his hatred, and squeeze his throat so hard that the guy couldn't take a single breath. His strong aura was felt by all the people who were at the feast. They were surprised to find that Bei possessed the rank of warrior. Yue Fei came over and told Shi Jinyang, who had asked for trouble himself, that he didn't know anything about life because no one had contacted him before because of his family. Shin he could only watch with horror at what was happening. She didn't want her fiancé to be the initiator of the fight, but it seemed he couldn't do without it. Ningbei's hand continued to tightly squeeze the throat of the guy who never learned to keep his mouth shut. The girl begged him to let him go, for otherwise the poor fellow would die, and that death would be on Bei's conscience. But the guys on the contrary supported our hero and said that he taught this scoundrel, but his death should not overshadow the holiday. Shi Jinyang's friend started shouting that if a warrior like him dared to kill an ordinary person, the Special Operations Department of the Dragon Guard would immediately deal with him. These words caused Ningbei to turn around and ask why on earth he should fear the Special Operations Department. Realizing that his words didn't scare the guy in the slightest, Zhenyang's friend ran down the corridor, shouting about the warrior killing people. Jiao Yun tried to catch up with him, but in vain. The guys froze as a guard started walking towards them, who had clearly answered that loud call. Looking at him, Jiao Yun couldn't believe that someone actually wanted to interfere in this showdown. Yuofeng also couldn't believe that this rascal really managed to call the Dragon Guards. He asked Jiao Yun to calm Bei down and promised to solve the problem himself. Going out to meet the warrior, he began to ask him to make an exception, for he too was serving in the Dragon City garrison. But the guard didn't even look in his direction. He walked past and said that the Special Operations Department was working, so those who interfered would be killed on the spot. At that moment, Yuefeng realized that they were getting entangled in more serious trouble than they could have imagined. The guy was ready to face the consequences, so he rushed towards the military man, wanting to stop him. Payback was not long in coming. The Dragon City guard gave him a strong kick with his foot that knocked Yuefeng out all the air. This was noticed by Jiao Yun, who asked in a threatening voice how this scoundrel dared to hit his third brother. He was so angry that he began to move closer to this warrior, a desire for revenge burning in his eyes, which the guy planned to do immediately. The guard decided it was time to stop coddling these rich kids who thought they could have it all, so he drew his weapon. When he swung his sword, Jiao Yun tried to kick it away with his foot, but it was clear to everyone that this fight wouldn't end well, so it had to be stopped. Ningbei heard a noise coming from nearby and decided that trouble had caught up with them all too quickly. Pushing away the scoundrel whose throat he had been clutching until that moment, our hero rushed in the direction from which the sounds of fighting had come. He only had a few seconds to get next to the guard and growl an order right in his face to stop this mess immediately. But the order was not obeyed, for the man swung his blade, wishing to strike Bei, but the lad managed to jump back to a safe distance very quickly. The overseer said that as a martial artist, Ningbei broke the law by attacking an ordinary person, for he should be punished. Our hero parried, muttering that if the man knew the law so well, he should have remembered that it was forbidden to raise a sword against his comrades. The guard's blade lowered in a flash, but his face expressed intense anger as he asked who stood before him. Instead of words, Ningbei pulled back his cloak, showing his opponent a sword that should answer all questions. Covering her face with her hand, He thought that there was no way to fix this guy, because even in places like the club, he manages to smuggle weapons. As expected, the sword gave the guard an understanding of who stood before him, so he immediately kneeled down and greeted the commander, introducing himself with the name Han Li. The people who were watching this scene were simply shocked. They couldn't understand why the city guard bowed his head to this guy, and even call him commander. Yufeng looked at his new acquaintance with his mouth open in surprise, for he couldn't believe that he was seeing the Northern King's sword in front of him. After a couple of seconds, Ningbei ordered the guard to rise to his feet, for there was absolutely no need for unnecessary formalities. The guy was approached by Qin He, who reminded him that he should avoid fighting, because otherwise she would tell Auntie Qing everything. Sighing, the young man calmed down a bit and now seemed not to be going to kill someone. But the anger in his eyes did not go anywhere, especially when he demanded that the girl give him the phone. While our hero was looking at something on his smartphone, he ordered the guard to immediately remove the creep who was lying on the floor. Shi Zhengyang's friend could only watch as he was dragged across the floor, not even bothering to lift him to his feet. Meanwhile, Ningbei continued to stare tensely at his phone and search for something. Apparently, he was looking for someone who was resting peacefully after a hard day's work and trying to regain his strength to get back on track. Answering the phone, the gentleman grudgingly asked who he had the honor of speaking to. The man's voice was subdued, but he was actually angry that he had been disturbed while on vacation. Ningbei felt that giving his name was unnecessary. After all, this person would already recognize him by his voice. As it happened, of course, he recognized him and was very much shocked that the young gentleman was calling him at such a late hour. He began to quickly say that he hadn't visited Ning's family in a few days, for which he was very remorseful, and invited the lad to visit his estate whenever he wished. But the guy said that this was not the best time for guests. All he wanted to know was if there was a person named Liang Zhou in the Liang family. Cold sweat began to trickle down the gentleman's face as he heard this name. He anxiously asked what this guy had done. Instead of answering, Ningbei wondered if the Lord wanted to teach his relative a lesson on his own, or if he wanted him to do it. After these words, Zhenyang's friend froze, as he finally began to realize the seriousness of the situation he was in. The gentleman did not answer anything, only asked that the phone be given to his relative so that he could understand the situation. When the guy picked up the phone, he thought his grandfather would tell him how to behave so that he would be left alone. But instead, Old Man Liang rudely ordered him to kneel down. The young man's face reflected sincere bewilderment. He could not believe that his grandfather was actually ordering him to humiliate himself in front of someone like that. Realizing there was no other option, he lowered his eyes and slowly knelt down, his limbs trembling, whether from anger or fear. The elderly gentleman didn't like what he made his grandson do either. One could only hope that the boy wouldn't blame him, for it was the only way to save his life. After handing the phone back to Qin He, our hero said that it was getting late, which meant that it was long past time for them to return home. Jiao Yun also glanced at the time and informed the guests that the party had come to an end, and it was time for everyone to go home. Approaching Ningbei, the guys asked if his strength was at the general's level. The latter nodded his head affirmatively without any pride, but Yue Feng realized that there was still a lot his brother didn't know, because the strength of the guy in front of them far surpassed the rank of general. It was absolutely obvious that the King of the North didn't want too many people to know about him, which was why he didn't reveal his status without a good reason. When Zhao Yun asked him why their new acquaintance was called Commander, he replied that it was nothing more than an address, and then changed the subject by saying that the drunken Yuxing needed a ride home. After all, the girl really wasn't at her best. The booze had taken its toll and knocked her off her feet, making her fall asleep right on the sofa near the table. Ningbei noticed that Yue Feng was hurt. He said that he knew about medicine and offered to help, but the guy replied that it was all nothing that would pass after a good rest. These words made Zhao Yun laugh out loud, and said that although his third brother was an adult, he was not too afraid of doctors. Our hero activated his energy and ordered the man not to move, for he would perform an examination. The stream of power split into 3 small flashes that shot straight into the injured man's chest. As the rays penetrated his body and extinguished, Yue Feng staggered and coughed violently, blood flowing profusely from his mouth. Despite this condition of the injured man, Ningbei asked if he felt relieved. The frightened Zhao Yun asked what he was even talking about, because it was obvious that his third brother was only getting worse. Coughing up blood could in no way indicate improvement. Yue Feng was silent for a while and tried to clean himself up. It was obvious that it was very difficult for him to recover his breathing. Then, to everyone's surprise, the man straightened up and smiled broadly, declaring that he was indeed feeling much better than he had before. Ningbei's voice was satisfied, as he muttered that Yue Feng's body was now perfectly fine, and the old injuries would no longer bother him. Behind the guy's back, Qin. He started whimpering, saying that she was very tired and could barely stay on her feet, so he promised that they would go home now. After saying goodbye to the guys, they started walking towards the exit. It was amazing that in such a short time, some people could become friends. Except that their departure was not without obstacles. There were those who wanted to delay them a little longer. The guards that became in the way of our hero and his fiancée reported that the boss of this institution wants to talk to him. Hearing these words, the girl tensed up, expecting that there might be another trouble, but her companion nonchalantly told them to be escorted to the right place. The elevator took them up to the 7th floor, where warriors lined up in 2 rows on either side of the wall, guarding the man sitting in the center of the room. The gentleman said that Suchin He had nothing to do with the matter he wanted to discuss with Ningbei, so he ordered that a car be arranged for her, and she be taken home. The hitherto calm girl literally became furious when she heard that they wanted to send her home like a small child. She screamed that no one would dare to offend her companion, but the guy calmly put his hand on her shoulder and said that there was no reason to worry, because he had enough strength to solve all the problems. The warriors did not inquire about the young mistress's wishes, so they simply escorted her out of the office and out the door. No matter how much she demanded to be let in, no one followed that order. The most disturbing thoughts began to arise in Qin He's mind. For judging from the behavior of these people, they clearly did not wish Ningbei well. Meanwhile, Mr. Du, barely restraining his anger, asked if the young man knew who he had injured this morning. Thinking about it, our hero remembered that unpleasant man he had maimed. He still thought that that scoundrel deserved what had happened to him. He wondered who he had wounded after all. The answer to this question was not long in coming. Hitting the table with his fist, the gentleman shouted that his son Du Hao had been injured. The poor man had lost his arm and almost died. So now he wanted to get even with the guy and promised that Ning Bei would die that night. The man was distracted from his conversation by a phone call. The person on the line asking if Du Yuan was out of his mind for daring to attack one of his brothers. Gritting his teeth, the club owner told young Mr. Tan that he had already shown him a lot of respect by not spoiling his sister's birthday. However, he couldn't help but avenge his son. After saying those words, he ended the call and ordered his guards to bare their swords. Except Ning Bei wasn't someone who could be easily defeated. He wasn't going to make it easy for his enemies. So he drew his sword from its sheath. Moving incredibly fast, the guy delivered precise blows that incapacitated the opponents. One by one they fell to the floor and could not even move. When the guards were done with, the guy slowly moved towards the instigator of this showdown, who preferred to avoid the dirty work. Du Yuan and his assistant were so frightened that they couldn't utter a word. It was hard for them to believe that a general-rank martial artist was standing in front of them. Looking at the fear of these people, Ning Bei only intensified the effects of his aura, which became more overwhelming, and caused his enemies to become animalistic in terror. The guy's strength caused the door to rattle open, revealing a view of what had happened in the office. Qing Yu-He, who called for help from the guys, were simply shocked by what they saw. They immediately started asking what happened to Ning Bei. This seemed like a great opportunity for Du Yuan to avoid reprisals. He quickly ran towards Mr. Tang and started begging him to save him. The owner of the establishment began to fall at his feet and beg for help, but the man wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. Except the guys relaxed too soon and thought that they had won. They let their guard down, and the enemies took advantage of this by capturing Qin He. Mr. Du's assistant put a gun to the girl's body and ordered her friends not to move. No matter how brave the guys were, they instantly froze, for they were too afraid that Qin He might get hurt because of their squabbles. Ning Bei rudely told the woman to immediately let his fiancé go, or else she would have to face very unpleasant consequences. But this madam was no slouch either. She stated that she was well aware that the guy's abilities were ranked general, so he could get to her in a matter of seconds. The problem was that everyone was well aware that no matter how fast Bei was, it would only take a second to pull the trigger, so he wouldn't be able to get ahead of the bullet. These words did not in the least affect our hero's confidence. He asked why the lady thought he was only a general. Even though the woman was scared, she thought it was all a bluff that had nothing to do with reality. As soon as the guy's strength was released, a swirl of blue light flashed around his body. This power seemed to erase all boundaries and notions of space. There was only the source of the energy and his enemies that he wanted to destroy. Even Ning Bei's friends were barely hanging on in this violent whirlwind that demolished everything in its path. Du Yuan trembled in fear, for he was well aware of the fact that the pressure was simply incomparable and could suppress an entire army. No matter how the guy hid his powers, it was now absolutely obvious to everyone that the very real god of war was in front of them. And now he was extremely angry, which gave him full determination to destroy his enemy. Whoever said anything, but Ning Bei managed to get ahead of the woman and disarm her before she pulled the trigger. The woman didn't even immediately realize what had happened. Her opponent managed to work so quickly that it wasn't until a couple of seconds later that she realized she had lost one wrist. At that moment, pain overtook her. But our hero didn't care. He snatched Qin He out of her hand and tried to lead her away to a safe distance. Screaming in fear, the girl covered her ears and eyes to try and abstract away from it all. Ning Bei gently embraced her and asked her not to look at what he had done. Crying, the young mistress sought comfort in him and found it, for the lad tried his best to assure her that everything would be all right. Turning his head, the young man asked in a voice distorted with anger if his opponents realized the price they would have to pay for attacking his fiancée. Falling to her knees, the woman began to beg forgiveness from the great god of war, saying that she had been mistaken when she thought she could stand up to him. Only no one was going to forgive her, because there weren't many people he wanted to protect, and this girl was one of them. The criminal didn't know what to expect, so she was extremely surprised when she saw some strange card being thrown to her, which landed not far from her. Lifting Qin He in his arms, our hero said that she had already been through too much, and he didn't want to smear the sword of the Northern King, so his opponent could rejoice that no one would take her life today. With a trembling hand, she picked up a black card from the floor and froze. She seemed to realize what it meant. Yue Feng immediately recognized the sword card. It was a very bad sign that no one would want to receive. After that, Ning Bei simply walked away from the boss's office, followed by Zhao Yun, who found it hard to believe that his new acquaintance would just take and let go of those who wanted to cut his life short. For Qin He's sake, he was willing to do many more things. But today he made do with minimal sacrifices and went to the car to take the girl home. Zhao Yun was driving, who he had no problem trusting with this trip. So our hero relaxed a bit and asked the guy to drive them to the Su family's house. Young Master Tang was also extremely angry about what had happened. He promised to finish off Du Yuan, and he also knew that he had to apologize to Grandma Su because he had gotten very drunk. Yue Feng, who was sitting beside him, assured his brother that the enemies could be forgotten about, because if one received a mark like that woman, not even the god of war would survive. Except the guy didn't know the meaning of this card and asked for an explanation. His brother told him to steer more carefully, and then he would explain it to him. There were actually a lot of people in the club tonight, except that they weren't vacationers, but people with whom jokes were really bad. Xiao Yunshan and his special operations team arrived at the scene, only he didn't like what he found. In the doorway of the office of the head of the club stood a warrior whose uniform was familiar to the head of the squad. The presence of this man here did not mean anything good. Yunshan's mind was full of questions, but first, he decided to ask what the leader of Qinzhou, whose name was Kuo Zhongtan, was doing here. Wiping his bloody hands with a napkin, the man replied that Captain Xiao was very late, and he had already taken care of the problem himself. With a threatening approach closer, Yunshan reminded him that this situation was the responsibility of the Special Operations Department, so it was unclear to him why the secret department had intervened here. Smiling sweetly, Zhongtan said that he was just following the orders given. That was the only reason he was here. After saying that, the member of the secret division began to move quickly towards his colleagues from the other squad. This unpredictable behavior made Yunshan tense, for he didn't know what this man was capable of or what to expect from him. When the car pulled up to the mansion, it was already deep night and the moon was shining brightly in the dark sky. After returning home, Qinhe's first thought was to take a bath to wash away the memories of the day she first saw the bloodshed so close. Memories of Ningbei protecting her all the time and fighting to keep her from being harmed by their enemies surfaced in her mind. Splashing water in her face, the girl began to say that she needed to forget what had happened as soon as possible and stop thinking about it. She decided that she needed to get out of the bathroom and go to bed as soon as possible, for the disturbing thoughts threatened to consume her completely. Wrapped in a towel, Qinhe walked leisurely through the house, wiping her wet hair. She was sleepy and didn't look around at all. That was why she didn't notice Ningbei, who was sitting on the sofa in the living room and was absorbed in reading a book. When he heard the footsteps, he was immediately distracted and looked up, but when he noticed the girl, he calmed down. After what had happened, he was on high alert. Screaming in surprise, Qinhe asked what he was doing here. She never thought that the guy would want to wait for her. The young lady was so confused and embarrassed about appearing in front of the guy like this that she decided to just run away, and even so fast that she lost her shoes like a princess. Hiding behind the door, the girl's only thought was that being seen in such a revealing way was embarrassing. Running into her room, she rushed to the drawer of sleepwear, except that a very sudden thought popped into her head about whether to replace the usual cute clothes with more revealing ones. When she caught herself at that thought, she froze with surprise. She never thought she would even be contemplating something like that. It pissed her off to no end, and made her toss one of her pretty nighties back into the drawer. Wrapping her hands around her face, she began to tell herself to calm down immediately, for all these thoughts had arisen due to extreme stress. In the end, she chose a rather cute nightie that emphasized her figure and went out into the living room to thank Ningbei for saving her. But when she finally decided to look up, she noticed that the couch was empty, and the guy she was so embarrassed about was absent. It made her very angry, for she had stepped over herself to go down to the living room, and he had just taken off. As it turns out, the guy didn't go anywhere. He just went up to the roof of the Su family mansion to meditate and restore his energy. He sat for so long that the moon had time to be replaced by a bright sun. When the first rays illuminated the earth, he activated his energy and began to feed off of the natural light. The energy generated formed into a small purple sphere, from which a noticeable power emanated. After spinning the sphere in his hands, Ningbei immediately knew what to do with it. The window in Qinhe's room was open, allowing the guy to quietly and unobstructedly get inside. Qinhe was sleeping peacefully and didn't even wake up when a guy burst into her room. For a few seconds, he just watched the rays of the morning sun illuminate her skin. Then he took out a purple orb and activated it, allowing the power to seep into the sleeping girl's body. This caused her to wake up and stand up on the bed in bewilderment, trying to figure out what an uninvited guest was doing in her bed. When her sleepy mind finally realized that Ningbei was in the room, she shrieked and asked what he was doing here. The guy nonchalantly said that her body was too weak and he concentrated some energy to strengthen it. Of course, the girl didn't believe him, because it really did sound extremely dubious and stupid. So she launched a pillow at him. Running away from the room, Qinhe shouted that such explanations would not fool even a small child. A strong resentment could clearly be heard in her voice. This strange behavior was completely incomprehensible to Ningbei, so he only stood there and watched the girl run away in bewilderment. With her loud stomping and sobbing, she disturbed the entire mansion. Running into Grandma Sue's room, the girl declared with resentment in her voice that her fiancé was a real pervert. The woman frowned and asked what he had done. This question put Chin-hee in a stupor, for she couldn't tell what he had done because there was no action. She stammered as she said so. The guy hadn't touched her, just snuck into the room with something he called concentrated energy that was needed to strengthen her body. The answer caused her grandmother to laugh softly. She muttered that the guy was just taking care of her, and Chin-hee, instead of thanking him, made a ruckus throughout the house. The anger was gone, and now the girl's mind was filled with romantic images associated with this caring guy she had been betrothed to as a child. Looking at the way her granddaughter blushed, Grandma Sue laughed, for she realized that this girl was young and did not understand her own feelings yet. This morning, Ningbei went to the university, as he intended to keep his word to Chin-hee. When he entered the building, he was immediately led to the office, which was allocated personally to him because the guy was not a student, and agreed to the role of the dean. There Bei was already waiting for Professor Wang's old notebook. After flipping through a couple of pages, it became clear that there were records of hiking in the mountains, where the very spiritual stone was found. But there was one problem. 3 pages had been torn out, which meant only one thing. There could be key information that could help in the search. The professor who brought the notebook was also surprised and said he didn't know about it. The guy explained that it only had entries for the 7 days before the hike. There was a look of horror on the man's face as he asked if the 3 missing pages were a big deal. Ningbei was pretty sure that these pages were ripped out for a reason, but using the clues from the previous 7 pages, they would be able to narrow down the search area. This news pleased the professor a little, who said with a genuine smile that he was pleased to help in such a matter. Nodding his head, Ningbei asked if there were any conditions the professor wanted to voice in exchange for his help. The man was embarrassed and began to assure that he had not thought of anything like that, and then hinted that he would be happy to see Ningbei in his lab. Upon hearing this invitation, the boy promised to stop by the lab before the lecture. He kept his word, and within minutes he was sitting in front of the man, listening to him talk about his research into anti-gravity and hoping to make a scientific breakthrough. The professor was sure that with the help of his discoveries, it will be possible to understand how to replace oil. Our hero added that if we install anti-gravity devices on airplanes, it will be possible to reduce the time of takeoff and landing. As for energy, Ningbei believed that for now, nuclear energy was a better substitute for fossil resources than gravitational energy. In response, the man frowned and said sadly that their research labs weren't up to the level needed for this, and it took too much money to build new ones. Consolingly patting the gentleman on the shoulder, our hero said he knew about these problems, because their country has been going nuclear for about 5 years now. But for this venture to be successful, you need huge investments and the best experts in the field. After that, Ningbei promised to come back to this conversation later, for he had a lecture to start now. He suggested that the professor attend it. When the bell rang, the students quickly made their way to the auditorium and took their seats, awaiting the arrival of the new instructor. Ningbei slowly walked in and headed towards the seat behind the lectern. The students began to whisper amongst themselves, not understanding why some guy had taken the professor's seat. One of the students said that Professor Ning would be showing up soon, so everyone should take their seats if they didn't want trouble. Smiling sweetly, Bei was thankful for that warning, except it was unnecessary. Without saying a word, our hero sat down in the teacher's seat and stared at the computer monitor. The students began to resent him for not leaving. Soon, the classroom door opened and President Sun himself entered, in the company of Professors Lee and Zhou. What was surprising to the students was that even then the mysterious stranger did not budge, and remained standing at the pulpit. As the men took their seats, Ningbei introduced himself and announced that he was about to begin his first lecture at Beyond University. There was a surprised whisper in the audience. No one could believe that the professor was standing in front of them, because the guy looked younger than some of the students. Not paying attention to all this, Ningbei started the lesson by saying that computer science was a theoretical subject that had practical benefits. The disgruntled students began to say that they already knew it very well. Because it was an introductory lesson for the first year, they asked to be told something new, otherwise they would die of boredom. With a smirk, Ningbei realized that in front of him were representatives of a very brazen youth, who wouldn't take him seriously unless he demonstrated his strength. So he stepped out from behind the pulpit and looked carefully at his many students, a plan slowly maturing in his mind. His senior colleagues decided that the guy was a bit of a misfit, so one of them offered to help Ningbei capture the attention of the audience. But still, the men decided that they should trust the young man, for they felt that he could handle the responsibility that had been placed upon him. Ningbei smiled at his wards and said that they were absolutely right. He promised to send the information to their computers for them to replicate it on their own. One student suggested creating a group to make it easier to share files. But Ningbei reported that there was no need for this, as he had the ability to send everything directly. The students whispered with incomprehension and asked each other how this was possible. Their instructor took his time to explain, instead beginning to upload files for further submission. It had only been a few minutes since Bei had sent the files, and notifications had already begun arriving on the students' computers that the document had been delivered. The guys got so agitated that the senior professors thought it wasn't good and should intervene. But Principal Sun asked them not to worry. Smiling, the young instructor asked, now the students were more interested in learning from him. Oh yes, the students were now looking at him with burning eyes and wishing to learn similar tricks. When the students were extremely attentive and were obviously very interested in information security, our hero decided it was safe to start the lecture. Everyone was interested. Even the adult professors were sitting around trying not to miss a word. Noticing that one of the students had turned on his camera, his roommate bewilderedly asked what he was doing. Thoth only grinned wider and mouthed that events like this were worth putting online. The live broadcast went viral with such speed that it became known to so many people. One of the guys who lived in the dorm ran up to a friend who showed a live feed from Ningbei's class where he had already started his lecture. The guy was very surprised to see his audience on the stream, so he immediately took his mind off work and started watching. When he realized that the instructor was some newcomer, he decided to play a joke and at the same time demonstrate what he could do. Our hero was chatting with students and didn't notice at all that a funny video of a dancing mouse appeared on the screen behind him. At first, Ningbei thought it was a virus, but similar videos started appearing on all the computers in the classroom, so it couldn't be a coincidence. The audience burst into laughter. The guys began to say that even the professor's computer was hacked, and he was talking about information security. This situation did not embarrass Ningbei in the slightest. He smiled, for he already knew very well how he should act. The smug kid said that this was what the new professor was all about. In his opinion, Ningbei was just a wimp. But he was still considered one of the best hackers in the country for a reason. Ningbei's voice came out of the speakers, ironically asking if such an important person had done it. From the surprise, the guys bounced from the computer table, frightened by the unfamiliar voice. But the perpetrator of the situation froze on the spot, hearing that he would face the consequences. His monitor lit up, and there was an image of Ningbei, who informed him that it wasn't something to be proud of that the guy was one of the best hackers. When the students who were sitting in the dorm room realized that it was the same Ningbei in front of them, they were not really scared. The students sitting in the auditorium exploded with laughter, because it was so funny to watch these guys sitting in the dormitory looking extremely strange. The guys covered themselves so no one would notice their obscene appearance, but it was too late, and as luck would have it, their comrade couldn't finish the broadcast. The computer just stopped listening to it. One of the guys got to the point of pulling the power cord. It was the only way to end the whole mess. It was only when they did that everything stopped, and the screen no longer broadcast the dorm room. But the guys could not calm down. They were trying to understand what to do and how to wash off the shame, because they were seen by a whole stream of students. The offended hacker decided that since this new professor decided to play with him, he should confront the one who taught him. So he called his teacher, who worked at Yantai Financial Company. The man immediately answered the call and began to listen intently to the story of the mysterious Ningbei, who was able to surpass his disciple. Zhouling was well aware of the university in question. After all, he was this student's teacher, so he promised to deal with everything as soon as possible. His hacking wasn't his only job. This gentleman was the head of security for the largest company in Dragon City. So now the real boss was coming into play and was determined to show everyone what he could do. Meanwhile, one of the professors approached Ningbei and said with admiration that he had taken control of those monkeys in the dormitory. Working at the computer, our hero discovered something strange. He told his colleague that their system is trying to someone to hack. An elderly man asked indignantly if the students were up to their old tricks again, even though they had decided not to be penalized. But Ningbei was 100% sure that these were not disciples, because the pattern of behavior of the intruder was of a completely different nature. Now the man was tense, because he realized that the system was being hacked by an outsider, and if someone got into their network, it would be very bad. But Ningbei assured that this computer was brand new, so there was simply nothing to steal on it, and he wouldn't allow others to get to it. Sipping tea, Zhouling enjoyed the results of his work. He decided that Ningbei's skills were completely mediocre and not particularly impressive. He thought so, until another employee reported that the company's firewall had been compromised. Hearing this, the man almost choked on his tea. He couldn't believe that this was really possible. When he looked at the computer, he saw that they had indeed been hacked, for the windows were popping up one after another and would not close. Zhou had personally installed the defense, so he couldn't accept the fact that this system had been hacked. The man had even asked several hackers to test it, and it worked perfectly. Running his hand through his hair, the man began to whisper that it was impossible, that no one had ever managed to pierce his defenses with their attack. His colleague asked if they had provoked any of the bigwigs. Mr. Yang An burst into the office, shouting and asking if Zhuo Ling's system was completely useless since it couldn't protect them from being hacked. Notifications started coming in that the company's accounts had been blocked, administrators' statuses were changed, and there was complete chaos. All internal confidential information was also blocked, so bosses became concerned that outsiders could get information about customer deposits. The boss, whose name was Mr. Yang, tried to convey that the opponent was not easy, because he had passed all 7 firewalls in just 15 seconds. This information frightened the gentleman, for he was sure that the defenses of his system were impeccable. Zhuo Ling stated that he was aware of the person who did this, so now all that was left to do was to wait for that person to name his price. As soon as he said that phrase, Ningbei's voice came out of the speakers and asked what they were talking about. He was offended that he was mistaken for a blackmailer. Our hero's stunt made everyone in the office recoil from the speakers and stare in amazement. They couldn't understand how such a thing was possible. Mr. Yang moved closer to the speakers and began shouting into them, asking Ningbei what they had done to offend him. For his jokes crossed all lines. The guy replied that he was not just insulted. He said that an employee of this company had made a hacker attack on his computer, so he took it as a personal insult. Everyone's gazes shifted to Zhuo Ling, who suspiciously became quiet and turned away. It was clear that he was the one involved in this matter. Scratching the back of his head, the man muttered with an awkward smile that it was just a little game he had dared to play. The supervisor was just furious. He was so angry at the employee for causing them serious problems instead of focusing on their work. Lowering his head, Mr. Yang turned to Ningbei, saying that everything happened because he did not take care of discipline among the staff well. The man promised to transfer 500,000 to him as an apology. But our hero said that, as he said before, money doesn't interest him at all. To the surprise of the entire company, Bei informed them that all of their company's systems would be back to normal in an hour. He wanted them to learn from this lesson. Everyone amicably thanked the gracious Mr. Ning and waited for their work to resume. Closing the laptop with a sense of accomplishment, the guy looked at his colleague and realized that the latter was just delighted with his work. Suddenly, an anxious Qin he burst into the study, with her friend standing beside her. The expression on the girl's face did not bode well, but as soon as she noticed Professor Li, her face softened and gained a more welcoming expression. Professor Li was an elderly and very wise man, so he immediately realized that the young people wanted to talk, which meant it was time for him to return to his laboratory. As soon as the elderly man walked out, that angry expression returned to Qin He's face. She sternly asked why the guy took away her meal card. Twirling this very card in his hands, Ningbei reminded the stroppy girl that he had already told her not to eat today. But these words made her even more angry, and she began to complain that because of him she had not had breakfast today, and now he was preventing her from having lunch. The girl tried to take away the coveted card, but she failed to do so. Yuxin yawned and lazily muttered that they could just have lunch outside the university instead of fighting over this card. But her friend didn't care. She just wanted this guy to stop giving her trouble. However, no matter how hard Qin He tried, she was unable to snatch the card from the guy's clinging hands. At one point, he turned around and started walking away. The girl freaked out and asked where he was going. When she had already decided that Ningbei wasn't going to say anything to her, the guy smiled forcefully and announced that he was heading to the cafeteria, then offered her to keep him company. Qin He wasn't as excited about being invited by the groom-to-be as she was about finally being able to eat something delicious. The cafeteria was in a building adjacent to the university and was quite close to Ningbei's office. But when they got there, they witnessed a real massacre for a place in the queue. Someone shouted. Someone asked to watch his soup. In general, there was a real chaos. Qin He didn't want to fight over food at all, so she suggested going upstairs. It was mostly just teachers eating there, and the food was much tastier. There, they spotted Jiao Yun, who was sitting importantly in proud solitude. When the guy spotted his sister surrounded by friends, he waved to them in a friendly manner and offered to join him. For some reason, Yuxin wasn't very happy to see him, and irritatedly asked why a slacker like him was sitting in that seat. But all she got in response was a sly smile. There was hot food on the table that just smelled marvelous and immediately worked up an appetite. Qin He smiled widely, picked up the chopsticks and reached for a piece of roasted broccoli, which looked just unrealistically delicious. Except she wasn't even allowed to pick up the appetizing morsel. Ningbei, as if mocking her, knocked the chopsticks out of her hands. Her indignation was unbounded. She angrily asked what the guy was doing. After all, hadn't he called her here to eat? To which Ningbei calmly replied that he had called her to keep him company, but that didn't mean she would dine at all. The poor girl boiled. She couldn't believe that this impertinent man had called her here, only for her to have to watch him leisurely devour his food. Ningbei explained his prohibition by saying that he needed to wait for the purple kui to be absorbed. The guys looked at each other in bewilderment, not understanding what he was talking about. They were silent, and it was only because of this that they noticed that someone had approached their table. It was a smiling stranger who said that purple kui was native to the east. It was also called sage aura. Stopping smiling, the guy added that someone who is protected by violet kui can be considered a sage. The presence of this young master made Zhao Yun mad. He wanted to do everything he could to make this man literally dissolve right on the spot. But instead, the stranger snagged a spot near Yuxing and continued to talk about how the violet chi was a true treasure. It was rare even among martial artists. He said that it was rumored that purple kui was last seen when the master, the founder of Taoism, left the Han Empire and traveled to the west. That was why this energy was called the aura of a sage. The guy was so interesting in his story that even the uninterested Yuxin listened to him attentively. Activating his strength, Ningbei demonstrated his body defense with purple chi, then asked the stranger if he meant something like this. It was really hard for the guys to believe that the guy possessed purple kui and was talking about it so easily, as if it was no big deal. Yuxin was simply delighted. She asked with an undisguised smile if her new acquaintance possessed magic. The guy who approached jumped up sharply from his seat and said that only sages could possess such energy. So he asked to be told who this person was. Instead of answering, our hero grinned, looked at Qin He and said that she had now convinced herself that purple kui was a good thing, so he promised to give more tomorrow. However, the girl was so strongly angered by Ningbei's behavior that she haughtily declared that she did not want to receive any energy from him. As soon as she said no, Bei was immediately jumped by a new acquaintance who began to say that he would very much like to be energized in such a powerful way. The offer was so strange that Bei didn't even know how to comment on it, so he simply asked who the man was and what he was doing here. Realizing how his words sounded, the guy immediately added that he didn't know how to mean any such thing, and in no way was asking for protection for free. He was willing to pay any price. Turning her head towards the stranger, Yuxing said that the eldest son of the Ning family was in front of him, who didn't need money as it was. Upon hearing about the Ning family, this person immediately began to wonder why he didn't know anything about Bei before. The musings were interrupted by Qin He's loud shouting, who demandingly asked if she would be given food today, to which she received the reply that she had to be patient for a little longer. These arguments made Yusin laugh. She asked if this was how they would continue to live like cat and dog, even when they got married. This question made her friend blush, and reminded her that a wedding was out of the question. She and Ningbei were just friends. Qin He stated that she had said from the beginning that she would not marry him. Yuxing began to incite her, asking if she didn't want to become the wife of such a powerful man. These words were unpleasant to Bei, so he rose from his seat and reminded him that he was talking about the fact that his fiancée could break off the engagement at any time. After that, he turned around and went away, and the girl finally realized that because of her anger she had said too much. Because to be honest, she did not want to break the engagement. So it was only after those harsh words were said that Qin He realized how much she might have offended someone she had called just a friend. She was already starting to regret what she had said, and began to think about how she could remedy this unpleasant situation. Her friend immediately noticed the condition and guessed what she was thinking. Zhao Yun also expressed his opinion that if she didn't mean to break the engagement, then she shouldn't have joked about such things. After these words, the girl's condition deteriorated even more, and she realized that she had made a huge mistake. Meanwhile, Ningbei returned to his office and immediately called his father to inform him that he and Qin He had separated, so the breakup of the engagement should be discussed with Grandma Su. The father tried to find out what had happened between his son and his fiancée, but the boy was quick to interrupt the call. He stood by the window and stared into the distance. He was surprised that this decision made his chest tighten, and he felt that he was losing something important. Several professors were gathered in the gravity research lab, looking expectantly at those who had just entered. Mr. Li introduced them to Ningbei, a respected professor in their field, who would be the honorary director of the research lab from now on. This news was a big surprise for everyone, because the guy looked more like a student than a teacher, and even more so a principal. He was too young. Ignoring the surprised faces of his colleagues, our hero began to examine the equipment and found it too simple and uncomplicated. One of the lab employees named Hu Qiang rudely shouted that Ningbei was overreacting. After all, they had some of the best working tools. This gentleman pointed at the gravity measuring machine and emphasized that it cost 8 million, and there was only one such machine in the entire Dragon City. Ningbei did not hesitate to reply that he had also seen inventions that cost more than 15 million. Such words caused a real furor among the employees. They began to ask if it was really true. A hunch flashed through Hu Qiang's mind. He asked if Mr. Ning was talking about the A513 model. He nodded his head affirmatively and said that there were 2 of them in the lab at the northern border. He even promised to call and arrange to have one of these machines sent here tonight. Some of the professors even shrieked with excitement. They had never worked with something like this before and couldn't believe it would happen. The surprise of his colleagues led our hero to ask if the lab was that badly funded. According to Mr. Lee, gravity research was barely publicized, so most patrons thought they were frauds. Picking up the phone, the guy said that in that case, Ning's conglomerate would take over the investment on the condition that he would receive 90% of the revenues and patents in the future. Upon hearing this proposal, Hu Qiang said that Bei was asking for too much, but Professor Lee ordered him to shut up. According to Lee, Ning Bei's research in this area was superior to anything he tried. So if all he needed was money, he would have done without it. So without thinking long, and without even consulting his colleagues, Lee agreed to the proposal. After receiving a positive answer, our hero called Mu Shi and ordered her to transfer 1 billion to Bian University's account. Moreover, he suggested a slight change in research direction and wanted to start with basic anti-gravity devices. After these words, all employees started to work. They themselves were curious about the end of cooperation with this young man. Every time they approached Ning Bei and asked him for advice or verification, he happily cooperated with the lab technicians. The work so absorbed these people that they did not even notice that the working day was over and it was late evening. They only broke away from their research when they were distracted by a loud sound that was impossible to ignore. As it turned out, it was a private helicopter that landed on the roof of the building. No one understood what was going on or why a helicopter had landed on the sports field. A uniformed man emerged from it, stating that they were to complete an A1 level escort mission, so all outsiders should step aside. Everyone was excited about the huge state-of-the-art transport that could even deliver tanks to the battlefield. A female employee noticed Ning Bei walking toward the helicopter and reminded him that the military had ordered outsiders not to approach. But when he didn't stop, it was clear that he was the one being greeted. As the military man greeted the commander and introduced himself with the name Lu Qin from the 6th Escort Squad. After that, the entire crew lined up in 2 rows and loudly greeted Ning Bei, who was called the commander. Now even Professor Lee was surprised, because he was sure that Ning Bei was just a scientific genius, and his colleagues thought the kid was just a rich heir. It was time to seriously question who was really standing in front of them. A few minutes later, Ning Bei had already arrived home. Upon entering the house, the boy was surprised to find that his parents were still awake despite such a late hour. But they couldn't sleep because of the news their son had broken on the phone. So now they were interested in all the details of why he and Qin He had decided to separate. Turning away from them, Ning Bei revealed that the girl was against this marriage with all her heart, so he felt that it was not worth it to insist and develop this topic. That was his last word. Without waiting for a response from his parents, he went out to the patio to breathe in the fresh, cool air and clear his head after a hard day. But he wasn't helped much by the walk, so he decided to distract himself in another way and jumped up, flying upwards. After climbing onto the roof, he spotted Xiao Yunshan, who bowed respectfully to him and greeted him. Our hero was very interested in whether the squad leader had found the 3rd man he should kill. Toth sadly said that he hadn't found him yet, but assumed that he was among the men of Kuo Zhongdan, the leader of Qinzhou Anbu. So he had good reason to worry about Ning Bei's safety. But the young man only waved those words away. He wasn't in the mood to think about things like his own safety right now. Meanwhile, in the Su family mansion, there was also someone who couldn't find peace even in her dreams. Qin He couldn't sleep no matter how many times she tried. Her mind was replaying those words that should have never come out of her mouth. She was snapped out of her musings by a sudden knock on the door, so she literally jumped into her bed before allowing her overnight guest to enter. Her grandmother, who for some reason hadn't slept well that night either. Ms. Su said that she received a call from Qing Honglang, who told her that she and Ning Bei had decided to separate. While the girl was trying to comprehend what was said, the old woman muttered that if there was no marriage, neither the Ning family nor the Su family would bring up the matter again. When she asked in a stupor what happened, her grandmother told her that Ning Bei was not the kind of guy who would pursue a girl. After hearing the rejection several times in a row, he accepted it, turning her head away sadly. The madam informed that this guy was very proud, but even so, he had already tolerated Qin He's antics, but now his patience was bursting. As she left, she added that the engagement should be broken off by the bride's side, as it would help save face in the future. After the door closed, the girl fell to her knees and began to sob. Sadness and strong resentment mixed inside her. Qin He decided that if her ex-fiancé wanted to break the engagement, she would find someone better. Returning to her room, Mrs. Su really hoped that her granddaughter had made an informed decision and would not regret her action. As it turned out, the Su family's house was being closely watched, and now the foes had some very important information in their hands. The stranger who had been eavesdropping on Chin Hee and Grandma's conversation dialed the right number, and reported that the engagement had been broken off. Morning came, except that it didn't help relieve the anxieties of the previous day. Uninvited guests arrived at the Su mansion, the head of the Gu household honored and graced with their presence. He arrived with his son and was overly gracious, which made one wonder what he was trying to accomplish. The lady began to guess why they had arrived and turned her attention to the young man, saying that the Gu family was blessed by the gods. The head of the Gu household replied that he was far from the beautiful Chin Hee. As the woman suspected, the man had arrived with a marriage proposal, one of her grandchildren reported to her. With a playful smile, Mr. Gu began to talk about how their families have been friends for decades, and his son Kong Kong just really likes Chin Hee. Madame Su knew exactly where he was going with this, so she tensely said that the youth was too opinionated right now, so she needed to talk to her granddaughter. It was noticeable that the man was very hopeful when he didn't hear the refusal, so he said he wouldn't be pressured and ordered the servants to bring in the gifts. More than a dozen men entered the mansion, 2 by 2, carrying some large and rather heavy chests. Not realizing what was going on, the homeowner asked what was inside the crates. At that time, the Gu family head opened a few of them, giving him a chance to appreciate the bars of pure gold that the chests were filled to the top with. The old lady didn't even know what to say when she heard that they were engagement gifts. The man present next to the grandmother smiled broadly, clearly pleased that their supplies had been replenished, and offered the guests some rest after the road. At the same second, one of the guards flew into the room, informing him that there were important guests outside. Before the woman could get up from her seat, Zhang Zhongquan, who was known by the nickname Central Blade, entered the hall. This man was received by the old lady with more joy than the previous guests. She immediately offered him tea and conversation, but the man was less welcoming, for without explanation, he took out a black card and asked the head of the Su family to accept it. The elderly lady could only stare shocked at the table where the ill-fated card had quickly sunk. There was complete silence in the hall and no one dared to break it, until Gu Kangkang picked up the card and asked his father what it all meant. The master shouted at his son so loudly that the poor man dropped the thing in surprise. Knowing what the card meant, the head of the Gu family ordered the offspring to immediately put it back and mind his own business. While Mrs. Su was trying to come to her senses, her grandson started talking about how if they accepted the map, their family would be under severe oppression. Closing her eyes, she showed her grandson, whose name was Chin Hai, to immediately call Ningbei. But then Chin He entered the room, saying in a determined voice that she would call her former fiancé herself. Glaring at the formidable man, she asked without a shadow of fear if he was working under Bei's instructions. Not getting an answer, she started dialing the guy's number, complaining that he was doing a very bad thing, because instead of moving on, he held a grudge and sicked his people on her grandmother. But it was possible to do without calling, as Ningbei had already arrived at the Su family's mansion and entered the living room. Zhang Zhongquan bowed to the King of the North in a flash, and now, uncertainty and confusion could be heard in his voice. Our hero took the black card from the man's hands and said that he accepts this sign, so now, all the Zhang family members from the 3 provinces can come and try to kill him. Falling to his knees, the man said he would never dare even think of such a thing, let alone realize it. Breathing out, Mrs. Su felt relieved, for now their family was rid of the black mark. But her granddaughter was not appeased. She called Ningbei a hypocrite and a liar who doesn't know what it is to keep his own word. Xinha was so angry that she was literally burning with rage. She couldn't believe that someone like Zhongquan could act without Bei's orders. Hearing the girl draw that conclusion, the man wanted to object, for it was not true. But Ningbei did not let him do so, and ordered him to immediately shut up, for he had already said too much. Coming closer and closer, the girl with accusations in her voice began to say that our hero all the time built himself cool and powerful. But now he came to scare an elderly woman with a black card. Swinging her hand, the angry young lady threateningly said that if anything happened to Su's grandmother, she would spend her life getting even with him. Seeing this hysterical girl swinging at the commander, Zhongquan immediately drew his sword and ordered her to stop. Yes, and the grandmother realized how all this could end, so she asked her granddaughter to stop making things worse immediately. Except Chin, he wasn't stopped by all these warnings. She was so angry that she was literally asking for trouble and directly stated that Ningbei could let Ningbei kill her. Crying, the young lady said that although her family was weak, but she, Chin He, would never humiliate herself in front of him. These words were extremely outrageous, and Zhongquan took another step towards the girl, but the King of the North did not allow him to budge. Steel was ringing in his head, so it was impossible not to comply, especially when our hero activated his overwhelming aura. Exhaling, Ningbei calmed down a bit and put the bank card on the table, saying that the money from it could be used at any time, and with it, the Su family would no longer fall under someone else's control. After that, He fell silent. She couldn't understand what had happened and who was the villain in this whole story. After that, he walked past the girl, and without even looking at her, he said he wouldn't bother her anymore. Pathosily throwing on his cloak, the Northern commander announced that anyone who would cause trouble for the Su family would know serious consequences. Even Grandma Su didn't expect the young man to take on the role of her family's patron. All these problems so frightened poor Mr. Gu that he ordered his men to immediately take the crates of gold and get out of here. Shinha was left standing on the doorstep all alone. She realized that she had made a fatal mistake, but she had no idea how to fix it. Hopelessness pressed so hard on the girl that she cried bitterly, but even that didn't help her feel any relief. Walking out of the mansion, Ningbei muttered to himself that he had closed his debt to the Su family today, except he felt neither joy nor relief. Turning to Zhongquan, the guy put him on notice that the engagement was broken off on his initiative, so he ordered him not to bother that family anymore. When he reached his house, he found many expensive cars parked outside his house. It made him nervous, for it hardly spoke of anything good. He was pulled out of these unpleasant thoughts by Guogo, who was running toward him with joyous shouts. Hugging his little sister, the boy forgot about his problems for a few seconds and relaxed. Her sincere smile chased away the unpleasant thoughts. After picking up the baby girl in his arms, Ningbei walked over to the fourth uncle and asked what was going on here. Kanan replied that all these people had come with marriage proposals. Ningbei was very surprised to hear this answer, for they had no unmarried girls in their family to offer marriage to. There was only the beautiful Guogu, but no matter how beautiful she was, it was too early to think about marriage. Noticing a man in the courtyard, our hero asked if Mr. Lin had come to them. The man smiled even wider and nodded his head in the affirmative. The man was the head of the black unit from the capital. Bei asked what brought him here, to which the gentleman replied that he had come with a marriage proposal. When the guy finally realized that he was offered to marry, he was extremely tense, because he had never even thought of something like that. Without letting his sister out of his arms, Bei listened to the rumor that rumors had reached Mr. Lin that he had broken off the engagement, and he wished to offer his granddaughter as a bride. Kangnan grinned and revealed that Mr. Lin was far from the first to come to them with such a proposal. Upon entering the house, Ningbei realized what his uncle meant. There were so many people there that one would think it was as if someone had arranged a formal reception. All the representatives of the families bowed to the King of the North in a friendly manner and greeted him, except that our hero understood perfectly well that all these people were only interested in his status, so he informed them that they had 1 minute to leave his house. These words did not frighten the men, who did not even have time to voice their suggestions. When they would not budge, the young man repeated his demand more roughly and said they must hurry lest they provoke his anger. These words were enough for the grown men to run away like little children. Such a tone from her brother startled little Guoguo, who had rarely encountered rudeness in her short life. But her brother stroked her head and reassured her that everything was okay. The girl relaxed and felt safe again. Stepping forward, Bei's father said with a chuckle that it was unlikely anyone would come to him with a marriage proposal after this. The guy finally put his baby sister on the ground and firmly said he didn't need matchmakers dreaming of marrying off his treasure. His father didn't like this answer because he and his mother thought that if his son had broken off the engagement with the Su family, he should think of someone else. So he suggested that he look at the photos of some of the candidates. Ningbei had no intention of doing so, and to prevent all sorts of entreaties, he simply tore up those photos and walked away from the house. The morning at Su Mansion began with a discussion of what was happening at Ning's house. The grandmother informed her granddaughter that her former fiancé had been offered the most enviable brides, but he had turned each of them down. This really surprised and slightly pleased Qin He. Perhaps this guy still felt something for her after all, or was so angry that he just didn't want to get involved with women anymore. Still, she couldn't hold back a smile, because deep down, she liked this guy's stubbornness and intransigence. Noticing the girl's smile, Madame Su simply couldn't help but ask if her granddaughter definitely didn't like Ningbei. The girl asked the woman not to start this conversation, because she still had unpleasant memories of how the guy had behaved today. These words made Madame rise from her seat. She felt that if Ningbei was narrow-minded and really turned against the Su family, she wouldn't have come to their house. Taking her granddaughter's hand, the woman muttered that the fact that Zhang Zhongquan had acted without Ningbei's knowledge was quite obvious to her. Qin He got angry and asked why then the guy didn't say it directly, and didn't even try to explain anything. She fell silent when Nana explained that Bei had only been so cold because the young lady had pounced on him with accusations without even finding out why he had come. Clasping her hands together so as not to give off a slight shiver, Chin-hee informed that even before this incident, the guy had never shown any interest in her, and a childhood engagement meant nothing. Then her grandmother reminded her that Ningbei had grown up on the northern border and had been through a lot, so it was foolish to expect him to talk about love and gesture too romantically. After saying that, Chin-hee finally realized that she had behaved foolishly, but now it was impossible to think about it, because in any case, it was impossible to change the situation. Morning has come, which means it's time to visit the university. But the new day did not help to forget the heaviness of the past, so our hero felt extremely depressed and frustrated. When he entered his office, Yusin was there waiting for him, and she greeted him by calling him Mr. Genius. Noticing the freshly brewed tea on the table, the young man was surprised to ask if the girl had made it. Ta got embarrassed and said that Jiao Yun made the tea. He waited for 2 hours, but in the end he didn't have the patience, so her brother left to play. Frowning, Ningbei tried to understand in honor of what the guy had decided to take care of him. But Yuxin changed the subject, wanting to talk about whether he could provide the Tan Corporation with an anti-gravity device. There was no emotion on the guy's face when he said he'd do it if the girl gave one good reason to help them. Crossing her arms, Yuxing informed that it was all about the fact that another martial artist had appeared in the Tang family last night, and he was 2 years younger than Jiao Yun. Our hero quickly guessed that this caused the guy's position in the Tan family to be jeopardized. The girl continued by saying that their family had strict rules, and the heir was chosen through a competition, so if Jiao Yun lost, he would be sent to work for the company. Ningbei thought that this was not a bad outcome, because the boy had a carefree character, so the unburdensome position and the opportunity to practice martial arts were closer to him than being the head of the family. But according to Yu Xin, it wasn't that simple, because if her brother lost his position as heir, her 2 uncles, who were bad men who could lead the Tan family to collapse, would take over. And Yuxin herself could be nothing more than a tool for political marriage. She didn't even want to think about who she might be married to. Ningbei felt sorry for the girl. He thought such actions were too old-fashioned and cruel. But Yuxin only asked doomfully, "Doesn't he know the ruthless nature of big families?" After these words, he was reminded of that terrible day when his parents and he were little, running away in the rain from the armed men of their blood relatives. Yes, he is well aware of the ruthless nature of the rich who will stop at nothing when they smell power. So he decided to help Yuxin and her brother. His decision made the young lady so happy that she jumped for joy. Leafing through something on his phone, our hero added that it's not as simple as one might think at first glance. Showing her the blocked correspondence, the young man said that getting into the anti-gravity project was very difficult, and even he was thrown out of it. This news made the girl open her mouth in surprise. She couldn't figure out what she should do next. Meanwhile, the lab technicians, led by Professor Lee, were presenting their project, with colleagues flooding them with questions about whether they had actually developed a complete anti-gravity device. A smiling Hu Qiang said that the final product had already passed the tests, and in addition to their teacher, there were 8 other students working in the lab, totaling 9 people. But when Professor Lee himself was asked to answer a couple of questions, he lowered his eyes and hesitantly swallowed. He realized that they had done a very bad thing. Even so, he claimed that they were the ones who created the world's first anti-gravity device, which allows levitation up to 10 meters high. The listeners clapped their hands and began to say that this was a real scientific breakthrough, which was expected from someone who had devoted 10 years of his life to the subject. The professor and the lab technicians were so absorbed in their triumph that they did not notice the presence of Mu Shi, who asked whether they had actually created the device. This unexpected question put Lee in a stupor. He became visibly nervous. It prevented him from finding the right words to get out of the awkward situation. Hu Qiang abruptly jumped up from his seat and reminded her that his teacher had devoted a whole 10 years to creating this device, so she simply had no right to ask about something like this. Suddenly, the classroom door rattled open and an enraged Yuxin rushed in, calling out loudly to Sion. Following her, Ningbei also entered, serving as a formidable and silent support when the girl demanded that the speaker repeat what he had said once more. As the boys slowly approached the table where the professors were sitting, there were whispers in the hall about what was going on here. Hu Qiang demanded that the guards immediately take out Tang Yuqing, who was not supposed to be here. However, no one dared to lay a finger on this girl who was boldly standing in the middle of the hall and was not going anywhere. Musi, sitting nearby, asked with a smirk why Professor Qiang was so indignant. Was it because he was afraid that the truth would be revealed? Frowning, the man suggested that the mistress held a grudge against them, since their lab had rejected her funding, and now she had decided to spread false rumors. The woman was extremely outraged by these words, because not only was she called a liar, but it was done by people who decided to appropriate someone else's achievements. One of the guests asked his boss, Director Shu, if they should continue to cooperate with these people. The latter said yes without hesitation. Shu Chengye didn't mind working with these people, even though he was almost 100% sure that it wasn't all done by them. To try to whitewash his reputation, Hu Chong asked what evidence Mu Xi had that their lab had stolen other people's advances. This was answered by Yusin, who shouted that the evidence was unnecessary, as the man who invented it all was standing right in front of them. All the people in the audience cheered. They couldn't believe that the innovator was this young guy that the girl's hand was pointing at. They were approached by Shu Chengyi, who asked with a smile if the person in front of him was Mr. Ning, the youngest professor in the university. When our hero took a closer look at the man, he noticed in him an old acquaintance whom he was very glad to see. It was mutual, for the man also stretched out in a warm smile that was completely genuine. But the warm greeting could wait, for now it was much more important to tell him that the anti-gravity device had been assembled using temporary spare parts. So according to Ning Bei, after 5 experiments, the device would become unusable. But Qiang thought that was absurd. After all, they had conducted 7 experiments tonight. To strike fear into his opponent, our hero activated his overwhelming aura and asked if the man was sure everything was okay. Now Xion was not as sure as he had been before, for he sensed on an instinctual level that something was wrong. To prove his point, the professor quickly ran over to the machine and turned it on, urging a smiling Bei to watch carefully. The device turned on and started working. It glowed and made a lot of noise. The people sitting in the audience were simply delighted, because they had never seen anything like this before. Shu Chengyi believed that he saw before him a true scientific miracle, a breakthrough in anti-gravity research that would give a boost to the entire aerospace industry. As the machine made the object float, defying the laws of gravity, Xion asked triumphantly if his opponent was very disappointed, for the device worked just flawlessly, except that Professor Li was beginning to suspect that Ning Bei was right after all, for there was one detail that made him tense up. As if reading the professor's thoughts, the guy said that the key elements were already running out. It could be seen by the fact that the machine was starting to make more and more noise. It was pure truth. Not only was it making more noise, but it was also starting to crackle noticeably. Li realized either he would turn off the device right now or something irreparable would happen. Something that could destroy his career once and for all. He really wanted to prevent disaster, but deep down he realized that he had already lost to this youngster a long time ago. It was obvious to Ning Bei that it was too late to save the situation, so ordered the guests to stay as far away from the invention as possible. A few seconds later, the apparatus fell to the floor with a clatter, nearly hitting Hu Qiang, who managed to bounce away at the very last moment. While everyone was coming to their senses, a voice came from the hall and called out to Professor Li expectantly. It was Shu Chengyi, who believed that since a man was the creator of this miracle, he should know the reasons for its destruction. Mr. Li was so badly startled by this question that it literally knocked him out and prevented him from connecting a few words. Meanwhile, Hu Qiang decided to take charge of the situation, so he rushed over to the machine and declared that he would fix it immediately. He sat by him for almost an hour, all the while tapping away with some sort of instrument. The lab technician clearly trying to do his best not to lose his reputation. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't even manage to open this device. Sion couldn't even understand what was going on. Scoffing, Shu Chengyi asked if the person who created this device couldn't remember how to take it apart. The professor and all his colleagues were silent until one lab assistant, who was standing behind everyone, expressed her desire to tell how it really was. She admitted that, in fact, the anti-gravity device had been designed and created by Professor Ning, and last night, they couldn't even figure out its design. Upon hearing this revelation, the guests were simply amazed at the audacity of these scientists. The representative of the Eastern Institute, whose name was Kun Feng, stated that these professors were an embarrassment to the entire academic community. His colleagues agreed with him, so they rose from their seats and quickly left the auditorium, not wanting to support the whole farce. When Kun Feng noticed that Ning Bei was also walking away, he went towards him and asked him to wait for a while. This gentleman offered our hero a professorship and funds to conduct research. Also, he himself could recruit a team of assistants. The conversation broke off as Chengyi approached. He had heard the offer and found the terms tempting enough. But he emphasized that there are more than 300 people working in his research department, and every one of them dreams of helping such a talented scientist. Instead of answering, the guy simply summoned his assistant Mu Xi, laying all further explanations on her. A spectacular woman in a strict outfit told the men that Mr. Ning Bei was not short of money, so he would not fall for these entreaties. Bowing to her boss, she notified that she was the only one honored and allowed to be in charge of the $290 billion in working capital owned by Ning Bei. Sighing, the guy just shrugged as if those words meant nothing at all. But for his 2 new acquaintances, it spoke volumes. for the attitude toward billionaires was quite different. Despite this, Mr. Xu Qingyi said that his company, Senki Manufacturing, would very much like to partner with Bei. Our hero looked at the man indifferently and said that he could discuss this matter with Mu Shi, for she was the one who would be in charge of this activity in the future. The gentleman investors began to thank Ning Bei for the opportunity and had already started talking to his representative. After that, Bei was immediately approached by Yuxin, who appreciated his fine work and asked if he could help her now. At last, a warm smile appeared on the young man's face, and he promised to fulfill his friend's request. Yuxin jumped for joy. She grabbed her phone and said she would inform her family right away. However, as soon as she unlocked the screen, she immediately froze. It was obvious that the girl had seen something unpleasant. Her worried expression was hard to miss, so Ning Bei immediately asked what her situation was. Yuxin's facial expression turned into a puzzled mask as she said that everything was fine. After that, the girl dialed a number and reported to her father that she had solved their issue. Family head Tang said that his people would contact her later. She was very unhappy that after trying so hard, this case would still have to be handed over to others. Ning Bei carefully watched the girl and her reactions, so he came to certain conclusions. They were the ones who made him snatch the phone out of her hands and say on his own what the daughter couldn't tell her father. He informed Mr. Tan that Yuxin would be in charge of the research lab, and it was out of the question. The man on the line became indignant, asking what right he had to pry into their family's affairs. But our hero only said that he was a friend of Yuxin and Zhao Yun, so if anyone offended them, he would actually throw that person out of Dragon City. The girl couldn't believe that this scowling guy who also called himself their friend had stood up for her. Now she, and considered him more than just a good buddy. After thanking the guy, she wanted to say a few more words to him. But Zhao Yun, who was suspiciously cheerful, ran up to them. Noticing that his sister's eyes were a little wet from crying, he began to ask what was wrong. He even assumed that Ning Bei had offended Yuxing. But after asking about it, the guy himself realized that he had said something stupid. Punching her brother in the shoulder, the girl told him that he should mind his own business, especially since she wasn't a child for a long time. So it was time to stop patronizing her. Mu Shi, who came up to them, said that it was not her boss who had offended the girl, but the head of the Tang family. These words made Zhao Yun angry. He said that this old man was fed up with life since he was always asking for trouble. To distract her brother from such thoughts, the girl reminded him that he wanted to ask Ning Bei to be his teacher. After bowing, the boy informed Bei that he would like to learn martial arts from him. The latter replied that bowing was unnecessary since they were the same age. Our hero agreed to tutor his friend, so asked him to stop by as soon as he found some free time. Just like his sister, Zhao Yun jumped up in joy and thanked the guy for the favor. The day was drawing to a close and the tired sun was setting over the horizon. But the traffic near the university did not end. On the contrary, it only increased because cars with very important cargo arrived. This process was led by Xu Chengyi, who was so responsible that he could not entrust this job to anyone else. They were joined by Yusin, who asked not to be in too much of a hurry. Upon seeing the girl, the man smiled welcomingly and reported that for the time being, this would be a temporary research lab where they would organize people for future work. Their kind conversation was interrupted, saying they shouldn't be in such a big hurry. Turning around, they saw Ning Bei, who felt that there was no need to look for anything else, as there was already a pretty good lab here. But Mr. Chengyi objected, saying that a real research institute would be much more suitable for this purpose. The gentleman who approached the guys talking stated that there was no need for that. The man said he had trained talented assistants for a new research lab. Chengyi immediately recognized this man, for he was from the military and carried a serious rank. Director Songjin introduced this person with the name Pei Gang. The gentleman came from the research laboratory of the University of Aeronautical Engineering. He was well known to Ning Bei, the youngest professor since the founding of this university, who had created the world's first anti-gravity device. He extended his hand to Bei for a welcoming shake, but he only looked at it with indifference and did nothing. Ignoring this disrespect, Pei Gang said that he had brought the best scholars here, and they would of course become the leaders, the role of the nominal one he had assumed. In addition, the man promised to cover all research costs, and there were bonuses for any discoveries. Holding out a gold card to the lad, the gentleman informed him that it contained 10 million, which he could use as a bonus to develop an anti-gravity device. With an indifferent glance at Pei Gan, our hero said that the people could stay, but he asked to take the money back. The man was extremely surprised, so he asked why the guy made that decision, to which I received a reply that the amount was too small so it wouldn't be enough for anything. Embarrassed, the man said he could not take the money back, as it had been handed to Mr. Nin from above. The guy said that it was the circumstances that he entered the Balian Military Academy at the age of 7. So those very high-ranking people protected him while he was growing up. This news was extremely surprising to the man, who was clearly unaware of such details. According to Ning Bei, That's why he doesn't want the award, even though he appreciated the support. Turning around, he began to walk away, leaving the confused man to deal with the gold card problem alone. Wanting to smooth out the sharp edges, the university director said that such was the character of this young talent. After leaving the building, Peigang reported to Mr. Zhao that the matter was solved, but added that the guy didn't take any money. He also suggested that this uneasy man could very well be their associate. The bosses ordered the man to find out and take the necessary action immediately. But he demanded more information, because he couldn't come up with a plan of action without knowing exactly nothing about the guy. Except even upper management couldn't find any information on the guy. The system kept giving out that the files on him were super classified, so it was left to speculation as to who this mysterious guy really was. Meanwhile, in the laboratory the work was boiling, people were arranging boxes with equipment, and Ning Bei was trying to figure out how to place it all so that it would be convenient. Somehow Yuxin found out that someone had gotten a phone in the lab, so she angrily shouted that it was strictly forbidden. But when she realized that Ning Bei had gotten the mobile, she muttered with a disappointed sigh that he was the only person she couldn't order around. While the guy was answering an urgent phone call, Yuxin was handing out orders and making sure no one was distracted from their work. On the phone, Bei was informed that someone was gathering information about him. It was about a certain Zhao Jingji. This news was extremely unpleasant and made our hero look around. His gaze came across a man who was passing near him suspiciously slowly, as if wanting to eavesdrop on the conversation. So Bei had to say that there was no need to worry about spying. This person turned out to be Peigang, so the guy approached him and asked if the information he had managed to gather was confirmed. The question put the man in a stupor. He couldn't understand how his activities had become known so quickly. I had to awkwardly wiggle out of it, explaining that he meant no harm. His plan was just to get to know the person he was going to work with better. The guy didn't fall for it and said that if the Lord wanted to know something about him, he would have come up and asked him personally, instead of gathering information through some Zhao Jingji. This was the end of the conversation, except that looking at Ning Bei, Peigang suddenly realized that this guy's hands could reach anywhere. After a while, a new anti-gravity device was ready. After inspecting it, Ning Bei reported that everything was ready, which meant that testing could begin. Pressing the lever, everyone turned their gaze to the machine, which lit up with a faint pink glow. A few seconds later, the device flew into the air, breaking all the laws of gravity, then made scientists shout with delight. Now, Peigang was confident that this endeavor was doomed to success. So much so that he was willing to allocate 10 billion for a research fund for this development. But Ning Bei didn't need this, as the Tang Corporation would fully pay for all the research, as confirmed by Yuxing standing next to him. The man began to coax him, convincing him that he could extract more support for future research. Once again, the guy repeated that he didn't need money from the War Ministry, but he promised to share the technology developed in this lab right away. Mr. Peigang was so surprised at such generous behavior that he felt ashamed, to which the guy said that even crows know what gratitude is, so he would defend his country for the rest of his life and demand no reward. These words made the man only gesture to salute, for words were unnecessary in this situation. Ning Bei and Yuxing only left the university when it was already dark. The girl offered the young man to eat dinner. At this moment, Zhao Yun just ran up to them. He too was worried about his sister and friend being hungry after a hard day's work. So they all went to the Gold Cup restaurant together. Zhao Yun chose this place because he hadn't been here before, but he had heard that you could eat very good food there. They were immediately greeted by a doorman who asked if the guests had a VIP card. After thinking about it, Zhao Yun said that he hadn't even heard that this establishment might require a VIP card. The doorman smiled and informed them that in that case, they couldn't enter the establishment through the main entrance. This news made Zhao Yun very angry, who was outraged at this kind of treatment of customers. But the restaurant employee only shrugged his shoulders and said that such was the law. A couple approached the establishment, an overweight man and a ravishingly beautiful woman. The rich man didn't even greet the doorman, but immediately ordered him to park his car. And, strangely enough, the employee immediately rushed to fulfill the order like an obedient dog. So the guys only had to watch with annoyance how these VIPs were being served. Yuxin said she should look for another establishment and not ruin her nerves. But her brother wanted to deal with this discrimination against people. Noticing the guys, the rich man said with a chuckle that students like them had no place in such expensive and elite restaurants. When he turned his attention to Yuxin, he touched her chin and said that she was very pretty, so she could stay and keep him company for the evening. Zhao Yun intervened. He roughly shoved that vile pervert aside and ordered him to get the hell out of here as soon as possible. The rich man was simply furious that some poor student dared not just touch him, but attack him. Throwing a wad of money at the guy, he ordered him to eat at some local diner and stay out of his business. Oh, brother Yuxin was just waiting for the perfect moment to help him unleash his accumulated anger. Now it had come. But the doorman got between them in time and said that the guys had better leave, because this man was a VIP and should not be contacted. Now Ningbei was already angry as well. Cold hatred made him mutter that the man could take his money, after all. He would need it soon for medical treatment. The rich man didn't immediately understand what the kid meant, so he didn't hurry to take any action. Turning to Zhao Yun, Ningbei told him to remember, if anyone reaches out a hand to Yuqing, that hand should be cut off. Such a concept appealed to the girl's brother, so he prepared to fulfill what his mentor advised him. The startled VIP asked with noticeable fear in his voice what the young man was up to. But instead of answering, he received a strong punch on his arm from Zhao Yun, which caused the bone to crunch loudly and break. The rich man cried out from the pain, for it was unbearable, and he had never experienced such violence in his life. So now he fell to his knees and started screaming about being killed. His companion and the doorman just didn't know what to do to help him. Turning to his friends, Ningbei stated that they should leave this place, as they shouldn't dine at such a lousy restaurant that completely didn't value customers. The noise caught the attention of a lady who came out of the building and sternly asked what was going on here. It was a restaurant owner named A Qiao. Her companion and assistant Liu Xuan was walking beside her. The woman was very interested in who was causing trouble in her domain. Noticing the landlady, Bogich told that these men had broken his arm. He called for these rascals to be dealt with. Grinning, she turned her head to her companion and ordered him to cripple these troublemakers. But Zhao Yun began to object, talking about how this man was the first to molest his sister, and if words weren't enough, you could check the camera footage. Looking at his mistress, Liu Xuan suggested to actually go through the records and find out who was to blame. This proposal seemed absurd to the woman, and she grinned and said that with such skills the man could only be a security guard. She explained that the boss is their guest of honor who got beat up, so out of respect for him, they should take their word for it and not check the cameras. Even though the man was clearly not in agreement with her decision, she ordered him to immediately follow orders and deal with the students. The tense Zhao Yun turned to his mentor and asked what they should do. Ningbei indifferently replied that they were about to be attacked, so their actions were obvious. They must fight, for that is the only way they can defend their honor and prove that they are right. Unclenching his fists, his friend said he would do his best to teach these rascals who thought they could divide people into classes a lesson. The guard asked the young man to step aside, because he didn't want to beat up such a young guy. He said he would fight the second one, except that no one gave this gentleman the right to choose who he would fight. So brother Yuxin rushed in, asking the man to stop talking nonsense. At that moment, the guard realized that this boy was also a fighter, and judging by his aura, a pretty good one. These thoughts distracted him from the fight itself, so he only had time to block the powerful blow that came to his upper body. A strong jolt caused him to take a few steps back, giving his opponent room to maneuver. The other restaurant staff were simply outraged that this little kid dared to hit Zhuan. Noticing that his friends wanted to come to his aid, the man ordered them to stay back, for none of them could match this young man. These words caused a wave of anger inside Ah Qiao. She couldn't believe that a retired soldier could be scared of some child, but she didn't realize that the student in front of them wasn't an ordinary student at all, but a martial arts master. Upon hearing this information, the restaurant staff, along with the owner, opened their mouths in surprise, frowning at the guard. Ningbei said that soldiers should be ashamed to become like him, the mute servants of rich individuals. Such phrases really hurt the man, because earlier he really was a soldier who was respected. But now there was some truth in the words of this kid. Another man came out of the restaurant and in a scowling voice ordered everyone to stop in their seats and stop this buffoonery. It was Han Li from the Dragon City squad. Madam was sure that he would be on her side and solve the problem with these students. Except she didn't expect this man to kneel before Ningbei and greet him as the King of the North at all. Upon hearing this nickname, both the restaurant owner and her wealthy customer were simply shocked. But even so, the man said he couldn't forgive the damage he had suffered. At that time, an Eastern capital wolf named Qiaodong approached him. He inquired about what the VIP was going to do. Without receiving an answer to his question, the blonde-haired man headed towards Ningbei to greet him after a long separation. There, he also greeted the guy from the Dragon City squad, and the latter undoubtedly recognized the wolf of the Eastern capital. Turning his head to the startled rich man, the blonde said that this was his land, so he should clean it up himself as well. To supervise this whole process, the squad member on whom the mistress had placed such hopes had decided to do so, but now things turned out differently. Seeing the sword blade gleam, Miss Cow could only cried out in fright and backed away. But Ningbei asked his comrade not to scare these people too much, for they were already on the verge of tarnishing their reputation. Our hero believed that a broken arm was enough for him to realize that you have to watch your tongue, because the consequences can catch up very quickly. Afterward, the boys left the scene together, talking about family and what had happened recently. When the honored guests left, the restaurant hostess tried to take the opportunity to get out of the situation by saying that they didn't know who they were dealing with. Turning to the frightened woman, the squad members said that the Northern King would not antagonize them, so she could do as she saw fit. The woman decided to suspend business. Our hero and his friend have already moved a decent distance from the restaurant, as suddenly, on the horizon appeared a wounded soldier who could barely move his legs. The squad member immediately recognized him. It was Fu Bo, who had obviously been seriously injured. After gathering his strength, the victim said that a wanted criminal appeared. He accidentally bumped into him while trying to apprehend him and almost died. Helping the man to his feet, the warrior said to go inside and treat the wounds. When Fu Bo was given first aid and his wounds were bandaged, his friend asked who he had to fight. The conversation was interrupted by the lady, who said she had asked the guards to close the door and not let anyone in. After catching his breath, the victim said that these wounds were inflicted on him by a man named Geng Bao. Everyone knew that this was a warrior-level assassin. In the city, only Commander Xiao could stop him. As soon as a squad member started dialing a number on his phone, everyone froze, because someone started breaking in the door. All the worst guesses turned out to be correct. It was the same criminal who almost killed Fu Bo. Gengba kicked the door and walked in valiantly where no one had called him. But that didn't stop him. On the contrary, he felt like he was the true master of the situation. The warrior informed the criminal that he had already reported him to his commanding officer. So to the man was a great opportunity to get the hell out of here. With a smirk, the criminal said that he still had time to finish off a couple of squad members before he escaped. It was clear that this scoundrel would not just leave, so the decision was made to detain him until the command came. But it was extremely difficult because the opponent was quite strong, so his blows were incredibly powerful. Seeing that his comrade needed help, Fu Bo jumped to his feet, grabbed his sword and ordered Han to move away while he held off the enemy. But his friend thought that only cowards would do such a thing, because there was no such thing as a Dragon Squad fighter leaving his own and running away. While the guys were having this boring dialogue, their enemy wasted no time and didn't stop throwing punches. As the two warriors lay on the ground, the outlaw announced that today the two losers from Dragon City would die a horrible death. Behind the rascals something appeared. This person declared that no good citizens would die today. Of course, it was Ning Bei, who heard that something was going on in the restaurant building and decided to stop by to take a look at it with his own eyes. Fu Bo, who was lying on the floor, said that he didn't know the guy, but purely humanly advised him to run away from here, because the killer possessed the warrior level. Approaching the guy, the troublemaker asked if he thought he could escape from his hands. By staying here, he was signing his own death warrant. But our hero was not in the least frightened by these threats, because he was easily able to dodge the first blow, so that he caused genuine surprise to his opponent. Ning Bei reminded his enemy of the age-old rule that said that dropping a sword in battle meant certain death. Everyone who followed the course of this battle was extremely surprised, because previously they had not seen someone so skillfully fight such an opponent. Now not only the outlaw but also the members of the squad were wondering who was standing before them. Han knew that the commander of the North was standing before them, but he had no idea what kind of power the latter wielded. When his opponent demanded that his opponent identify himself, the guy simply said he was the king of the North. After these words, he made several maneuvers, so swift that his enemy had not the slightest chance of repelling them. Fu Bo was simply shocked that this high-level warrior had died before he could even react to the young man's lunges. Handing him the sword, our hero said that the weapon was quite good and advised the warrior not to lose it again. At that moment, Zhao Yun entered the room and waved his hand to Ning Bei in a friendly manner. He didn't even realize what was happening just a moment ago. But when he noticed the bloody body of the perpetrator lying on the floor, he almost vomited. Walking up to his sister, he took her hand and told her she shouldn't look into the room. Yuxin asked what happened. She never got an answer, for her brother threw up right on the floor. The guys immediately started asking Ning Bei questions. He explained without much enthusiasm that he was only helping to deal with the killer. Finally, after all their adventures, our heroes went to the Tang family home. There, Yuxin graciously set the table and invited the boys to sample her culinary masterpieces. The food looked and smelled simply amazing. There was everything you could wish for on the table. Except poor Zhao Yun still hadn't gotten over what he had seen. So when he looked at the food, he felt gagging. So in order not to offend his sister, he said he wasn't hungry. Looking at his mentor nonchalantly devouring his food, the lad asked how he could eat after such a thing, to which he received the reply that he should get used to it. Our hero remembered that his friend had mentioned that he was going to join the forces of Dragon City, then nodded affirmatively. Bei then apprised that they usually don't take in members of wealthy families, because they worry that they will use their position to benefit the family. According to the young man, the scene they saw today was the daily life of a warrior from the city defense group. After saying that, Zhao Yun decided to seriously reconsider his plans. The conversation was interrupted as soon as the mother entered the dining room, asking her daughter if there was a guest in their house that she knew nothing about. The girl smiled and introduced Ningbei, adding that this was their new friend. The surname Ning was familiar to the woman. She knew a person named Hao, the strongest in the third generation of the 7 great families. The mention of this man did not please our hero, so he thanked him for his hospitality and said it was time for him to leave. Yuxin was upset because her friend hadn't even eaten. She said that if he didn't like the food, she would ask the cook to make something else. A father entered the dining room, eager to see who his daughter, who so rarely brought home boyfriends, had brought home. The girl was simply shocked by this assumption and immediately began to say that daddy got it all wrong. Her brother entered the conversation and said that in any case, Ningbei was worthy of her sister, to which he received a fist in the face, for the guy was Qinhe's fiancé. Now, the head of the family finally realized that he was the eldest son of the Ning family, that Su had broken off the engagement. And it was this particular guy who threatened Mr. Tan on the phone today. But our hero said there were no threats, he was just bringing the information to the man's attention. The man recalled his phrase about kicking their family out of Dragon City. After listening to the man's indignation, Ningbei nonchalantly said that as long as Yuxing didn't have her achievements taken away, it wouldn't happen. But Mr. Tang was adamant. He believed that no one had the right to meddle in their family affairs. Zhao Yun supported his friend, saying that his father was overreacting and bullying Yuxing, but the girl hissed for her brother not to make things worse. This argument was interrupted by his mom, who addressed Ningbei saying that if he wanted to be Yuxin's boyfriend, he wouldn't be able to do it since he doesn't know who she is. After carefully examining the woman, our hero said that they didn't seem to realize who was sitting in front of them either. Mr. Tang said without a shadow of a doubt that they knew everything. After all, in front of them sits just the abandoned son of the Ning family. These words made Zhao Yun boil with anger. He tried his best to convey the information to his father that Ningbei had long returned to his family. Seeing the disbelief on the man's face, our hero said that if he didn't believe his own son, he could check things out for himself. The master looked at the handkerchief carefully and asked bewilderedly why he was given this, to which Ningbei replied that the Tang family had great connections that would help him solve this puzzle. Only the young man advised the gentleman to be very careful in his actions. The head of the house could not understand why this boy was threatening him again. Various thoughts began to arise in his mind as to what the shawl meant. The man began to scrutinize the black cloth that bore the image of a golden dragon. To confirm or deny his speculation, my father began calling his uncle to ask about the shawl, to which he received the reply that he must have had enough of life if he decided to contact a man who owned such things. He was told that he should never offend the owner of this handkerchief, and Uncle Yun himself was ready to kneel down when he met the owner of this item. With a tremor in his voice, the man asked who the owner might be. He was told that all 5 great warlords, his subordinates. Listening to this fascinating story, our hero could not hide a smile. He really liked this confused expression on the faces of his opponents. He was especially amused by the moment when the phone fell out of Mr. Tang's hands and his whole body began to shiver. Grinning, the boy gave his voice an innocent note and asked if the gentleman recognized who he was. The guy reiterated once more that he and Yuxin were just friends. She had invited him to visit to treat him to some delicious food, and nothing else was in question. After that, he gave his friend some kind of card. Examining the beautiful card, the girl asked, mesmerized, "What does it mean?" Smiling warmly, the young man said that no one would dare to bully the owner of this card. The first thing Mr. Tang asked was for his daughter to let him take a picture of this card, for he wanted to ask Uncle Yun, "What does it mean?" Awkwardly laughing, Zhao Yun said that there was no need to worry about Ningbei, because he was just a strong warrior. Hearing these words, the head of the house said that his son was a real fool if he really thought so. Glancing around, the boys tried to figure out who their friend really was. At last, my father was able to reach my uncle, who looked at the picture and said that they were lucky if they were protected by this gentleman, because from now on, no one from the 3 central provinces would dare to touch them. Now the whole family began to ask Uncle to tell more clearly who Ningbei really was. The man said that there were a total of 2 kinds of such cards. One was for killing and the other for defense. If someone had an order of protection, the entire northern garrison protects that person. No one in the world would dare intimidate him. The head of the house realized that it would be right to thank Ningbei for such a gift. So he decided to collect the generous gifts tomorrow and go to his family to apologize. Despite the late hour, there were still lights on in the Ning family's manor. As it turned out, they had Qinhe as a guest who wanted to see her ex-fiancé, except he was gone for a very long time. After waiting long enough, the girl realized it was time to go home, for it was too late. All this time, Ningbei was on the roof of the house. From there he watched the one who had been shouting so loudly about wanting to separate from him leave. The boy approached his mother so stealthily that she almost cried out in fear when she realized she was not alone in the street. Quickly coming to her senses, the woman ordered her son to immediately catch up with Chin Hee and talk to her. But the guy replied that he wasn't going to have a conversation with her, as they had already discussed everything they needed to. When he realized his mother was about to object, he said he was very tired and wanted to go to bed soon. Just as quietly and unnoticed as he was, Han approached him and told him that something had happened to the Xiao family. This news surprised our hero, for he had heard that Xiaodong had returned only recently. He decided to go to the mansion and find out for himself. But when he entered, he saw a huge number of mutilated bodies. Approaching Xiao Yunshan, the young man asked what happened here, for it looked like there was a massacre. The warrior, with tears in his eyes, told the story that he tried to stop Wolf Dune from doing something stupid, but he couldn't. Ningbei suggested talking in the house. And there you could find a girl shaking with fear, wrapped in a blanket and trying to pull herself together after what had happened. Her parents tried to calm her down, but they themselves were shocked at how furious their abusers were. When Ningbei saw Yizhen in this state, he was truly terrified for the first time in a long time. When she saw that her brother had come here, she rushed towards him with tears and looked exactly like little Guoguo when he first saw her after the bandit attack. Sitting down on his knee, the boy asked for Yizhen to tell him what had happened. Covering her face with her hands, the girl began to sob. Bei could barely make out what she was saying. All he heard was that her abusers were making a big mockery of her and her honor. This news hit our hero hard. Inside him woke up such a strong anger which he had never experienced before. He asked who the criminals were. Xiao Yunshan reported that they were able to find out the information that it was Tai Bao from the Western District. Rising to his feet, the lad asked to relay an order from the King of the North. It was to blockade the city for the entire night. He really wanted to make all those who had attacked Yizhen regret it, and his revenge would be very terrible. Meanwhile, Xiaodong had reached the manor and immediately spotted the northern commander. He asked that his brother not stop him, to which Ningbei replied that he didn't come here to stop anyone. After all, Yizhen was also a sister to him, and the one who attacked a close person of the King of the North should die the cruelest death. Meanwhile, the city continued to bustle with life. All the nightclubs were up and running and welcoming visitors who wanted to have fun. One of these visitors were Ningbei and Xiaodong, except that their concept of fun was a bit distorted, as they could only relax when their enemies were punished. The guards at the entrance immediately stopped them, for it was obvious from the guys that they had come to cause trouble. But when our hero revealed his strong, overwhelming aura, the guard immediately shut his mouth. Today, Bei was in no mood to talk, so he chose a more brutal method of negotiation. So he simply threw the annoying guard against the wall. This action really scared everyone who was standing in line at the entrance. They couldn't understand how the huge guard could fly away from the slight touch of the guy's hand. When the guys were about to enter the club, they were caught up by Xiao Yunshan, who wanted to join them in the massacre. The squad leader promised to see to it that the perpetrator was found as soon as possible, but our hero wanted to do it himself, so he opened the doors with his foot and entered the club, which caused bewilderment of the visitors. The only person he didn't expect to see there was his ex-fiancée, who was sitting alone at a table and sipping sadly from a glass. Raising her head, she immediately noticed Ningbei, grinning. The girl muttered that he still liked to flaunt his power. Walking closer to her table, the guy asked what she was doing here. Chin. He sharply replied that it was none of his business. Snatching the glass from her clinging hands, Bei informed her that as soon as he resolved his issue, he would definitely take her home. The infuriated girl jumped up from her seat and knocked the glass out of the guy's hands, saying that she hadn't asked him to worry about it, especially since they weren't related in any way, and he didn't need to think about her anymore. Closing his eyes in annoyance, the guy said in a calm tone that he had sent a message to her family, so they would be coming for the girl soon. For some reason, these words triggered an angry reaction in her. She started hitting him with her fists and asking him why he cared for her, yet he wouldn't even talk to her. Grabbing her arm, Bei rudely growled that it was dangerous for the girl to be here alone. The guy asked if she knew what happened to Xiaodong's sister, but instead of analyzing her own behavior, Chin He concluded that her ex-fiancé was still worried about her. At that moment, our hero didn't even know what to reply. Some excitement seemed petty to him compared to what he wanted to convey to Chin He, who absent-mindedly didn't see the danger. But their conversation was interrupted because Xiao Yunshan reported that he had found the person who served Tai Bao. Barely containing his anger, Xiaodong asked where the one who had harmed his sister was now. Seeing that the guy was barely holding back, Ningbei reminded him not to stain his sword with the blood of innocence. But his friend believed that he wasn't innocent. Soon they were approached by some unknown men with bats who ordered them to get out immediately. Inside, our hero has long been a rage that could not find an outlet, and now finally he decided to release it on these very people who decided to get in his way. It only took one blow, but it was enough to deaden the man who now lay motionless on the floor of the club. After closing his ex-fiancée's eyes, the guy informed her that the man had taken 4 lives and therefore deserved to die. Xiao Yunshan suddenly realized that the King of the North had memorized the personal files of all the criminals, or he could determine the number of people killed by aura. Fortunately, Qin hadn't seen the moment of the murder, so she was now questioning the guy about what he had done and why everyone was screaming, but he told her to turn away and not look in that direction. At that moment, a guy with a sword tattooed on his arm came out of the crowd and asked who was causing a disturbance in his bar. This tattoo was immediately recognized by the squad leader. Yes, and everyone else realized that this person was a member of the Black Sword Association. To our hero, it meant only one thing. People with such a tattoo were mortal enemies of the King of the North. The first thing Ning Bei did was to find a secluded place to leave his ex-fiancée, who despite all the stress was able to sleep. After that, one could return to the hall and begin the showdown with whoever was his mortal enemy. The guys in the crowd noticed that our guys knew the meaning of the tattoo, so they started inciting their leader and saying that if Bao Ye wished, no one would come out of here alive. The Black Sword Association was the sworn enemy of the Northern Army, powerful enough to still not be destroyed. But it was clear that the man in front of him was just one of the minions of the more important members of the association, who was boasting about his affiliation with the group. No matter how much Bao Ye provoked Qiao Dong, the latter kept his cool and said that the bar owner was not worthy of him wasting his time on him. He laughed when he heard these words and asked who was standing in front of him, if he could speak in such a manner. Instead of answering, the blonde drew his sword and said that the member of the association should feel its cold steel on his skin. Although the men in the crowd began to boo Qiao Dong disdainfully, their leader stepped back, for he realized that he was recognized as a member of the Black Sword Association, and the blade the blonde man held out in front of him was the sword of the King of the North. Looking around, Xiao Yunshan wondered if he should intervene in all of this. After all, the association might have some plans, but the guy felt that he shouldn't linger here, since they were only dealing with a petty 6 who can't know anything of value. Therefore, he wholeheartedly put this showdown in the hands of Qiao Dong, who also needed somewhere to vent his anger. Bao Ye felt a pressure that could suppress 1,000 people. He immediately realized that his opponent was at the God of War level. He was well aware that there was no way to escape, so there was only one way out. He would have to fight him. With a smirk, the blonde man said that this was exactly the kind of frightened look that people from the Black Sword Association should have. When the bar owner once again asked who was standing in front of him, Ning Bei couldn't stand it and said that he was dealing with Qiao Dong. This name was well known in the area, so Bao Ye immediately realized the extent of the trouble he was in, because he would have to fight with Wolf Dong. If someone like Qiao Dong obeyed the orders of the guy who sat behind the bar, the club owner could only guess who he was. Throwing himself into the attack, the blonde shouted that this creep didn't need to know who was in front of him because he wasn't worth the information. But a moment later, another warrior from the squad jumped up to the guys and stated that he needed to get Bao Ye immediately. It was expected that Qiao Dong would not like this. He was straight up disgusted by the fact that his hands were literally being tied. The first thing the newly arrived warrior did was greet the King of the North, but he didn't even turn his head. When Bao Ye heard this guy being addressed, he cried out in fear, because he did not expect such an important person to come to his bar. He was well aware of the person who had reached the war god level at the age of 9. The night he reached that rank, a king-level figure had crossed the border and started a war just for him. The guy didn't even have time to think about how he'd fallen into the hands of such a man before he'd already been robbed of his life. The blonde man froze in bewilderment, for he had done nothing to deaden his opponent. After examining the dead man, Xiao Yunshan declared that he had died of fright. The warriors in the squad were so stunned by what they heard that they themselves were beginning to fear the man they had to work with. The man who had arrived a few minutes ago bowed out and said that he had no reason to bother Mr. Ning Bei now. Except our hero didn't let him get away too quickly. Activating his aura, he made the man collapse to his knees. With a slanting glance at the warrior, Ning Bei offered him a drink of tea. The one was so frightened that he could barely say no because of the trembling. The blonde man then approached him and asked him to remember for the future that it was not his place to give out orders, for it was the King of the North who wanted to kill this man, but the opportunity had been taken away from him. Laughing awkwardly, the man said he just wanted to solve this little problem for the master. However, this answer did not satisfy Qiao Dong, who assumed that the warrior had come to this city to spy on his brother. Of course, he started to deny everything, but it was foolish to take his word for it. So the suspicious man was chased away. It was very suspicious that another person whose status was similar to the deputy chief of the Central China Group could appear in this city. Everyone knew the story that Ning Bei had come to Dragon City to visit his family, but he was actually here to recover. Outsiders didn't know how serious his injury was. It seems someone had a great disadvantage in getting him back north alive. These words alarmed the blonde man, who began to urge his brother to be more careful. But our hero believed that the safety of the northern border was of paramount importance. The conversation was interrupted because the front door of the club abruptly swung open and Chin-hee's brother was frozen there shouting. When he saw the girl sleeping on one of the couches, he started accusing the guy of bringing her to such a place. Indifferently turning his back to Chin-hee's relative, he replied that they had met here by chance. After that, our hero went to his home. Upon entering his father's study, Bei noticed that he was awake and asked why he still wasn't resting. Ning Kanlin greeted his son with a smile and said he wanted to talk to him, which is why he didn't go to bed. Holding out the folder to him, his father said that they needed to solve one problem, namely to deal with Ning Qianhai's lineage, because he wanted his son to join the board of directors of the Ning Group. Having glimpsed familiar names, our hero decided that he would deal with this issue tomorrow, because today he already had a busy day. Tiredly closing his eyes, the Lord asked his son not to be too radical about it. After all, these people had contributed to the development of the Ning Group. Now I didn't want to argue with the head of the family, so the young man decided to smile sweetly and agree with his dad. As soon as he turned away, his eyes still as tired, he hurriedly left the office and went to his room. 2 days had passed since the recent events. Our hero was sitting in the living room watching TV, thinking about how it was a great tool to alert the common people about any problems. He was distracted from his musings by his mother, who entered the room with a tray and said that if he hadn't had breakfast yet, he could try the red bean porridge. He didn't feel like eating, but so as not to offend his mom, he tried a couple spoonfuls and said it was really good. Smiling widely, the woman said that this culinary masterpiece was not hers. It was cooked by Chin-hee, who wanted to apologize for what happened. As soon as Ningbei heard this information, he felt sick in an instant. He became so violently nauseous that he barely restrained himself from soiling the couch. At this moment, Chin-hee entered the room and said that her ex-fiancé had gone too far. For he said that the porridge was delicious, but as soon as he found out that it was cooked by her, he immediately spit it out. Barely holding back tears, she mouthed that she wanted to make up, but instead, once again, she was met with disrespect. Therefore, she decided that she wouldn't take it anymore. Turning around, Chin-hee ran out of the room, screaming that she would never return to this house again. But only our hero now was not to drama, because his porridge was poisoned, and now he was on a hair's breadth from death. Chin-hee had never been so hurt before. She felt so stupid for choosing to make up with someone who had no interest in doing so. Running up to her brother, she didn't want to talk about anything. The girl longed to just shut herself in her room and mourn the final loss of her fiancé. When the ability to speak did return to her, she spoke out about how she would never go to Ningbei again. Her brother was just furious that the guy dared to bully her. The man was literally blazing with anger as he opened the front door of the mansion and called out to Ningbei. Noticing the lad on his knees, he paid no attention to it at first, for his anger blinded him. But when our hero turned his head and his face became visible, which turned blue due to severe intoxication, it became clear that something was wrong with him. Anger immediately evaporated and replaced by disgust. The guy recoiled and asked what had happened. Mrs. Ching revealed that her son felt sick right after he ate the porridge Chin-hee had made. The woman was confused and didn't understand what was going on herself. Even though everything inside the boy was clenching from the intense, painful spasms, he tried to calm his mother down and assure her that he was fine. Brother Chin-hee couldn't believe that it was the porridge, as his sister had been working on it all morning and would hardly add something poisonous. Clenching his teeth in pain, the guy said that the fact that he had been poisoned shouldn't spread, but whoever did it wouldn't dare attack unless he knew the details. Ningbei said that Chin-hee's brother needs to act like nothing happened, yelling, swearing, acting like he is fine. Hearing these words, the man was in a stupor. He began to argue that the girl would never poison someone she dreamed of having a relationship with. But our hero already knew she wasn't the culprit. He asked her brother to keep what happened to him from her. From the long conversation, the guy's voice trailed off and he coughed, a stinky purple liquid coming out of his stomach. When he was able to speak again, he ordered the man to remove the guilty expression from his face and not let Chin-hee or anyone else know about his condition. This whole situation and Ningbei dying caused tears to form on the girl's brother's face. He promised to do exactly as the guy asked. Lastly, Bei added that if anyone asked, he should reply that he threw away all the porridge and didn't eat a spoonful. Starting to play the role Ningbei had asked him to play, the man declared as loudly as possible that the Su and Ning families were mortal enemies from now on, for he would not forgive Chin-hee's humiliation. After saying that, Mr. Su turned around and defiantly walked out of the mansion, slamming the door loudly. After activating his aura, our hero determined that he had been poisoned by a king-level poison that was very difficult for an ordinary person to obtain. Obviously, someone had infiltrated the Su family, He realized that he needed to get the poison out of his body with his strength as soon as possible, because it was obvious that the Su family and Chin He were in danger. Meanwhile, Mr. Su's car was speeding down the road faster than usual. The man knew that danger was looming over them, and he wanted to get home as soon as possible. Unfortunately, Chin He couldn't ride in silence. She started to inquire about what Ningbei had said. At first, her brother didn't know what to say to her, but then he decided to make a point of telling the girl that her ex-fiancé had just thrown the porridge away without eating a spoonful, even though she had seen otherwise. The girl sensed that something was wrong, so she began to probe even harder, asking about what had happened. Her curiosity had greatly angered her brother. She had never seen him so anxious as when he had said that Ningbei's life might depend on her words. She realized then that she had no choice but to accept the fact that she would only be told the truth when she saw fit. At some point, Mr. Su looked out the window and noticed that the people who were sitting in the car across the street were staring at him. Then, he and Chin He clearly heard someone's footsteps on the roof of the car. There was no doubt that someone was following them. The worst part of this situation was that the stalker could hear everything that the brother was saying to Chin He. When he left the Ning family's house, Bei lastly told him to memorize the number. Now was exactly the critical moment in which to make the call the guy was talking about. After a short buzz, an unfamiliar voice answered. Mr. Su quickly muttered that Ningbei had ordered to call this number in case of extreme danger. Before the mysterious voice could answer anything, the one who had preferred to stay on the roof climbed into the car. The violent jolt caused the driver to twist the steering wheel to avoid driving into the oncoming lane. The car almost crashed into the sidewalk. Fortunately, the man managed to brake at the very last moment. When the danger had passed, Su abruptly turned around to the stranger and asked who he was. The man did not reply, but only marveled at the fact that Ningbei had framed the situation in such a way that he was almost able to trick him. An exasperated Su asked the stranger if he had a grudge against Bei. Why not go to him? But the criminal said it wasn't that simple. The surprised and frightened Chin, he listened carefully to the information that even though Bei was poisoned, it was only necessary to attack within the first minute. Listening to this conversation, the girl did not understand anything, and could not even imagine what had happened to her fiancé. Turning his head, the villain immediately realized that the bride of the King of the North was sitting in front of him. After saying these words, goosebumps ran down his brother's back. He hurriedly said that the girl had already broken the engagement. But the intruder was already beginning to be annoyed by this idle talk, so he hit the man in a painful spot that contributed to the victim losing consciousness. When he was neutralized, the villain turned to Chin He and offered her a deal. If she agrees to go with him willingly, her brother will stay alive. There was nothing to do, so Chin He agreed to this condition. Meanwhile, the Ning family's house began to rush to the Ning family's house. Qiao Dong was the first to arrive. A concerned Ning Canlin ran out into the courtyard and asked why there was a stranger on the property. There was no time to explain anything, so the blonde said only that he was looking for Bei's older brother. Concentrating on his own feelings, the guy felt his friend's aura, except it was very weak. Ignoring the shouts of the head of the house, Qiao Dong ran to where Ning Bei's energy was. Opening the front doors, the guy froze, because he didn't expect to see such a picture in front of him. Ning Bei was surrounded by a shroud of light. It was a healing power that helped him hold on to life. The father was also unaware that something had happened to his son, so his shock was no different from what Qiao Dong was feeling. Madame Qing began to talk about how he had only eaten one spoonful of the porridge that Chin He had prepared. After that, he immediately felt sick. The slime that the sick person spat out was left on the floor, so Qiao Dong analyzed it and realized that they were dealing with the most dangerous insect venom. Clenching his teeth in anger, the blonde realized that they hadn't kept the King of the North safe, and it made him wish death on anyone who looked askew at his lord.